In a world overrun by the undead, only gear and resources truly matter to those still breathing. Unlike most, Xiaoyang already has everything in place. He had seen the chaos coming and made his preparations early. He fortified his base, gathered enough rations, and brought together people he could trust to survive in comfort when everything collapsed. But even with all that, his supplies would have run dry, if not for a system that started giving him missions. Completing those challenges nets him loot crates filled with powerful items, essential materials, and upgrades that boost his strength. As usual though, it all began with a backstab. Inside a deserted storage building, Xiaoyang is barely hanging on literally. Beneath him, a swarm of zombies wait eagerly for their meal. Qi Jing, his trash ex, calls out to him with a twisted grin and proudly announces that she already eliminated all of his allies. Poor Xiaoyang thinks back on how it all spiraled, realizing his own choices are what led to their deaths. He blames himself, shouting at her with a vow that she won't die easily. But obviously, a threat like that means jack from someone dangling over a zombie pit, especially to this parasite who clings to Xu Xiang and whines about being emotionally wounded. Xu Xiang, that walking stomach in charge, decides it's time for a little torture show. And to make it worse, he actually thanks Xiaoyang for leaving behind all his stockpiles, which should keep their crew fed for quite a while. So yeah, Xiaoyang gets dropped right into the zombie den. The ghouls immediately swarm him, ripping into his body while he's powerless to resist, just writhing in agony. Though his screams echo through the ruins, he makes one last vow through the pain. If fate or Truck Kun gives him another shot, he's going to devote that life to wiping out Qi Jing and Xu Xiang. Seems like the gods of regression were listening, because the next moment, he wakes up in his younger body. Right there in front of him is Qi Jing, flaunting her usual curves and trying to act innocent again. Being the gold digger she is, she's yelling at Xiaoyang for not putting her name on his property. But he tunes her out completely, scanning the room and quickly figuring out what just happened. He's been sent back right before the apocalypse began tearing the world apart. He feels the weight of everything she did to him, the sting of betrayal by Qi Jing, this counterfeit of a girlfriend who majored in manipulation. Her betrayal didn't just shatter his friendships, it destroyed his family's legacy and emptied out his fortune. Honestly, who even needs zombies when you've got someone like her? She's an extinction-level event all by herself. Let's break down how it happened. Like every classic zombie scenario, a virus spread rapidly and turned people into flesh-hungry monsters. With Xiaoyang's trusted network and solid crew, he carved out a secure zone to protect people. Everything was going smoothly until the drama queen showed up asking for safety. She faked being alone and vulnerable. Feeling sorry for her, our guy let her stay, and that was the worst decision he ever made. His kindness backfired hard. She quickly exploited the setup and brought her own squad into the zone. The fact that she's now in front of him, yelling about money like nothing happened, tells you everything you need to know about how vile she is. Xiaoyang's staring daggers at her, wanting to choke the life out of her, but he knows he can't move too fast just yet. Even so, he gives her a solid push outside because she just won't shut up. The door slams right in Qi Jing's face, and the look of confusion she wears is just too satisfying. The guy she's been bossing around like a servant all this time suddenly kicks her out like it's nothing, back inside his place. Xiaoyang quickly checks the date and realizes he's only got a month left to prepare before the world goes to hell. Out of nowhere, a system interface appears. It's the apocalypse system coming online. The mission: secure a property and stock up with a full year's worth of essentials. Feels like this system got its inspiration straight from Genghis Khan. Oh, and the prize, 10 points that can be used to redeem exclusive items in the system's store. Judging by the grin on his face, you can tell Xiaoyang is hyped. He's genuinely thrilled to unlock this overpowered system that could help him survive doomsday. Inside the shop tab, there are only 3 available choices: a power-up elixir, a survival starter pack, and something called a protagonist supply crate, which definitely catches the eye. Each option requires a different amount of points. So far, things are off to a better start than he ever imagined. Xiaoyang remembers how miserable he was around this time in his previous life, scraping together every coin he had just to fund Qi Jing's dowry. He'd skip meals and practically starve just to save cash. Imagine sacrificing all that for someone who'd later betray you like it was nothing. Anyway, he grabs his phone, deciding he should at least treat himself to a decent meal, since it's not like the zombies will ever give him the chance later. That night, we see him relishing every second of his fancy dinner, turning his delivery meal into a gourmet event. Dude is so excited to try that premium pork, it's like the moment it hits his tongue, he unlocks divine powers and turns into a beast. Just kidding, but it does taste heavenly. So now he's scarfing it down like a Dickensian orphan who hasn't eaten in a week. Then out of nowhere, his phone starts buzzing. Xiaoyang checks and sees a call from Qi Jing's ever-loyal friend Wen Shuya, as expected from a toxic sidekick. She instantly starts barking at him over the phone for dumping her bestie. She ticks him off so much that he just ends the call on her. Instead, he refocuses on his mission to claim a piece of property. His ultimate plan is to construct a sturdy base. Something easy to defend but also close to forests and a water source. The next day he's already moving. He steps into a real estate agency and meets with Xiao Ning, a property consultant who offers to help with his needs. She greets him warmly and asks whether he's looking to buy or lease. But before he can answer, their chat is interrupted by Xiao Ning's boss, who shows up and immediately orders her to stop assisting front desk clients. The guy barging in is none other than Manager Ju, the firm's arrogant sales director. He brushes her aside and demands she handle grunt work at the back, even though she was doing just fine helping a customer. Manager Ju is your typical sleazy corporate snob who looks down on Xiaoying and mocks him for being broke. Xiaoying immediately fires back, not letting the insult slide. But instead of backing off, the manager doubles down, saying people like Xiaoying can't even afford a bathroom and aren't worth wasting time on. Xiaoying absolutely hates this man's guts and silently vows to crush him right there, without missing a beat. He whips out a shiny American Express card and makes it loud and clear he's here to purchase land. The moment that lands, everyone in the room is left stunned, gasping in disbelief. It finally hits them they've just stumbled upon a jackpot client. The agent Xiao Ning politely asks him to follow her so she can give him a proper walkthrough with detailed info. That whole exchange irritates Manager Ju, who assumes this punk is just showing off without actually having the funds to back it up. In the next scene, Xiao Ning presents him with a list of available properties, but Xiaoying isn't here to window shop. Instead, he wants to describe his specific needs and get something tailor-made. First, he's looking for land near a mountainous area with a clean, flowing water source. Good transport routes are a must, and ideally the plot should already have a factory or a spacious house. Taking all that into account, Xiao Ning begins considering suitable listings. But of course, Manager Ju jumps in with a sarcastic suggestion, clearly trying to make Xiaoying look foolish. Sure, there is a site in the East District, but it's half-finished, filled with incomplete factories and generally messy. That's why Xiao Ning never intended to bring it up. Still, the arrogant manager just wants to throw shade. He assumes Xiaoying is throwing out wild demands because he never meant to make a purchase in the first place. Xiaoying calmly follows up by asking if that East District property really matches his conditions. Xiao Ning admits it technically does, but warns him again that the place is full of half-built structures and the previous construction foreman abandoned the site. Digging into the project records, Xiaoying quickly figures out that this place might actually work in his favor. It's got solid defenses, the fencing is already set up, and it would be tough for outsiders to breach. The presence of unfinished factories is actually a plus for him. Without hesitation, he decides to take it and finalize the deal. Xiao Ning gives a respectful nod, but deep down, she's stunned that a client is about to buy a property surrounded by half-built ruins. Xiaoying doesn't care at all, he just wants the paperwork done so he can metaphorically stuff it down the manager's throat. The next scene is comedy gold. Manager Ju is losing his mind over the invoice, screaming out loud, unable to believe someone just slapped down a huge deposit. It doesn't add up to him. Why spend millions on some broken-down, half-completed mess? But here's the best part. Xiaoying suddenly appears behind him just to remind him about that deal they talked about earlier. Since he officially bought the property, the manager now has no choice but to eat a giant serving of humiliation. As Xiaoying walks off coolly, even the other clients nearby are making fun of Manager Ju, filming his reaction and cheering for him to follow through. They can't wait to see the guy humiliated. Back to Xiaoying, he remembers the two main objectives of the Apocalypse system. He just completed one by using his dowry savings to secure land. Now it's time to gather a massive stash of supplies to last a whole year. As he walks off, Xu Xiang actually catches a glimpse of him and starts wondering why Xiaoying is even in the area. Xu Xiang then glances over to the commotion and sees the ridiculous spectacle in full swing. People have Manager Ju on his knees, and they're force-feeding him something foul on a live stream. Damn. Now that's what you call punishment. That disgusting scene quickly shifts to something a little spicier, showing Qi Jing in all her curvy confidence. She suddenly gets a call from Wen Shuya, who gives her a quick update about Xiaoying showing up at the real estate office. And yeah, that instantly gets her attention. Her first thought, how the hell did he even afford to buy land? Xu Xiang breaks down the deposit details and assumes the guy probably spent the marriage funds on it. Qi Jing is absolutely fuming after hearing that the money she believes was meant for her is now being burned on his personal projects. But instead of feeding her anger, Xu Xiang calmly tells her to just go ask him herself and find out what's really going on. She keeps flapping her mouth. And I'll spare you the torture by skipping it, nobody wants to sit through that. Back to Xiaoying, who's deep in thought, working out his next move. His biggest issue now is cash, since he'll need a serious amount to gather supplies and get his stronghold up and running. But that moment of calm gets destroyed by loud knocking at the door. Bro probably thinks someone found his internet history and called the feds, but no, it's just the nightmare duo. Two of the loudest, most unbearable women alive, and they're livid over how Xiaoying spent Qi Jing's money. Completely thrown off by the situation, he's wondering what the hell they're talking about. Qi Jing doesn't even let him respond and goes straight for the throat, accusing him of using her funds to purchase land. Not just that, she demands ownership of the very property he just secured. As expected, Xiaoyang thinks this is beyond absurd. He first tosses a wad of cash on her shoulder. Then he tells her straight up that there's no way he'd ever let a woman like her touch even a cent of his money. And to really twist the knife, he reveals that he knows about her sneaking around with Xu Xiang, which absolutely stuns her. When Shuya, the backstabbing friend of the year, steps in to play the innocent card, saying this is just a lover's spat, but Xiaoyang's not buying it and he calls her out without hesitation, labeling her a liar who's been stringing him along while clinging to her sugar daddy. He shuts the door in their faces and tells them to get lost. Instead of feeling bad for her betrayal, Qi Jing is only upset that he managed to uncover her little affair. That right there tells you everything. This woman's priorities are twisted beyond repair. Even when Shuya is stunned, completely unaware of when the secret fling started, she's also disgusted it had to be with that greasy old pig Xu Xiang. But now, even she realizes they've lost their grip on Xiaoyang and will need to regroup for another attempt later. I mentioned earlier that she's the worst bestie ever, and you're about to see why. Truth is, she's a snake who's been waiting for this exact opening. She's thrilled the two are at odds, thinking it's her chance to slither in and claim Xiaoyang for herself. Anyway, enough about those two disasters. Let's turn back to Xiaoyang, who's inspecting the half-finished factory site. The construction foreman from the renovation company walks him through the plan, explaining that a lot needs to be fixed and reinforced, especially in terms of defense. Judging by the level of security he's demanding, even the foreman jokes, "What are you prepping for, a fight with God?" But Xiaoyang doesn't negotiate, he just tells them to complete the work within 1 month. The foreman flat out says that's impossible. Even with their crew, the timeline is too tight. And yet right after that he mentions that they could do it, but only if they get paid extra. A full-speed build will require no less than 20 million. Xiaoyang doesn't even flinch. He smiles and asks just to confirm, is that really all they're asking? The foreman adds that they'll also need a down payment of 5 million to begin the job. Xiaoyang agrees right away and says he'll transfer the money within the week, as long as they waste no time and get started immediately. The foreman is left speechless, probably wondering if this guy's some long-lost heir to a billionaire. And Xiaoyang wraps it up by warning him, if they skip out on their end or screw him over in any way, he'll put the land deed in their name, just so they're stuck with the fallout. The sweet deal gets finalized. But right then their talk is cut short by Wen Shuya, who suddenly shows up acting all friendly and clings to his arm, asking what he's doing. Right away, Xiaoyang is already irritated. He remembers too well that in his last life, this snake was part of the scheme that helped Qi Jing steal his family's property. He's definitely planning to settle the score in due time, but for now, he just wants to know how she ended up here. She dodges the question and cheerfully asks if this is the land he's been working on. She wonders if he plans to build a fancy villa on it. Dropping the nice guy act, Xiaoyang pulls away and bluntly tells her it's none of her business. That sends her into a quiet rage. She's fuming that he's being so cold to her, even though she's convinced she's in love, ignoring the drama. Xiaoyang gets back to business and instructs the workers to expand the entrance for the front gate. Feeling snubbed, she scowls at her missed shot. She knows Qi Jing's relationship is falling apart, but she still thinks she can swoop in and snatch this land from under him. Honestly, it's starting to feel like Xiaoyang is cursed to attract the worst kind of women. Meanwhile, back at his apartment, Xiaoyang tries to sort out his funds by using the property as collateral, but even that isn't enough to cover the initial costs. His biggest concern right now is finding a ton of cash. He even entertains the idea of selling the place multiple times to different people. After all, when the apocalypse hits, it's not like anyone's going to take him to court. What are they going to do, file a lawsuit in a zombie tribunal? His moment of peace is wrecked by loud pounding on the door, as some cranky old man yells for him to open up. Apparently, it's his neighbor, Old Man Lee, who seems to have deep pockets. The guy is loaded enough to own the entire first 2 floors and now wants Xiaoyang's place too. The only reason Xiaoyang didn't sell it before was because he saw it as his future wedding home. But after everything that's happened, and this old man shouting non-stop, he's seriously reconsidering. Old Man Lee scolds him for going out partying, which Xiaoyang completely denies as nonsense. Instead of arguing any longer, Xiaoyang just gives up and offers to sell him the unit, officially ready to move on. That instantly lifts the old man's mood. He's genuinely shocked to hear those words. Xiaoyang explains there's a catch, since his new base won't be done for at least 6 months. He'll need a 5 million advance payment so he can settle his current home loan. It's actually a clever tactic, especially if he pulls this off with a few more buyers. Xiaoyang is ready to slam the door if the man refuses, but right at the last second, Old Man Lee caves and agrees. Still, he wants a contract written up so neither side has any problems. Naturally, something like a basic contract doesn't faze Xiaoyang, especially knowing this old guy won't even live long enough to enjoy the place. Either way, things are looking solid. He's about to get 5 million from Old Man Lee. And with the 3 million he's already chipped in, he now has a working budget of 8 million total. Since he's completed his first mission, he's also now eligible to collect the reward. The very next scene cuts to our guy absolutely dominating the supermarket aisles. Bro looks like the Max Verstappen of grocery carts. Even the folks nearby are beginning to wonder if this guy's lost his mind or something. Their reactions say it all, especially when you see Zioyang wheeling around 7 carts stuffed to the brim. People assume he's been duped by some fake rumor about an incoming apocalypse, tricking him into panic buying. But Zioyang tunes them out completely and proceeds to finish the second objective. He thinks over how best to spend his system points. Sure, he could level up his stats, but grabbing the protagonist's utility box gives way more bang for his buck. Without delay, he makes the call and burns all his points. The prize, a glowing mystery crate that spits out a top-tier spatial ring, allowing him to stash all his gear in a frozen dimension. All in all, our guy is pumped to score such a rare artifact. Plus, now he doesn't have to stress about his groceries spoiling while they're stored away. And if you thought stocking up for 1 year was the final task, think again. The system ups the ante and now demands a 10-year stockpile for the next reward. Meanwhile, the commotion catches the store manager's eye and security steps in to check if some nutjob is acting up. That's when Yang Tao spots Zioyang of all people and is instantly shocked. For a little context, Yang Tao used to be a loudmouth bully back in school. He and his crew picked on weaker students, and Zioyang, who refused to bow down, became one of their favorite targets. Their school days were rocky, and now here he is again, yelling at Zioyang to stop causing chaos and return all the goods. But Zioyang meets him with a calm grin and points out that Yang Tao hasn't changed one bit, still the same smug jerk he used to be. He tells him to relax, the purchase will go through. Unfortunately, the security chief doesn't buy it. He thinks Zioyang is pulling some prank and demands immediate payment or else. A full hour passes before 4 clerks finally manage to tally everything. The grand total, close to 57,000 yuan. Right on cue, Yang Tao pressures him to swipe the card and pay up already. Acting like he just unlocked a cheat code, Zioyang slides the card with full confidence. The moment it clears, the manager is stunned, and Yang Tao looks like his soul just left his body. Defeated, he gathers his goons and starts to walk off. But Zioyang stops him with one final request. He tells Yang Tao that after being treated so rudely, he's owed a formal apology, or he'll just return everything right now. That hits a nerve. Yang Tao is fuming, thinking this is some kind of sick joke and that Zioyang is just trying to stir the pot. But hey, it's 2025, everyone's got a camera. And this kind of drama goes viral fast. The crowd sides with Zioyang, cornering the rude manager and urging him to apologize now or go TikTok famous for being a jerk. Things are clearly going Zioyang's way. He gently reminds Yang Tao that saying sorry won't kill him. It might even convince him to buy 10 times more. Yang Tao scoffs at the idea until our boy calmly swipes his card again and reveals a balance of 7 million just chilling in his account. The stunned look on Yang Tao's face is absolutely priceless, with no comeback left. Zioyang pressures the guy into doing the right thing. And yeah, the bully finally breaks and bows his head in apology. To top it off, Zioyang even pats his head like a child and reminds him not to go around being rude for no reason. As he walks off, Yang Tao finally musters the courage to ask what all these supplies are even for. Using the best response in the book, Zioyang brushes him off by saying it's none of his damn concern and that he's planning something big. The humbled manager admits that he'll need to find a wholesaler for even larger purchases like that. This grabs Zioyang's attention as he turns to ask if Yang Tao has any connections with wholesalers. The guy actually confirms this, reminding him of their former leader, Jiang Sheng, who now works in the wholesale business. In fact, Yang Tao even makes a call to contact him for a major client. The surprising part for Zioyang is realizing that this rude jerk is still working under the same boss, even after school. It makes him wonder how much money they have earned together through the business. A short while later, Yang Tao brings him to his boss's place. A car quickly pulls up and stops just inches from the two of them. Exiting the vehicle is the arrogant bastard who acts like he owns the world. Jiang Sheng, he wants to meet with this supposed major client immediately. Yang Tao even jogs the man's memory by reminding him that Zioyang used to be their classmate. But of course, since a lot of time has passed, this roughneck doesn't recall anything. Examining Zioyang's face carefully, he suddenly recognizes his identity. It's the kid who always stood up to their group and defied their orders. He tries to insult Zioyang's style by calling it fake. It also doesn't help when Zioyang pretends not to know the brand's name. From his reaction, Jiang Sheng thinks he has wasted his time coming here. The kid isn't a big client at all. He physically kicks Yang Tao's ass and says he can tell how wealthy a person is just by looking at them. To mock the boss, Zioyang sarcastically comments on his aura being so weak that he can't intimidate a dumb boss. Provoked, Jiang Sheng grabs him by his shirt, but Zioyang stands his ground, repeating his words. Hilariously, Jiang Sheng is only angry about the insult, illiterate. He doesn't care that Xiaoyang taunted him for acting superior to others. Anyway, Yang Tao steps in to break up the fight, but the poor guy ends up getting kicked again for interrupting. The furious boss thinks Xiaoyang made a huge mistake, assuming he'll return to One Piece if he doesn't buy a huge amount of goods from him. And again, yes, the One Piece is real. Xiaoyang holds firm and decides to show him his small bank balance. The boss can't believe what he's seeing. The kid is ready to make a massive purchase of 1 million on the spot. To push even further, Xiaoyang says he'll actually buy 5 million worth of goods. The initial 1 million is just a deposit to get things moving. Interested, Jiang Sheng asks what kind of goods he wants. The kid tells him he wants everything edible or drinkable included as part of the order. Despite having a huge client before him, this greedy boss thinks he can easily scam Xiaoyang by giving him a batch of food close to expiration. It's like a lottery ticket for him. Inside the warehouse, Jiang Sheng shows him the goods and offers a 10% discount if he buys everything there. However, Xiaoyang is strictly focused on the quality of the goods first, so he decides to inspect a bag of peanut sand and quickly points out how most of the items are nearing their expiry date. Exposing the boss's greed, Chen Chong truly didn't expect Xiaoyang to be so knowledgeable in this business. He offers a 50% discount if Xiaoyang takes everything from the pile. However, Xiaoyang quickly declines, saying that if he's spending 5 million on goods, they must be of the highest quality. Still, he does have plans to use the expired goods as well. The boss doesn't understand what he's planning, but now that a discount offer is on the table, Xiaoyang uses it to strengthen his negotiation. He wants all the expired goods, but on the condition that he will pay in a month's time. Jiang Sheng doesn't mind, but he worries about what will happen when the goods expire and he backs out of the deal. To that, Xiaoyang even offers to mortgage his own house to cover the cost. At this point, the boss becomes quite curious about the kind of business Xiaoyang is running to be able to acquire expired goods without any trouble. Our boy doesn't fear his choices. In fact, he leaves a little hint for the boss. In just a few days, even expired food will be considered a luxury to have. This sends chills down Jiang Sheng's spine, but refusing to explain further in his usual style, Xiaoyang seals the deal and promises to send the delivery address later. As he picks up his phone, our boy realizes an interested buyer has contacted him about his house. He wraps up matters with the warehouse and lets them handle everything. As he leaves, Yang Tao wonders if they are the ones who got scammed. Even the boss can't figure out how a normal-looking kid is spending millions without any hesitation. In the next scene, the interested buyer actually deposits 400,000 for Xiaoyang's house. He also agrees to the contract condition that Xiaoyang will vacate the house within 3 months. I think you can understand what he's doing here, right? He doesn't care about the consequences because the world will descend into chaos anyway. Xiaoyang is surprised by the old man's desperation, who didn't even inspect the house and still sealed the deal. He decides to ask the old man's motivation, who explains it's for his granddaughter's sake, who must transfer schools and needs a new place. They saw a nice-looking home and decided to make an offer. Feeling unsettled, Xiaoyang wonders if he should raise the price now that he's heard of their desperation. This makes the poor guy shrink back in fear, keeping the original price. Xiaoyang assures him that he won't do that. They quickly sign the contract and the deal is done. The old man is grateful for the boy's kindness and promises not to bother him anymore. However, this situation is heartbreaking for our protagonist, who thinks it's a shame that innocent people like the old man and his granddaughter won't survive the terrible apocalypse. Deciding to show one last kindness, he stops the old man and asks for their current address. In the next scene, Xiaoyang is back at the construction site, checking on his plot. Of course, the first batch of funds is clear, but the captain hopes for the second batch as well. Now our boy assures him they will get the money soon and asks for an update on the construction phase. Judging by the look of things, 80% has already been completed. They've installed sturdy doors and structures to ensure proper defense. The warehouse is also looking good and has been cleaned up as well. Having received confirmation from him, Xiaoyang signals Jiang Sheng to deliver all the goods immediately. Shortly after, the supplies arrive and are carefully arranged in each pile. Just for the labor alone, the generous Xiaoyang is paying them 2,000 each for the job. While these guys celebrate, our boy helps them sort each pile efficiently, making sure perishable items are stored without trouble. By evening, the sorting process is complete. Xiaoyang looks down at his masterpiece. At long last, he has officially stocked 10 years' worth of supplies, gaining 20 points on top of it. Once again, he checks the system store and notices that another box has appeared in the list of options. The one good thing about the system is that he'll gain access to these superpowers before the zombie apocalypse even arrives. Spending 10 points, he buys another mystery box, which reveals an ability called the Mind's Eye. Its simple purpose is to sense hostility and ill intentions from others, which proves useful when deciding who to trust in the apocalypse. Replacing his previous task is the new task, Armed to the Teeth. It requires him to collect a massive amount of weapons and stock up John Wick style, which is exactly what Zioing had planned. That very night, we shift to a darker side of society, the black market. Zioing moves through the crowd, overhearing people talk about antique items. All the shady characters are gathered here, including Fatso, who is currently arguing with a shop owner over an absurd price for a bracelet. Watching him buy fake bracelets in this market only confirms to our boy that Fatso is a scammer, and Qi Jing doesn't even realize she's wearing counterfeit jewelry. While browsing, Zioing finally finds something that catches his interest. He approaches a shop owner selling melee weapons. Zioing is keen on purchasing quality gear. The owner suggests a knife sharpener or just a baton if he wants something stiff but not sharp. Zioing counters that he needs something tougher than that. The only thing harder than a baton is Dwayne Johnson's bald head. Anyway, the shop owner thinks the customer is joking and not serious about buying. To his complete surprise, the same kid transfers $200,000 into his account, assuring him he is serious about buying. Intrigued, the seller invites Zioing to watch his stall while they talk privately. In the next scene, they're in the storage room. The man shows him several homemade guns priced at 2,000 yuan, but they're not strong enough to kill anyone. Naturally, Zioing refuses because he'll be fighting real zombies, not chickens in the apocalypse. The seller then shows him a replica revolver costing about 50 yuan. Once again, the kid is serious and unimpressed, especially after paying 200,000 up front. The mention of an advance payment shocks the shop owner because Zioing isn't here just for 200 grand. No, that's only 10% of the total amount he's willing to spend on weapons. In fact, he plans to invest 2 million on them for the job. His outrageous offer makes the seller wonder what kind of life this guy is living. I'm telling you, this man is about to become the John Wick of the zombie apocalypse. Without wasting time, he tells the seller to proceed. Deciding to reveal the good stuff, the man covers his house properly to ensure no one is watching. He also assures Zioing that he's come to the right place, as he can introduce him to a supplier who can help complete the deal with high-quality weapons. The real meeting will take place in a few days. As he walks out of the storage, Zioing runs into Fatso again, who finally realizes why Zioing has been living comfortably lately. He assumes the kid sold a good portion of his belongings on the black market to get rich. Little does he know, Zioing is uninterested in his taunts and simply wants to use this idiot to test his new ability. Activating the mind's eye, he first scans the intentions of the seller, who seem favorable to him, but for the Fatso standing before him, not so much. Zioing snaps back by telling Xu Xiang that just like those second-hand bracelets, he also took in Qi Jing, who's worth all the fake crap he bought. Someone's definitely going to need some icing for that burn. One simple comment is enough to set Xu Xiang's nerves on edge. The seller wonders if they know each other. To that, our boy stresses that it's best to think of him as an enemy since they're already good friends. The seller offers his support, promising to beat the hell out of the old man for messing with them. Zioing leaves satisfied while Xu Xiang is close to tears. Seeing a group of ruthless men approach him with a baton, they shove him to the ground and literally kick him until he's covered in bruises. This incident only fuels his hatred for Zioing, and he vows to get revenge one day. 2 days finally pass. Our boy receives a truck full of his fancy weapons, completing the mission reward as well as earning a bonus reward for it. The bonus is a physical enhancement potion that boosts his stats. It even has a double multiplier, making it more effective than what he can buy at the store. Without wasting any time, he loads the injection and injects it into his body. Seconds later, he realizes he surpassed the average male's strength, which stands at 5 points. Now he's at 7 points, allowing a 40% increase in physical power. Next, he checks the store, which only has a survival kit and a physical enhancement potion available. Deciding to maximize his strength stat, he chooses the physical enhancement potion and injects it again. By the end, our boy is stacked with 8 physical points, significantly boosting his power by 60% compared to the average male. To test his ability, he looks around and grabs a hardened rod. Zioing kicks it so hard that it bends and leaves a crack in the nearest wall. With his current strength, zombies are going to feel the full force of these mighty hands. Next, he decides to store all his weapons inside the spatial ring, which sucks all the crates into the static dimension. Assessing his situation, Zioing understands the apocalypse will break out in 2 days. He has to tie up any loose ends now, which reminds him of the old man he met. Even though people will betray his trust during the apocalypse, deep down, Zioing is a good person who wants to help others when he can. That's why he plans to send their family a bunch of supplies to survive. But after that, it's up to them to manage on their own. In the next scene, Zioing arrives at the old man's place. It's difficult to find the exact location because of how rundown the area looks. As he climbs the stairs, our boy realizes the old man must be in a really bad spot in life. As he knocks on the door, he decides to pull out the supplies he brought first so he doesn't have to deal with it later. His magic ring materializes the rationing supplies just outside, and then he knocks on the door. The old man comes out worriedly, apologizing for the rent situation. But he's shocked to see Zioyang at his doorstep. Not only that, the kid has brought tons of stuff with him. Our boy tells him he doesn't have time to explain, so it's best they move the supplies inside quickly. In the next scene, the crates are all inside. And the old man is impressed by Zioyang's stamina. Our boy inspects the surroundings and thinks the old man's apartment is well secured. He warns the old man not to say a word of what he's about to tell him. Zioyang advises them to use the supplies wisely because the world is about to change. Suddenly, he glances at a photograph of the old man's beautiful granddaughter. To his complete shock, it's actually Shan Shan, one of his friends from when the apocalypse first broke out. To confirm her identity, he checks with her grandfather, who is surprised Zioyang knows her name even though they never mentioned it before. Concerned, Zioyang immediately asks for her location. It turns out she's in her hometown studying and in the middle of transferring schools. In the original timeline, he found her still carrying regrets over her grandfather's death, who risked his life to save her and died in the process. As his friend, Zioyang refuses to let that same outcome happen again. First, he tells her grandfather that he won't be able to move into his house. This causes the poor man to panic with fear, but Zioyang calms him down by explaining the end of the world. A zombie apocalypse will erupt tomorrow and no place will be safe from then on. That's why he wants the old man to pick up his granddaughter from school, and then they'll decide where to go. This is too much for the old man to process all at once. Unfortunately, Zioyang has no choice but to help him understand. He compares the situation to a famine. Starvation will become normal in their once peaceful world. Zioyang practically demonstrates his point by sucking in all their furniture as well as the crates back into his ring. Shan Shan's grandfather is left speechless until Zioyang explains that he has special powers and the ability to see the future. That's why he wants them to be safe and must head to Shan Shan's school immediately. In the next scene, they're rushing to the school inside a car. Upon arrival, Zioyang quickly asks for her dormitory as they both look for her. Apparently, Shan Shan is outside getting slapped by a jealous woman because some random guy has a crush on her. Even though Shan Shan tries to clarify she has nothing to do with the guy, she still gets hit for making excuses. These evil jerks torment Shan Shan for acting indifferent in front of their crush. Luckily, Shan Shan's grandpa comes rushing to her aid. The helpless old man demands the woman release her granddaughter. But to deal with them, a group of high school lunatics arrive, threatening the old man for interfering, for his granddaughter's sake. The old man rushes in blindly and confronts the three men. One ruthless bastard is about to smash his head with a baseball bat. Before the blow lands, Zioyang grabs his arm and stops it. He mocks the guy for pretending to be a gangster when they're really just a bunch of high school kids. The idiots try to make fun of him, but Zioyang expertly responds by kicking the first guy so hard his hair turns blonde. One kick drops him to the ground, making the other two question if they're facing a trained professional. They foolishly try to surround him, thinking it will help. Our boy gladly accepts the challenge. The guy with the club tries to hit him from behind but completely misses as Zioyang ducks with ease. Now that his strength stat is amplified, his reflexes are on a whole other level, allowing him to react faster, to return the favor. He grabs the guy's collar and slams him into the ground, knocking him out instantly. As for the leader of the group, he tries to sneak up with a knife stab. Unfortunately for him, Zioyang maneuvers his fist skillfully and delivers a brutal kick just below his thigh. Just so you know, getting kicked there by a real pro is bound to put you down with the worst kind of pain imaginable. Well, in these idiots' case, Zioyang has successfully helped them take a nap. Next, he approaches the girl who toyed with Shan Shan. A slap to the face reminds her that he's showing his support for feminism and standing up for equal rights. The girl is literally seeing stars for a moment. Then the guy grabs the other girl and shows her how it feels when someone pulls your hair. He puts a blade right to her neck, bringing tears of fear to her eyes. Then boom, a sharp swing cuts through as the woman screams in pain. At first glance, it looks like he just got his first body count kill. Even Shan Shan's reaction makes it seem like he really killed someone. But no, he just gave her a little haircut. You know how barbers treat you when you say just cut a little off the top, then they end up running a full fade on you. Yeah, that's what's happening to her. She screams at him, promising never to forgive him for what he did. But let's be real. Our boy doesn't give a damn and even acts like he did her a favor by taking off the extra weight. Hilariously, he tells her she'll understand what he means in a few days. For now, he tells Shan Shan they're leaving. She doesn't know where but follows him anyway. In the next scene, they're driving to their new location. Grandpa explains the situation to her, talking about how there's going to be a famine apocalypse. Shan Shan is conflicted and thinks her grandpa fooled himself by falling for one of those scam calls again. He assures her it wasn't a scam call. Watching their interaction amuses our boy, who's glad she's happy in this life. Zioyang signals that he's the one who told her grandpa everything. The Shan Shan of this world has no idea who he is, so he properly introduces himself again. She thanks her new brother for helping with the bullies. But Xiaoyang isn't too worried about them since they won't survive a few days. Still, Shan Shan is lost and doesn't understand what's about to happen to the world. Xiaoyang clarifies he described the situation as a famine because it's the easiest way for her grandpa to understand. This gives the poor girl some hope, making her believe everything will be fine. Then he quickly shatters her hope by replacing the word famine with apocalypse, utterly destroying her expectations. Xiaoyang says things should already be going south, according to the news. Shan Shan quickly checks her phone and sees many videos about some kind of rabies infection causing people to go mad and attack others. Her fear grows as she watches more videos. Horrified by the infected people's condition, Xiaoyang realizes he was right again. The apocalypse is about to begin. Shan Shan learns that tomorrow will be the official breakout of the toxic smog, covering several provinces. This dangerous smog will permanently alter living beings. A large portion of the population will immediately turn into zombies. From then on, they'll feast on those unaffected by the smog. Once killed, the uninfected become undead, increasing the numbers. He's happy Shan Shan at least understands what zombies are supposed to be like. It's just that the situation is too absurd for her to grasp fully. But our boy thinks she'll find it reasonable soon, especially when the entire world descends into chaos within a week. But for now, they're stuck with another problem: traffic. Xiaoyang is surprised to see even the emergency lane blocked. The roads are jammed. Shan Shan is scared for her life, fearing the zombies will catch them while stuck here. Xiaoyang assures her it's not that bad yet since the apocalypse hasn't fully broken out. Nonetheless, even though the major apocalypse is expected to happen later, the likelihood of a minor outbreak occurring here remains quite high. Talking about danger. A driver chooses to force his way into the lanes by pushing through. He ends up crashing straight into Xiaoyang's car, who is furious and retaliates independently. He attempts to prevent the intruder from entering the emergency lane. The guy halts right beside his car and begins yelling insults at Xiaoyang. Realizing they are facing an arrogant, wealthy individual driving a Mercedes, Shan Shan's grandfather advises letting it slide, but Xiaoyang isn't one to back down. He doesn't mind giving this guy an early exit if he keeps bothering them out of the vehicle. In the following scene, the traffic finally clears and the matter is settled after an hour. Shan Shan warns Xiaoyang to be cautious of the same driver from before, who is now speeding rapidly to cut through. Even Xiaoyang is stunned by this guy's obstinance. The man quickly overtakes them to taunt. Even Shan Shan's grandfather considers this reckless and suggests they shouldn't stoop to his level. However, Xiaoyang has stopped caring at all about these types of people, knowing the apocalypse will shield him from any legal consequences anyway. What he ends up doing is ramming into the man's car, causing it to spin out and crash on the side. The trust fund baby exits his vehicle and immediately calls the traffic police to have Xiaoyang arrested. He is not the kind to forgive someone after being wronged. In the next scene, our heroes return to the facility where Xiaoyang has spent so much time. Even Shan Shan's grandfather is surprised that they will now be living there. He assures them that starting tomorrow, their lives will change forever, so they should get some rest now. The following day, Xiaoyang is sunbathing and notices Shan Shan arriving as well. She's finally had a restful night after a long time due to her classes. Xiaoyang is eager to show her around the fortress he built. Walking her through, he explains how the walls are made from concrete. There's a remotely controlled gate so sturdy that no one can break through it. He sets one strict rule: without his approval, no one is allowed inside the fortress. This worries Shan Shan about the survivors who might eventually find their way here, fearing Xiaoyang will just let them perish. To address her worries, he leads them to another spot, highlighting how human nature truly changes when it comes to any apocalypse. It's because of humanity's darker side that they must treat others cautiously. Being kind could lead to their own deaths if they aren't careful. To accommodate survivors, he has actually installed a buffer zone, a temporary shelter to help them while he's away. Once more, Xiaoyang firmly reminds them not to allow anyone to enter the main fortress. With that set, he takes them to the food storage area, describing how they will manage food from now on. Moving inside the warehouse, he turns to them for one last check, activating his insight ability. He inspects their intentions. With both showing clear trustworthiness, he's glad to find well-meaning people. Next, Xiaoyang conjures some weapons, pointing out they will be crucial for their survival. Grandpa receives a shotgun, while Shan Shan has acquired a powerful crossbow. Their only directive is to ensure these weapons don't fall into other hands. Okay, it's been some time since we reviewed the system tasks. Xiaoyang's next assignment is to locate his former partner, Jiang Kai, who is also one of his friends from the original timeline. The main concern is pinpointing Jiang Kai's whereabouts. But no worries, because the system reveals the exact city where his friend currently lives. He leaves Shan Shan and her grandfather in charge, reminding them to strictly follow the rules he established. Then he sets off to recruit another member for their main fortress team to reinforce and rebuild it before the apocalypse begins. The scene shifts to a studio called the KTV. A group of friends are hanging out here, enjoying some karaoke. They decide to take a bathroom break to ease some tension. There, Jiang-kai ends up bumping into a pretty girl and apologizes for causing unnecessary trouble. Naturally, her boyfriend couldn't care less about their apologies and shoves him away. Jiang-kai is sent flying back. Knocked down, his friend rushes over to check on him. Li Wen, the nerd-eyed guy, bravely stands up and confronts the meathead who punched his friend, making the thug even angrier. He quickly grabs Jiang-kai's friend, toying with him. Jiang-kai pleads for mercy, hoping the man will spare his friend from harm. Meanwhile, a waiter watches the entire scene unfold. He's already suffering from a cold, and now there's a fight breaking out. Quickly, he tries to intervene to stop the brawl. The annoyed wannabe rich guy acts like a big shot and grabs the waiter as well, who signals to the two young men to scatter quickly. Jiang-kai and his friend make a run for it while they still can. They retreat back to their karaoke room, having escaped the troublesome situation. Even the others are surprised at how fast they ran. Captain Glasses explains the situation. How they bumped into a thug and ended up getting their butts kicked for it. It's only thanks to the waiter that they were saved. Hearing this, two of the other guys get riled up. They want to go back and beat the thug for daring to mess with their crew. Jiang-kai helps calm them down, saying there's no point in looking for trouble anymore. Well, things only get worse from here on out. Remember the waiter, poor guy has been beaten to a bloody pulp. The rich thug brought 3 more friends and they're all here to attack Jiang-kai's group. The thug orders his men to seize them immediately. Unable to fight back or cause trouble, Jiang-kai and Li Wen quickly duck low. There's only one guy confident enough to resist from their group, and when he tries to speak up, the thug leader smashes a bottle on his head. Chen Chang. And I'm not even joking, that's actually his name, is left with a bleeding head wound. The scene cuts to Zioying, who stops his car just outside the bar, knowing that Jiang-kai being here makes perfect sense. Chen Chang is down for the count, and if that's his blood on the floor, someone needs to get him to the ER fast. The damn thug leader seeks approval from his girl, who thinks they should punish the one who bumped into her, which turns their attention to Jiang-kai, who's about to get his ass kicked. Surprisingly, Chen Chang jumps up from the ground and tries to strike the thug leader down. If not for another guy stopping him, he would have smashed his face in. The thug leader is shocked to see such boldness from a college kid and smashes another bottle on his head. I'm starting to feel sorry for him. Chen Chang kisses the ground again and his friends cry out in concern. Seeing him fall like that infuriates Jiang-kai to jump into action. Unfortunately, they're quickly captured. The last member of their group is trembling like a puppy on the sidelines. The waiter is struggling to stay conscious while the rest of the thugs keep beating down Jiang-kai's crew. Unfortunately, his punch is avoided, so he doesn't manage to take down any of them. Something strange happens to the waiter. This guy goes berserk with bloodshot eyes and lunges into the fight like a wild beast. He bites down on one of the men, chewing on his shoulder and terrifying everyone else. The thugs have no clue what's happening or why this waiter suddenly lost his mind. They quickly try to restrain him, but his monstrous strength overwhelms them. In fact, the zombified waiter turns around to bite another guy's arm. He's become a full-blown beast as he overpowers the thug and slams him to the ground, to everyone's surprise. This same ferocious animalistic monster is easily overpowered by a random guy. This random guy is none other than Zioying, of course, who shoves his face close to the screen and orders everyone else to stop messing around. The thugs are stunned. Just moments ago, they were getting wrecked by the waiter, yet one kid has him pinned against the wall effortlessly. The thug leader questions Zioying's identity, who says nothing and checks Jiang-kai's condition, asking if he has any bite marks. Fortunately, he does not. But Jiang-kai doesn't understand why he's being asked such a strange question. Zioying tells him to quickly follow since they have somewhere to go, but the thug leader isn't finished tormenting them and blocks their path. However, one of his own henchmen starts feeling a weird headache after being bitten. Instantly, Zioying realizes what's about to unfold. The infection is worsening and this guy is about to turn. Zioying asks if his shoulder was bitten by the same rabid waiter. The lackey confirms this, but doesn't see the connection. Zioying understands that this guy was actually already infected, and now that he's been bitten close to his head, it's game over. Zioying drags the zombified waiter, throws him into the restroom, and slams the door shut. The wild beast keeps banging on the door. But luckily, zombies at this stage lack the intelligence to open doors. Refocusing on the thugs, Zioying readies himself for a serious fight, asking Jiang-kai which one he should take out first. The funniest part is that Jiang-kai doesn't even know him and can't grasp what's happening. Infuriated by the kid's boldness, the thug leader lunges to knock him down, but Zioying grabs his face and slams his head into the ground with a simple move. The infected lackey rushes to attack as well, but he's also taken down with one hit to the face, falling to the floor. With the thug completely knocked out, his friend asks what's going on since a single punch shouldn't have been so effective. His body twists in pain as Zioing invites them to settle this with fists, believing they'll only learn not to mess with him after catching these hands. Turning to Jiang Kai, Zioing gives strict orders to head to the private room with his friends and wait outside. The guy doesn't resist and helps his friend leave the room. As for the thug leader and his men, they stop fighting too, knowing they don't stand a chance. However, Zioing isn't the type to just let anyone walk away after they crossed him like that. He accuses the thug of being a drunken fool who nearly killed his brother due to carelessness. To teach this guy a lesson, he shoves the thug down and slams the door shut, locking them inside. The thug leader pounds on the door but can't do anything since it's locked from the outside. The outcome is grim for this guy's fate. His own lackey has fully transformed into a zombie and lunges forward, searching for its next victim. In the end, Zioing hears their screams as they're being eaten alive. A staff worker comes by to see what's happening. Zioing instructs him to properly secure the door and notify the authorities, reporting a dangerous case involving a rabid infection. The staffer is stunned at first, until Zioing barks at him to just do his job. He quickly locks it tight using a key. Next, Zioing helps Jiang Kai's friends make their way outside. The employees are alarmed by the noise coming from the room, wondering what in the world is going on. They were informed about a patient inside with a rabid flu, but no one really has the full picture. Upon hearing that it's some flu, they rush over to check the live feed. But as they reach the surveillance room, their faces turn to shock and disgust. Every one of them has become a flesh-eating monster, tearing apart each other's limbs, prompting the staff to immediately call the police. Thankfully, Zioing and the others manage to get out of the dangerous karaoke bar. He helps them into the car and they speed off. Even though Jiang Kai is thankful to the stranger for saving them, he still doesn't know who this guy actually is. Zioing calmly introduces himself, saying he was hired to protect them by a client whose name has to remain secret. One of them brings up the rabid flu, saying no such illness exists online. Zioing points back to what just happened in that room and questions if that was just a rumor too. Li Wen nervously asks whether there's a cure for the flu. Sadly, as far as Zioing knows, there is. In fact, it's only going to escalate from here, and the entire world will soon spiral into chaos. Speaking of which, zombies have already begun attacking people. The outbreak is spreading at an alarming rate, but for now, it's still considered a localized event. Most infected are still within the incubation stage, soon to awaken. Things will eventually get far worse, which is why Jiang Kai and his friends must carefully obey his instructions. They all nod in agreement, right as Zioing receives a mission completion alert. Thanks to this, he unlocks access to new gear in the shop. Some of the items are useful supplies that could come in handy later. But the one that really stands out is the post-apocalyptic cultivator box, which stubbornly refuses to disappear. Seeing that all 3 reward boxes look promising, he decides to claim them once he returns to the fortress. Beyond that, he still needs to figure out how to earn their trust. You see, in the original timeline, Jiang Kai's crew was wiped out by zombies after someone inside the group betrayed them. The person who backstabbed everyone is one of the 3 friends. It's turning into a round of Among Us to figure out who it is. It's been a while, so let's check in on Qi Jing. She seems absolutely terrified of visiting the supermarket due to the news and insists on having everything delivered straight to her door. To her utter shock, someone starts banging violently on her door. Qi Jing doesn't know how to react and quickly ends her call with Xu Xiang. She peeks out and breathes a sigh of relief. It's just her best friend scaring her half to death with a surprise visit. When Shuya updates her about the neighbor on the first floor who was taken away in an ambulance by the police. Apparently, he was infected too, which explains why things are starting to spiral out of control in their apartment building. She then asks Qi Jing about the supplies that Xu Xiang had promised to send. Unfortunately, the supplies still haven't arrived. Taking a different route, she chooses to manipulate Xu Xiang's ego by feeding him lies. Their plan is to tell the fatty that Zioing has a massive stockpile of goods. Qi Jing doesn't understand how her best friend even knows this. Turns out she's been keeping tabs on him using one of her people and discovered that he regularly places large supply orders. Qi Jing can't believe her ex was aware of the apocalypse ahead of time. When Shuya persuades her to spill everything to Xu Xiang so they can ransack Zioing's supplies and get rich. Yep, these fake snakes have no shame. Back at his magnificent fortress, Jiang Kai is blown away by what he sees. He never thought someone would actually build a full-on fortress for themselves. With a proud smile, Zioing explains that this kind of reaction is normal. Shan Shan and her grandfather are glad to see him return. He reassures them that everything's under control. In fact, he shares the spotlight with his new companions, Jiang Kai and the others. These folks will be part of their group from now on. Naturally, he introduces Shan Shan and her grandpa to the newcomers. They're happy to welcome them as long as Zioing is the one who vouched for them. Zioing then instructs the old man to give the new guys a proper tour and go over all the rules. One of the group members brings up a request to be given weapons for protection. Now, this guy is already on Xiaoyang's radar as a potential traitor since he suspects that Jiang Kai's group has a mole. Li Wen tells Yiming to calm the heck down, warning that asking for weapons too soon could backfire. Xiaoyang promises to arm them in a few days, but for now they need to take care of the wounded Chen Chong and help him recover. Inside the base, they all clean up and put on fresh clothes. Yiming is irritated by his friend's interference, thinking they would have had weapons by now if not for him. To him, it feels like they're prisoners in the facility instead of being protected. But Li Wen tries to talk sense into him, saying Xiaoyang literally saved their lives. So it's not fair to say that. They're curious about his background since all they know is that some mysterious client hired him for protection. Yiming is being a hardass for no reason and is pissed off that they're not even treating Chen Chong properly out of fear he might be infected. Hilariously, the guy thinks Xiaoyang's team is secretly harvesting organs for profit, and to avoid becoming victims, he says they should strike first. Li Wen warns that if they're wrong, it would mean betraying the man who saved them, but Yiming couldn't care less. He's drunk on the idea of power and wants to take over the fortress. He even thinks it'd be smart to get rid of the young girl and the old geezer while Xiaoyang is gone. The way he's talking, Jiang Kai and his buddy are just staring at him, completely stunned. The guy's unhinged. And they're only now realizing it. Yiming quickly brushes it off like he was just joking, easing some of the tension between them. Li Wen reminds him once more that if Xiaoyang truly wanted their organs, he wouldn't be letting them walk around so freely. But none of them realize that Yiming is a slimy bastard and plans to act behind everyone's back. He's dead set on taking over the base, convinced that being ruthless will pay off. In the next scene, Xiaoyang holds a meeting with Shan Shan and her grandfather, who inform him that Chen Chong is resting in the infirmary for now. As per his orders, they've made sure everything is locked up securely. Glad, Xiaoyang thanks them and suggests they get some rest as they'll have plenty of problems coming their way from tomorrow. One more thing. He advises them to be wary of Jiang Kai's other two friends because he suspects that one of them might betray them. That night, Xiaoyang heads to the rationing warehouse. Here, he checks out his system store again. First up, he taps open the cultivator box. Then he spends money on the sugar, oil, and protein supply box. Finally, he takes control of the armed deterrence box. With all three purchased at once, he gains rewards in the form of 50 corn seeds and tons of other valuable food items. He even gets 1,500 rounds of ammunition so he doesn't run into problems later. The rewards are pretty damn impressive for what they're worth. With this huge pile, they'll give him a supreme advantage in the apocalypse to come. The following day, trouble finds Xiaoyang again. Remember the rich bastard who swore revenge against Xiaoyang? Well, he's shown up with his friends to break the place down. He orders all of his lackeys to smash the gate open. But it's honestly pathetic when you realize that despite their best efforts, they can't even dent the thick gate. The boss is infuriated, unable to believe the integrity of the door. Whipping out their best gear, they decide to use Molotovs, sending them flying inside. It doesn't take long for the flames to erupt chaos. With the Molotovs dropping inside, Shan Shan and the rest of the group quickly attempt to put out the fire. With this situation, she gains even more conviction in Xiaoyang's words, who predicted that things will get more chaotic from here on out. But you know Xiaoyang, he doesn't like backing down at all. This man brought a rifle to deal with anyone who stood in his way. He goes up to the watchtower and checks out the identity of their assailants. Old Man Li is the first one to realize that it's the same rich bastard from the highway. His men also spot them from the watchtower. The snob roars at them, demanding that Xiaoyang come outside or else he'll burn the place down. Responding with a cool head, Xiaoyang warns them that they have about 5 minutes to back off. His repulsive response ignites even more anger from the men who threaten to use 2 crates full of Molotovs to burn the fortress. Suddenly, the system tasks Xiaoyang with another mission. Grandpa doesn't know what to do and recommends a warning shot. By the way, the mission objective is to eliminate the threat that is attacking the fortress. Xiaoyang thinks that a warning shot isn't going to cut it, especially when they're dealing with scumbags who are directly committing a crime. Knowing that these guys have no morals or consideration for people like them, Xiaoyang takes aim and believes that he can't allow them to continue to threaten the lives of others. Saying so, Xiaoyang fires off a shot, eviscerating a guy's arm, causing him to fall down and shout in pain. Xiaoyang actually wanted to aim for the guy's head, but because he hasn't used a gun in a while, it'll take some time to adjust his aim. Anyway, the fact that he took off the guy's arm is enough to eliminate the threat. They run off like scared little punks even though they're the ones who came for a fight. Xiaoyang doesn't want to prolong the situation and knows that these guys will just show up at his door tomorrow. So he shoots every last one of them mercilessly. The few who escape to the vehicle quickly assist their boss to get inside, who screams at his driver to step on the pedal. I'm telling you guys, this man is actually John Wick, and it's refreshing to see a main character that isn't stupid, despite their best effort to escape using the car. Xiaoyang shoots them down using his automatic rifle. With the way he's handling the gun with extreme skill, it makes Old Man Lee question the kid's background. Well, it's a miserable ending for these bad guys. Their car is wrecked and they're all dead. They brought themselves to the Grim Reaper and the Grim Reaper delivered. Next up, Xiaoyang tells Shan Shan's grandpa to use the rest of their group to clean up the mess. But then a sudden thought takes over his mind. Since they're already in the early stages of the apocalypse, now would be a good time to let these guys rot out here and become training dummies when they eventually become zombies. So, he stops the cleaning operation and prefers the dead men to be right where they are. What Xiaoyang doesn't know is that Shuang is actually on his way too, along with Qi Jing and her bestie. Qi Jing is actually pretty annoyed by her friend's flirtatious behavior in front of the fat ass. At last, they finally arrived in front of the site. Qi Jing intends to bring her bestie along. But suddenly she gets cold feet and doesn't want to come. She has to come along to act as a guide, or else they'll never know which factory is Xiaoyang's place. Refusing to come, Qi Jing drags her outside by force, ignoring her whining. The two girls walk up to the place while Shuang signals his team to get ready for the main event. When he gets the signal, he'll start the car and then his team will join in on the operation. Back to the girls, the evil bestie over here wants to know why she was dragged along. Qi Jing reminds her that both of them share the same nature, so she is wary of her intentions. The evil bestie gives a sloppy excuse, stating that she intentionally behaves this way so they can manipulate Xiaoyang easily. To their shock, they see a bunch of dead bodies on the ground. It doesn't take a genius to figure out that there's been a shootout. Both of them stand terrified. They think it's a good idea to go back, but then quickly realize that this party must have also been trying to steal Xiaoyang's supplies. This makes them wonder if Xiaoyang also died in the resulting shootout. They care little about what happened to him as long as his supplies are still around. At first, they ponder going back and using Xu Xiang to move forward. However, Qi Jing recommends they move forward and sneak their way inside. The girls walk up to the main gate, but it's so thick and tightly shut that there's no chance they'll get inside. This makes them wonder if Xiaoyang ended up surviving after all. From up the tower, Shan Shan addresses them and questions their intentions. They both pretend to be associated with Xiaoyang, acting like they're his friends. Shan Shan quickly informs Xiaoyang about the situation, causing Qi Jing to get even more frustrated because she thinks he's found himself a new chick. Her friend reminds her that they're not supposed to show delicate feelings here, especially when they're dealing with armed individuals. Qi Jing is actually fully confident in Shuang's ability to handle them because he's brought guns of his own. The only problem is getting past the door because everything else will be a piece of cake after that. Xiaoyang comes along to take a look for himself and wonders what Qi Jing and Wen Shuya are doing here. Right away, he uses his eye of insight to inspect their intentions. On the outside, these two are acting all cute, but he senses distrust and malevolent intentions from them. They act like they're worried about him, but Xiaoyang laughs at their sorry attempt for a joke. Not just that, he blatantly shares his knowledge of the fat-ass Shuang also hiding nearby along with his lackey. Both of these hoes have a surprised Pikachu expression, not knowing how the hell he was able to know. He doesn't even show them mercy and starts firing off a warning shot. Qi Jing and Wen Shuya can't believe that he's actually going to such lengths. The evil bestie maintains a cool head and reminds Qi Jing to stay calm because they're dealing with someone with a gun. But of course, Xiaoyang doesn't want to kill the two of them right away. That would be too easy for the likes of them. Suddenly, one of the bodies of the dead men turns into a full-fledged zombie. But not just that, the rest of them are turning too. The same rabid flu they saw on the news is miraculously bringing the dead back to life. This is the moment of ultimate satisfaction for Xiaoyang, who wants these two bitches to suffer the ultimate demise at the hands of bloodthirsty zombies. Qi Jing and Wen Shuya make a run for it. Trying their best to escape the prowling murder machines, they pace their way back to Shuang, who has no idea what's going on. That's until he sees a zombie horde rushing after them. Both of these women are reduced to the brink of tears, begging the fatso to become their savior. Xu Xiang didn't expect to run into the infected patients in the middle of nowhere. It causes a change of plans as he alerts his men to pull back. He doesn't even save the two women and completely disregards them. Qi Jing is literally too angry to die. The scheming bitch throws her purse at her own best friend, causing Wen Shuya to trip on her feet and fall to the ground. Defenseless with nowhere to go, the zombies make quick work of her, tearing apart her flesh and enjoying their meal. While she's being torn apart, when Wen Shuya curses Qi Jing, swearing that she'll face an ugly death when her time comes. Making her own escape, the crazy bitch runs away, thinking she did the right thing. Witnessing such a horrific scene, Xiaoyang achieves system points for eliminating another threat while Shan Shan watches in horror. He also gains access to another mission to kill the lingering zombies around the base. Shan Shan can't believe that the infection is so potent that it causes the dead to return back to life. With this, the apocalypse has officially begun. Xiaoyang tells her that mutations will run rampant and the people who are infected will turn into zombies even after death. Sensing that he needs to update his team, he calls for an immediate meeting. In the next scene, they're all sat discussing what to do next. Xiaoying instructs everyone to stay vigilant and lock everything down completely, making sure that their bodies adapt to the source of the infection. If their bodies can healthily adapt, they'll be at less risk of a sudden mutation. Even then, Jiang Kai is worried sick for his injured friend. Chen Chong is still resting in the infirmary, and unfortunately for him, his infection is slowly taking over him. The city's up in flames. Chaos is ensuing outside and ravaging the world. We turn to Jiang Sheng, who orders his family to stay home while he's going to go to the warehouse and collect all the supplies he has. He also strictly tells them not to open the door for anyone. But things aren't looking so great for them as someone's already banging on the door. Gesturing his family to stay quiet, he approaches the door with a golf club in his hand, ready to knock the shit out of any infected person. He realizes it's just Yang Tao outside and lets his guard down. That ends up being his ultimate mistake because Yang Tao has brought his friends to beat the shit out of his boss. They kick him down as he demands to be let go of. Even though the boss showed consideration to Yang Tao all these years, his own lackey ended up betraying him in the end. Of course. Yang Tao reminds his former boss that he was disgraced and tossed around like a lap dog. It's the opposite of being treated nicely. Jiang Kai reminds him of the down payment he paid for Yang Tao's sake so he can get a house, instead of being thankful for that helpful gesture. Yang Tao acts like it shouldn't be a big deal since his boss has enough money to buy several houses all at once. He's here for the warehouse keys to steal the supplies. The boss refuses, causing this bastard to attack his family. Yang Tao drags his wife by her hair, causing the little boy to roar at him for hurting his mother. The poor kid can only do so much. Yang Tao doesn't even spare him and smacks the kid with a heavy slap. Jiang Sheng roars at him for hurting his defenseless wife and child, being the evil son of a bitch he is. Yang Tao promises not to hurt them as long as he cooperates along with them. In the next scene, they bring him all the way back to the warehouse. Unlocking it, they get inside, but Yang Tao is severely disappointed that there's barely anything left. The boss reminds him of their recent best client, Xiaoying, who bought everything, including even the expired food. There's practically nothing left in their stock. The mention of Xiaoying makes Yang Tao realize something all of a sudden. If they can just steal those supplies from Xiaoying, things will be easy for them as they'll have a decade's worth of rations on them. Of course, even the boss thinks that's a bad idea because he knows from his previous encounter with Xiaoying that he isn't a pushover. He even suspects that Xiaoying must have learned about the apocalypse long before it happened and prepared accordingly. Yang Tao doesn't even take it up as part of his mission and instead forces his former boss to do the dirty work. Jiang Sheng has no idea what he's talking about until the bastard puts his family at risk. This means that if he doesn't secure Xiaoying's supplies, they'll just take out their frustrations on his wife and child. It's a depressing situation for this guy, back at the fortress. Things aren't looking good for Jiang Kai's friend. He's turned into an animal without any regard for reason. The group despairs at the sight of watching their friend get reduced to such a pitiful state. Finally, Yiming suggests that they dispose of him, once again. Xiaoying is made suspicious by his words. Jiang Kai can't believe the words coming out of Yiming's mouth. However, this guy is actually serious, believing that there's no reason to keep an infected person alive, especially when they're already dead. He understands that if he were ever to break out of containment, he would endanger the rest of them. His words are painful but true. Xiaoying agrees that there's no cure, so there's no way to bring their friend back to life. To test Yiming's resolve, Xiaoying offers him a blade just to see what he'll do with it. The guy is startled at first, but eventually realizes what's going on. Xiaoying wants him to kill his infected friend. Yiming's body shivers at the sight of the blade while Xiaoying eggs him on, reminding him that he's the one who wanted a weapon from the beginning. It's finally time for him to pick it up and peacefully send off his friend. Interrupting their conversation, Jiang Kai forces the blade out of their hands. He understands the weight of the responsibility involved and volunteers for the task instead. Xiaoying quickly reminds him that if he follows through with this job, he'll become a murderer. It's not something to brush off easily, but Jiang Kai is prepared to trust in Xiaoying's words. And that's why he's ready to do the job. Seeing his confidence, Xiaoying allows Jiang Kai to make his move. In the very next scene, he loads the blade and is seconds away from slashing his friend's face. But shockingly, Xiaoying stops him at the last second, even though they agreed on everything. Suddenly, he changed his mind. Turns out that Chen Chong's condition is special, which is why Xiaoying doesn't want to end his life as he's still got some use for him. It's actually because the system alerted him about a rare mutation in his case. Now alone in the room, Xiaoying checks his state. Chen Chong is a savage beast as he is right now, but Xiaoying is fearless. This man goes up to his face and reminds him that he's still got one last job to do. The following day, a car crashes straight into a pole. It's actually the boss who appears to have such terrible luck today that he can't even drive properly. Thankfully, he's pretty close to the fortress, so the distance can be traversed by foot. However, things get a lot more complicated when an ugly zombie attacks him. Unfortunately, the boss ends up getting bitten on his arm. He shoves the mad beast back down and runs back to his car, grabbing a metal pipe. This man literally knocks the sonic rings out of the zombie's head. He doesn't even stop there, continuing to smash the creature's head until it is reduced to a pile of blood. Well, he wasted far too much time on one zombie as others are also gaining up on him. With his compromised condition, he keeps walking in the direction of the fortress. Speaking of which, Xiaoyang's got his crew locked and loaded. Each of them is armed with weapons to kill the zombies lingering around the base. Shan Shan is struggling with the protective gear covering important parts of her body. Even though it's uncomfortable, it's necessary to wear. Xiaoyang points out that zombies are known for their explosive power, and it can get overwhelming for them when they lack combat experience. He's fine with them taking it off later on. Outside the base, they're locking down on one zombie as their main target. Xiaoyang instructs his team to get ready as they're within range to strike. Suddenly, the zombie catches sight of them and initiates its attack. As it bursts towards Xiaoyang, he reminds his team of the instructions he fed them earlier. Everyone is tasked to cover for each other and maintain good distance. He quickly dodges the zombie's lunge and shows them a visual demonstration of how to create an opening after avoiding an attack. The best areas to strike are the creature's temples and nape. Think of it like Attack on Titan. The neck is their weakness. Surprisingly, Li Wen is brave enough to smash his weapon into the zombie's face, but instead of cutting through with his blade, he only ends up hurting himself. I was glaring at him and he ended up losing all of his aura in the same scene. Xiaoyang emphasizes that attacking the skull is useless. It's the least effective move they could pull off in a battle. It also gives the zombie a window to attack the dude, forcing Li Wen to block with his blade. The creature really wants a piece of him while he's quivering in fear for backup. Xiaoyang is at least impressed with the way he handled his defense. Next up is Jiang Kai, who goes right in to target the monster's neck. The zombie is struck precisely at its weak spot, creating an opening for the rest of the team to keep on bashing it to death. Xiaoyang highlights the importance of striking numerous times to ensure a successful kill. Jiang Kai looks back to ask how they're doing, to which Xiaoyang replies that they should know the answer themselves. However, a zombie is rushing to attack him from his blind side, causing Jiang Kai to shout and alert him. The mindless beast is inches away from biting his shoulder, but even then Xiaoyang quickly turns back and grabs him by the head, displaying no signs of fear in his approach. Once again, he uses this as a lesson to teach them the importance of keeping an eye on their surroundings. The rest of them are amazed by his incredible reflexes and quick thinking abilities. Okay, let's go and see what the boss is doing. Boss is over here regretting his life's choices as he spots a bunch of vehicles stopped right outside the fortress. This makes him wonder if Xiaoyang has already been killed by another party. Suddenly, he hears a bunch of people talking to each other. He recognizes one of the voices as Xiaoyang's and slowly draws near to see what's going on, spying on the group from behind a car. He can't believe what he's seeing. Xiaoyang and his team are hunting down zombies without much struggle, unbeknownst to this unlucky guy. When Wen Shuya's zombified corpse crawls out from under the car and grabs his leg, this bastard really doesn't know how to die. She causes him to trip and fall. Left completely defenseless, the boss braces himself as the zombie hastens to feast on him, right as she's about to kill him. Her head gets blown to bits. It's Xiaoyang who came just in time to save his life. The boss shoves her headless corpse to the side while Xiaoyang questions what he's even doing here of all places. The boss explains his situation, but before he gets to say anything, Xiaoyang unfortunately spots his infected bite mark. He puts the gun over his head, stating that he's already a lost cause. The boss begs him to at least hear him out before shooting. Even though Xiaoyang is willing to give an ear to his request, he's not going to let this guy come near him. Filled with grief, even the boss understands that he's done for. The clock is ticking down for him to become a zombie, but the last thing he wants is for his family to experience the same tragic fate. He reveals how Yang Tao terrorized his family and is currently holding them hostage in exchange for Xiaoyang's supplies. Even though Jiang Sheng has done a lot of bad things in his life, he's never done anything close to what Yang Tao is doing right now. In any case, his family is innocent. But he knows that Yang Tao won't spare their lives. That's why he's begging for help for Xiaoyang to take mercy and save his family. The situation is conflicting for our protagonist. He understands that Jiang Sheng is a selfish man, but at the same time, he did help out with the delivery of the supplies. What's more is that even though his team is well-made, the ratio between men and women is unequal. Xiaoyang thinks that IP movements could be made in light of that. He gets even happier after receiving a system mission to protect the boss's family, allotting him 25 points for completion. There's also his current mission, which is to kill all the undead lurking outside his base. Anyway, Xiaoyang agrees to take responsibility for the boss family. Hearing such words, the soon-to-be infected Jiang Sheng plummets to the ground. Forever grateful for his actions, but now it's time. Even the boss knows that he'll be infected soon and he doesn't want to die a human-esque death. Understanding his situation, Xiaoyang orders Shan Shan to grab a bike from the storage room. She doesn't get his intentions, but she goes to grab one anyway. As for our boy, he tells the boss to isolate himself from the crowd in a place where no one can reach him, even though he doesn't explain the reason why he thinks it's the best strategy to use before he becomes infected, accepting his suggestion. The boss thanks him once again. In the next scene, we can see Jiang Sheng racing off on his bike. He's slowly turning into an infected, and his final thoughts before turning into one are those of his family. With him gone, Xiaoyang turns to the pile of zombies that they've all killed. Pouring gasoline on top of their corpses, he decides to burn all of them to ashes. The team has officially conducted a proper training session. Xiaoyang has become confident in their ability to fend off a bunch of isolated zombies without any problems as long as they work together. However, with their current skill, they'll be unable to take on a small horde or even a zombie wave. That's going to need some time to adapt to. Xiaoyang tells his team to follow him, and in the next scene they're facing yet another one of his storage rooms. Our boy uses Old Man Li to watch over the weapon storage room for tonight as he'll be heading over to the city. Of course, Shan Shan's grandpa is worried that he's leaving off to a destroyed city. It doesn't make any sense for him to do that. Jiang Kai and Li Wen volunteer to tag along for the mission too, but Xiaoyang refuses them, stating that it's a level of danger beyond their current skill. That's why he's leaving them to just protect the fortress until then. With that settled, a few minutes later, he's already in his car with his weapons prepared for the hunt. For the first time in forever, the store is empty and even the refreshing option takes a while. This time he decides to spend points to refresh everything. When he does, he is welcomed by a bunch of new loot boxes that he'd never seen before. Among them is the Black Tech box, a life-saving box, and an armed threat box. Also, with every manual refresh, the cost doubles, which means he'll have to be careful about how he uses the feature. Xiaoyang still thinks it's a good idea to spend all of his points on the fancy new crates. For now, he purchases only the Black Tech supply box, leaving him with 6 points left. He opens the box and discovers a physical enhancement potion, this time with a 5-point increase. It's an even bigger jump from last time. Reaching superhuman levels of strength, Xiaoyang injects himself with the potion. His body succumbs to the potion's effects, making him stronger than ever before. Our boy's destination is actually the boss's house. His wife and child are quivering in fear, hoping for Jiang Sheng to resolve everything. After a while, Yang Tao and his goons arrive into the room while the defenseless lady questions what they're going to do next. Forcing his way upon the woman, this piece of filth tells her that they're going to enjoy her while her husband's away. The poor woman tries her best to fend them off, begging them to stop what they're doing. We pick up the story with these thugs tearing Jiang Sheng's wife's clothes without a hint of shame while her desperate son struggles to shove one of them away. Right at that moment, the guy with the ponytail, known as Li, shows up asking what all the noise is about. One of the goons answers, saying they're about to have some fun, and invites Li to join in. But the ponytail guy tells him that the job isn't finished yet, so there's no time for messing around. They better focus and get to work. The goon gets annoyed and asks why it's a problem since they've done this kind of thing many times before. The ponytail guy gets pissed off to see this horny gorilla not catching the gist of the situation. He reminds the goon that he's messing with Jiang Sheng's wife and kid. He warns the goon that if she can't handle it and tries to kill herself, Jiang Sheng will have nothing left to lose. He'll come after them all and nobody's getting out of that alive. He gives the horny gorilla some hope, saying that once they deal with her husband, they'll come back and work her to the bone, not letting her rest for a single day. The horny gorilla calls Li party pooper for ruining the mood, but he decides to take the advice anyway. With that, the goons start walking out of the room. One of them shoots her a creepy look, telling her to wait for her turn. The mother and son are left helpless with nothing to do but cry. As night falls, the zombies start to roam the streets, and in these desolate roads, Xiaoyang is cruising in his car. He's deep in thought, reflecting on his recent gains. With 13 points in stamina, he's now got more than twice the strength of an average person, and his reaction time and control have improved significantly. He's speeding through the crowded streets, sliding his car around bends, feeling the surge of adrenaline with every twist. The entire area teems with zombies, so Xiaoyang decides it's time to leave the vehicle. The city center lies ahead, and driving there would draw too much attention, so it's time to proceed on foot. Suddenly, he hears growls. He spins around and spots 2 zombies charging straight at him, but Xiaoyang remains unfazed. He darts aside to dodge the direct hit, drives his shoulder into one of the creatures, and throws it hard enough to topple another zombie. Swiftly, he calls forth his sword and lunges at them again, full force. With a single swing, both zombies instantly lose their heads. These zombies have become nothing but punching bags for Xiaoyang to test his newly gained strength and reflexes. He's amazed at how effortlessly he's dominating them now. There's no question in his mind that he's gained more than double the physical power of an ordinary person. On top of that, his instincts have sharpened, and with his enhanced hearing he can tell the place he's searching for is just about 800 meters away. Meanwhile, a group of zombies relentlessly bangs their heads against the glass door of a grocery store. Inside, the survivors do their best to barricade the main entrance, piling heavy items to keep it secure, hoping it holds long enough for them to find a way out. The frightened Brad asks his father if they're going to die here. The father tries to soothe him, saying those sons of witches can't get in. And even if they do, it's still a win because they'll be reunited with his mother. Of course, the father's words don't offer much comfort, and the kid begins crying even louder. The officer grows annoyed and can't believe the father just said that without thinking it through. He's irritated by the senseless nonsense the father told his son. But the quick-witted father fires back, saying if he had enough brain cells to think before speaking, he'd be a property manager by now. By now, even the officer starts to worry that they might actually die here. Just as tension peaks, they hear gunshots. One of the zombies clinging to the door has its head blown off, and the kid drops to the ground in shock, while the father is left clueless about what just happened. The officer tells them to move the heavy objects aside to see who's outside and warns them not to make a sound. As they carefully peek through the gate, they realize all nearby zombies have been dealt with, so they cautiously step outside. The kid begins yelling something about a mutant. The father quickly asks what he means, and the son explains it's a stronger and faster type of zombie, like in comics, novels, and games. The father gets annoyed at his entertainment-obsessed son and snaps at him, wondering how he can still talk about games at a time like this. He's now convinced this is why his son always had the worst grades. The officer turns to the father, telling him to stop bickering and asks how grades matter right now. He urges them to hurry and stay alert because they don't want the mutant to ambush them. Don't forget, this father is Old Song. So that's what we'll call him. As they move forward, the officer reminds them again to stay vigilant and watch their surroundings while they slowly head toward the base. When they reach a fork in the road, they pause. Old Song looks across the street and sees a boy standing there. It's none other than Zioing, clearly busy with his system, adding points and adjusting his stats. At that moment, the kid starts shouting that it's a mutant zombie. But the officer, clearly the only one with enough sense, quickly figures out that this guy definitely looks like a survivor. Not a zombie, it seems these people have caught Zioing's attention. He chuckles at the kid for mistaking him for a mutant zombie and tells the boy to stop letting his imagination run wild. The officer breathes a sigh of relief, realizing he's actually dealing with a survivor. Moving carefully, he approaches Zioing and warns him that it's too risky to be out here alone. He suggests Zioing come with them since they need to stick together if they want to survive. He invites him to join their group. Zioing asks them who they are, as he has no clue who they are or why only a handful of them remain stuck here. While surveying the area, the officer explains that they're out scavenging for supplies and that quite a few civilians have gathered at Rangyang Garden. The mention of Rangyang Garden triggers a memory for Zioing, who recalls a Junyu mansion nearby not far from their location. Old Song agrees, saying it's just across the street. He then tells Zioing to come along, stressing that there's safety in numbers. Officer Lee carries a gun, and with their experience handling crazy zombies, they're confident they can protect him. Apparently, they don't know much about Zioing's background, and Zioing doesn't try to brag about his reputation, instead humbly agreeing to the offer. Later, they proceed cautiously. Old Song asks Zioing why he wants to go to Junyu Mansion, wondering if there's someone important he's searching for. Zioing simply replies yes, and Old Song follows up, asking if it's a relative or a girlfriend. Old Song reminds him that it's the end of the world, so whoever he's looking for is probably already dead, and he should brace himself mentally for that. Officer Lee grits his teeth in agreement, saying that even if they weren't killed by the Ravagers, they could have run into those beasts. The mention of beasts catches Zioing's attention, prompting him to ask for more details. Officer Lee reveals that a group of thugs is holed up in the Buyu Mountain Villa area in the city's east. To survive, they don't hesitate to harm other survivors, and the group once encountered them, losing many companions to their brutality. The man decides not to dwell on it further, reminding everyone to remain vigilant when meeting other survivors. Suddenly, the kid shouts for the officer to be careful. As the officer spins around, he spots a zombie lunging at him. He swiftly takes it down with a few precise shots. Officer Lee pants heavily after the close call, his heart pounding as he thought he was done for. However, the gunfire has attracted nearby zombies and the officer quickly enters panic mode. Just then, he spots an abandoned bus. Everyone rushes toward it. Zioing grins, thinking ahead of them. Reckless running could attract even more zombies. But the bus, as a closed shelter, is ideal for defense. The only drawback is that if it falls, there's no escape route. After weighing the pros and cons, Zioing rates this emergency plan a 70. Everyone is already on board when Officer Lee tells him to hurry and keep up. At that moment, Zioing jumps onto the bus and Officer Lee swiftly slams the door shut behind him. The officer warns everyone to be cautious and check every seat for hidden ravagers, but the kid quickly shouts that the zombies aren't giving up. They're still gathering outside. Officer Lee clenches his teeth in frustration, realizing that despite their swift escape, the zombies are still hot on their heels. The zombies start pounding on the bus, trying to force their way inside. With every second that passes, more zombies gather, and the officer struggles to keep the door shut. It seems like it's simply too much for the poor officer to handle. That's when Zioyang steps forward, slamming the door with such power that the zombies are shoved back and the entrance is fully sealed. Officer Lee stands there stunned, his jaw dropping in disbelief at the incredible strength. Zioyang then proposes a plan. He'll hold the door closed while the others break the windows to fight back. Surprisingly, the officer agrees and decides to put some trust in Zioyang's judgment. At that moment, they break the bus windows, and zombies attempting to cling to the vehicle are struck on the head by Old Song. The others assist Old Song, making sure he doesn't fall while leaning out the window. Officer Lee, however, holds back from using his bullets, saving them for when things get desperate. That's when Zioyang pulls out a crossbow and tells Officer Lee to take it. The officer looks confused, unable to understand how Zioyang suddenly produced the weapon. Zioyang casually explains he picked it up earlier. With that, Old Song and Officer Lee join in, using the crossbow and their own strength to clear the zombies. After some time, they manage to eliminate all the zombies. Finally, they step out of the bus they had used as shelter. The kid, feeling completely confident and full of himself, believes they've just turned a dangerous situation into a safe one. He's convinced this isn't coincidence and that they must be the chosen ones in this apocalypse. The kid then tells everyone to stay alert and avoid making careless mistakes again. Meanwhile, back at the fortress, everyone hopes Zioyang's mission goes smoothly. Lu Yiming volunteers to keep watch that night. Li Wen asks why he's suddenly so eager, and Lu Yiming, annoyed by the teasing, tells him to stop with the nonsense. He reminds Li Wen that he's always taken his duties seriously. The chubby guy quickly gets humbled by his friend's reaction and asks why Lu Yiming is so worked up over a little joke. Regardless, Uncle Shang decides that since Lu Yiming is bravely taking charge, everyone else should head back to their rooms to rest and make the most of Yiming's help. Uncle Shang also advises Lu Yiming to wake everyone immediately if anything happens. As night falls deeper, Lu Yiming sits quietly, reflecting on how late it's gotten. Knowing everyone is probably asleep, he decides to return to his main goal, wanting to resolve matters before Zioyang returns. Meanwhile, Old Man Li sleeps soundly with the weapon room key resting near his pillow. He doesn't even notice when Lu Yiming quietly opens the door and enters. As Lu Yiming approaches the bed, he reaches out for the key, but to his surprise, the old man is more alert than expected. He wakes just before Lu Yiming can grab it and asks what he's doing. Before he can say more, Lu Yiming delivers a solid punch to his face. With the key now in hand, Lu Yiming runs as fast as he can while the old man calls out after him, demanding the key back. The noise wakes others, and Old Man Li quickly alerts everyone that Lu Yiming has stolen the weapon room key. They all rush to catch the thief, but he throws down obstacles in their path. Everyone chasing him stops immediately. It's pretty funny since they could easily jump over the barriers, but they just stand there like game characters, refusing to enter a restricted zone. Lai Wen spots the nursery on his route and decides he might as well go all the way since he's already on this path. He enters the room where Chen Chong, the zombie, lies strapped to the bed. As he moves closer, the zombie suddenly lashes out with its free hand. Lai Wen is taken by surprise because the other hand was supposed to be secured, and he wonders if they tied the restraints too loosely on this creature. Surprisingly, this makes him even happier, as it saves him the trouble of untying the zombie himself. Meanwhile, the others finally get past the obstacles, only to find an unpleasant sight in the hallway. They're frustrated that Lai Wen went out of his way just to free Chen Chong from the infirmary. The old man regrets not realizing sooner that Lai Wen was such a snake. Shan Shan tells him there's no use in dwelling on it now. They need to focus on their next move, since all their weapons are locked away in the warehouse. They should begin by ensuring the zombie is locked back inside the infirmary. Uncle Shang decides to use the method Zioyang taught them earlier: be cautious and avoid any bites. With that plan in mind, they approach the zombie. Zhang Kai quickly grabs the creature by the neck while two others hold its hands down. The old man takes the lead, pointing toward the infirmary and urging them to drag the zombie back. On the count of 3, they push the zombie into the infirmary and lock the door as firmly as possible. Once secured, someone wonders if it's just them or if restraining the zombie wasn't as difficult as expected. Everyone agrees, but the old man reminds them they've wasted too much time here. That little brat must have gotten all the weapons by now. At that moment, Lai Wen appears and dares to call the old man little brat. Unfortunately for everyone, he now has a gun in hand. He seems annoyed the storeroom only contained one weapon, but figures that one will be enough to take them all out. Afterward, he'll leisurely search for the rest. Lai Wen points the gun at them, ordering everyone back into the room. Jiang Kai tries to reason, reminding Lai Wen that Xiaoying saved them and gave them a chance at survival. But Lai Wen retorts that Xiaoying always acts high and mighty. Saving their lives doesn't mean they have to serve him forever. The old man also calls Lai Wen an ungrateful bastard. Meanwhile, inside the infirmary, Chen Chong appears to have plans of his own and seems ready to intervene in the heated dispute before anything happens. The scene shifts to Rang Xiang Garden, where Officer Li is giving clear directions to Xiaoying on how to reach Jinyu Mansion. He warns that the residential layout is complex, making it easy for zombies to hide, so Xiaoying must be extremely cautious. Officer Li tells Xiaoying that once he finds the people he's looking for, he should return to Rang Xiang Garden to meet the group. He advises taking the side gate of the community rather than the main entrance for safety. Xiaoying thanks him and promises to remember as he sets off toward his destination. Old Song offers to accompany him since Xiaoying helped them fend off zombies and saved their lives, but Officer Li reminds him they don't know what awaits inside Jinyu Mansion. If they stumble into a zombie horde, everyone will be wiped out instantly. Old Song asks why they're letting Xiaoying walk into what seems like certain death. Officer Li answers that he's done all he could to warn Xiaoying, so now all he can do is feel sorry for him. He mentions, though, that they shouldn't disregard the abilities Xiaoying has. He's undeniably talented. Meanwhile, outside, the place is swarming with the undead. And inside, the thugs holding Jiang Sheng's family hostage are growing irritated because Jiang Kai hasn't returned yet. One of the goons doesn't care and says he's kept his urges bottled up long enough, so tonight he's letting loose on the wife, or else he won't get any sleep. Seems like these fools are just sitting around waiting for a dead man to come back. But one of them seems sharp enough to realize Xiaoying might be gone since he left all on his own. The other filthy thug adds that when they have their way with her, they'll make sure to tie her up so she doesn't get the chance to off herself, not knowing when things might take a turn. They choose to take advantage of the time left. Meanwhile, the woman shivers as she hears the goons whispering vile things. Ponytail finally signals his buddies to go ahead, but he warns them to be cautious and not let anything happen to the woman, especially during anything wicked. Just then, Ponytail notices something odd outside. As we glance out the window, we see all the zombies have inexplicably dropped dead. While the reason may be unclear to that scumbag, we know precisely what's happening. Ponytail decides to step out and see if maybe a rescue team has arrived. But before he makes it far, his story ends right there. As he walks out, a blade slashes his throat cleanly and his head tumbles to the floor. Meanwhile, the other thugs inside are getting ready to take their prize. They look absolutely ecstatic and turned on as they begin unbuckling their belts. They rip her child from her and smack her across the face for screaming. They toss the boy aside, but the little guy shows real bravery and tries to fight back with all he's got. However, they boot him out, not wanting extra trouble, and shut the door firmly behind him, leaving the poor kid outside. At that very instant, Ponytail's headless corpse drops to the ground, freezing the kid in place. What shocks him even more is the figure now standing in the doorway, but there's no need to be afraid because it's Xiaoying. Xiaoying looks over at the boy and asks if Jiang Sheng is his dad. The child stammers briefly before managing a reply. Meanwhile, inside, the thugs have already begun ripping the woman's clothes as she desperately tries to cover herself. One of them, grinning smugly, slaps her hard across the face, telling her to scream as they torment her, but she stays quiet, not wanting her son to hear her pain. Eventually, the thug decides to go at her first and then let the others have their share, but before he can do anything, the door bursts open. One of the thugs figures it must be the brat who kicked his way in, but before he can do a thing, his head is sliced clean off and he drops silently. His buddy, unaware of what just occurred, asks why he's standing like an idiot and tells him to just throw the kid out. But what he doesn't realize is that the guy already lost his head and falls down instantly. The rest are utterly stunned, not understanding what's happening. At that moment, Xiaoying grabs one of them and hurls him violently into the wall. The thug, who is eagerly loosening his belt, stutters while asking Xiaoying's name, but Xiaoying doesn't respond. Instead, he smashes a brutal kick to the thug's face, knocking him out cold and ending him right there. The scene cuts back to the stronghold where Li Yiming is aiming his weapon at everyone. He warns them one final time to move or he'll open fire. Old man Li tells the rest to just listen to this bastard and head into the room. However, Shan Shan refuses to go along with it. Old man Li, though, insists she do as he says since Li Yiming holds the gun, but assures her that he'll come up with something afterward. Li Yiming just grins vilely and reminds them that there's nothing left to figure out. He threatens them, saying they haven't yet seen how cruel and firm he can be and that he'll definitely assert his control. He decides to take out Old Man Li first since he won't stop talking. The other two standing behind the old man attempt to stop him, but just as they speak, they hear a noise. Suddenly, the lock on the infirmary door starts shifting, and with a loud swing, it opens up. To everyone's astonishment, it's Chen Chong somehow using the key to unlock it himself. They find it insane that Chen Chong managed to unlock the door even in his rampaging state. It's obvious Chen Chong is targeting Li Yiming, and he fixes a deadly glare at the bastard. Yiming quickly raises his gun, intent on not letting a monster who can open doors at will survive. He pulls the trigger, but to his horror the weapon jams and he realizes he's absolutely screwed. Before he can act, the beast charges at him, ripping him apart and ending the bastard who's kept everyone terrified for so many scenes. Not only does Chen Chong finish off Yiming, but he also drags the lifeless body back toward the infirmary. No one knows what's going on, and all they can do is watch in stunned silence. Chen Chong, however, grabs the infirmary key, tosses it away, and locks himself in, leaving everyone outside in confusion. Meanwhile, Xiaoyang has finished wiping out the thugs and finally frees the mother. He then calls the boy over to him. But the mother clutches her son, asking Xiaoyang what he plans to do with him. Xiaoyang doesn't explain and just tells the kid to come closer. The boy ultimately decides to trust him, assuring his mother it's okay. When he reaches Xiaoyang, our boy hands him a dagger and tells him to kill the bastards. The thugs quickly realize what's about to happen, so they begin pleading for their lives. Even the mother objects, saying he's only a child. But Xiaoyang declares he's no longer just a boy and that everything changes now. He tells the kid that from here on out, he's the one who must protect his mother, so he must find the strength to destroy the monsters who hurt her. The disgusting smiles of the thugs flash in the kid's memory. Driven by fury and bravery, he charges at the bastards, and eventually, he finishes them off, finally putting an end to his mother's pain. The mother looks on in horror as she watches her son while the child himself burns with rage. He knows that even after taking those bastards down, his father is never coming back. In a moment of sorrow and anguish, he asks Xiaoyang if his dad is gone for good. With a heavy heart, Xiaoyang replies yes. The boy, unable to bear it, tosses the blood-soaked blade to the floor. He runs into his mother's arms and hugs her tightly, seeking comfort. The mother, desperate to save her son, begs Xiaoyang to take him along, offering anything in return for her child's safety. But the boy, determined to remain with her, says he wants to stay and defend her. Xiaoyang, however, invites both of them to join him. He tells them he gave his word to Jiang Sheng that he would keep them safe. With that promise, the mother and son follow Xiaoyang closely, walking past the corpses of the fallen thugs. The kid looks nervous seeing all those bodies, and he's even more frightened by the creature who wiped them out. Xiaoyang, keeping his usual composure, replies that he's the one who took care of every last one. By the way, let's not forget that this kid's name is Little Shuo and his mother's name is Xiaoli. Out of nowhere, Xiaoyang signals them to halt, hearing something odd nearby. He turns to Xiaoli and asks if she's familiar with Building 8 in Banyan Garden. The mother replies by pointing out that it's the same direction he's currently facing and asks why he brought it up. The scene then cuts to Building 8 where a bunch of looters are outside, demanding supplies from the people inside. They promise the residents they'll let them live if they just hand over what they have. Inside, our crew is hiding out in the apartments, arguing about whether they should surrender. Officer Lee instantly rejects the idea, saying the looters are savages who won't keep their word and will slaughter everyone but the women. The thugs outside keep yelling, giving them just 10 minutes to obey or risk being executed. Inside, one of the women considers stepping out to plead for mercy, but another refuses, not wanting to become a toy for those animals, but the gorilla cuts them both off, telling them to relax. He reassures them they're not planning on giving up and instructs them to keep watch in the hallway, confident the looters won't break through. Meanwhile, the looter boss grins to himself, thinking about how well-armed they are. His underling, however, knows their firepower won't be enough to storm the place since the survivor leader is armed too. On top of that, the group is hidden, making the assault much tougher. But the boss just smirks and says there's no need to force their way in. Instead, he tells his men to shut off the water to the first-floor apartments and waits to see how long they'll last. While these thugs are scheming, Xiaoyang is standing close by, quietly observing their movements. Little Shuoi naively asks if those are bad guys, to which Xiaoyang nods. It's both funny and oddly sweet that Shuoi would ask such a thing, especially considering he just took out 3 grown men with a knife. You'd expect some kind of major growth from the kid. But he still holds on to that innocent side. Xiaoyang then reminds Shuoi that these are the same kind of scum who tormented his mom, and that's why they need to be dealt with. Meanwhile, Officer Lee tells the group to cover the stairway and stay hidden as he heads off to get a look at what those guys are doing below. Officer Lee walks to the window and peeks out, spotting all 7 of them armed, 3 carrying guns. But then, a loud blast echoes through the air, catching Officer Lee off guard. The others are just as puzzled, having no clue what's happening. But as we already know, those guys are being shredded by gunfire from Xiaoyang and one of them drops. The rest are left confused, not knowing who just gunned them down. That's when Officer Lee spots Xiaoyang with a weapon in hand, advancing without hesitation. Our guy opens fire and one thug gets a clean shot to the skull. When they see him standing right in the middle of their formation, they begin firing back with handguns. But Xiaoyang just keeps walking forward without flinching, not a single bullet even grazing him. That only makes him grin at how pathetic they look. He raises his weapon, targeting the leader of the thugs hiding behind a chunk of concrete, but his bullets strike the block instead. The frustrated boss yells at his lackeys, ordering them to open fire while our guy is busy shooting him down. One of the lackeys finally stands up, fully determined to take Xiaoyang out himself, but Xiaoyang quickly shifts his aim, pointing the gun directly at the man. And with a single or couple of shots, he blasts the bastard's head off. The squad leader sneers from behind the concrete block, feeling confident, thinking Xiaoyang must be out of bullets by now. Feeling sure of himself, he decides to strike, aiming his weapon at Xiaoyang. But Xiaoyang meets his eyes with a cold, steady stare, standing firm in front of him. The moment the thug pulls the trigger, Xiaoyang moves his head lightning fast, dodging the bullet. He grabs the thug's arm holding the gun, and with a smooth motion points the same gun underneath the bastard's neck. Without hesitation, Xiaoyang fires, sending a bullet through the man's head, and just like that, the entire gang is taken care of. Xiaoyang then searches the leader's corpse, looking for anything useful. After that, he heads inside the building, only to find a few goons still left from the gang. The remaining thugs throw themselves at him without hesitation, desperate to bring him down, but Xiaoyang doesn't flinch. He stands his ground unfazed, and all that breaks the silence are 3 quick gunshots, each perfectly aimed, dropping the thugs instantly. Watching all this, little Shui is thrilled, clearly impressed by how Xiaoyang handled the fight. He can't help but admire him even more. Right then, a system task appears before Xiaoyang, revealing his next goal, which is to recruit survivors from Bequishian. Completing this task offers a reward. Xiaoyang asks about these people, and Officer Li explains they come from the Bequishian villas located south of the city. Officer Li quickly calls over the 2 men in yellow jackets, Liu Cha and Chen Jai, telling them to brief Brother Yang since they came from the south. The 2 yellow-jacketed men reveal that the people there are a gang, armed and well-stocked, holed up in Bequishian villas, taking in nearly all survivors from the south. This makes Xiaoyang pause, thinking back to his past life. He wonders if Bequishian could be where Lai Shushian and Qijing settlements were, and if it might be them who took control. He asks the yellow-jacketed men if they mean Bequishian is now the only settlement left down south. They reply it wasn't always that way, but the gang had weapons, and the smaller groups couldn't defend themselves. As they took over, they killed half the people and abducted the young, pretty women and anyone willing to be complicit. Xiaoyang is certain who's behind it. When Officer Li hears this, he asks what he means. Xiaoyang replies that the 3 men they just took down each had handguns, and he tells them to keep the guns and check for extra mags because there are probably more enemies out there. He also gives them his rifle, telling Officer Li to hold on to it and that he'll leave 5 magazines. Xiaoyang explains the Bequishian crew won't let this go, and with these weapons, a dozen or so men shouldn't be a problem now. He tells them to hold their ground for a few days while he reorganizes at home, then returns to deal with that damn gang. One of the men standing there is shocked, asking if Xiaoyang really plans to take on Bequishian. He points out they probably number dozens, if not more, and it's no small feat to face them. Officer Li tries to talk Xiaoyang out of it, saying it's too risky for their team. He suggests that they simply find another location. Xiaoyang reassures Officer Li not to stress over it because he already has some issues with the Bequishian crew. Besides, in a few days, he intends to return with a larger vehicle to evacuate everyone to the east side of the city near the old Tea Leaf City. He's building a fortress there and will require people to assist. With that, Xiaoyang turns and walks off, offering a casual farewell and telling them to take care of themselves. He also takes Xiaoli and little Shui along with him. The scene shifts to a darker, more foreboding atmosphere. Dead bodies lie scattered around, and outside, a solitary guard is on duty. The place he's protecting is none other than Bequishian. Inside the mansion, we see those running this gang. Wen Gay, sporting orange hair, is the boss here, and he asks why they haven't handled the supplies at the Jinyu Entertainment Center yet. Xiaoli, the overweight man, responds during a meeting, saying he's already sent people over, so they should be back by now. But little do they realize those people have already been wiped out. Another man, named Kai, addresses the heavyset man and reminds him that quite a few high-end affiliates reside at Jinyu Mansion. They can't just take supplies from the entertainment center without consequences. Xiaoli assures him his men have been told to bring back anyone alive. The boss looks furious and openly expresses his disappointment with Xiaoli. He's frustrated that Xiaoli still hasn't completed a single assigned task. Feeling the weight of Wen's anger, Xiaoli humbly promises that this time everything will be done perfectly. Meanwhile, Kai smirks in the background, pleased to see Xiaoli sweating under the pressure. Once Xiaoli steps outside for some fresh air, one of his lackeys notices his sour mood and asks why he seems so defeated. Xiaoli snaps back, asking if the 7 men he sent have returned. The lackey informs him that he sent people an hour ago to check, and they reported that the entire squad has been wiped out. The news leaves Xiaoli stunned and terrified. He can't believe that ordinary civilians from Rangyang could take down 3 armed men. In a panic, he orders his lackey, Taozi, to gather everyone capable of wielding weapons. This time he's determined not to let the mission fail. Meanwhile, Xiaoying finally returns to the base. As soon as Shan Shan hears the sound of the car, she quickly realizes it must be Brother Yang coming back. When Xiaoying enters the fort's boundary, the mission window pops up, notifying him the mission has been successfully completed. Shan Shan greets him warmly, happy to see him back, but Xiaoying quickly notices that Li Yiming is missing from the group. Xiaoying feels genuinely glad to see his suspicion about that snake was correct. Everyone is shocked when they realize Xiaoying knew about Li Yiming all along. Xiaoying then points to Xiaoli and little Shuai, asking the others to show them to their rooms and then meet him in the infirmary. Once alone with his group, Xiaoying explains he had known from the beginning that Li Yiming had bad intentions. While he admits he wasn't entirely certain it was him, he was sure one of Jiang Kai's friends was a scumbag. Xiaoying then tosses a large gun toward Jiang Kai. As Bleach Head catches it and inspects the bullets, he quickly realizes they are rubber bullets. The old man's mind clicks, and he quickly inquires about the kid Chen Chong who's inside the infirmary. Xiaoying strides confidently toward the infirmary, casually mentioning that Chen Chong isn't an ordinary zombie. Instead, he's a rare mutant, a fact Xiaoying had already confirmed some time ago. He had asked the zombie to blink 3 times, and to his surprise, the zombie complied. Xiaoying clarifies that following the apocalypse, those contaminated by otherworldly forces have only a slim possibility of transforming into rare mutants. These mutants typically exhibit far superior intelligence and capabilities compared to ordinary zombies. They might even hold onto fragments of their previous memories. And Chen Chong is extraordinarily uncommon even among these rare cases. Jin then opens the door, and the first thing they notice is Chen Chong standing above the man who had been causing trouble. The zombie quickly raises his hand upon spotting Xiaoying. Jianeng commands him to stop hesitating, insisting there is no reason to hold back, and he should eliminate this bastard immediately. As the mutated individual starts dragging that snake away, his pale-headed companion asks if he recognizes him, causing the zombie's legs to waver as he halts and looks at Jiang Kai. No one can decipher what's going through the zombie's mind. Suddenly, he swings his hand at the pale head, who narrowly avoids the strike just in time. It appears Chen Chong is just teasing his old friend, which clarifies for Jiang Kai how even as a zombie, he still cannot keep his hands to himself. Later, Xiaoying stares at his system screen. Jiang Kai unlocks a hidden achievement called Mutual Companion, and completing it adds system points to Xiaoying's total. Xiaoying is surprised to find he has unlocked a secret achievement, a pleasant bonus. Curious, he decides to browse the shop for any new items. While browsing, he spots a level 2 box named High-Tech Supply Box, something unfamiliar to him. However, it's pricey and Xiaoying hesitates to spend his hard-earned 50 points on it. Instead, he chooses to open the 2 remaining boxes first, figuring they will no longer take up space. Opening both, he obtains 2 unexpected items. The Lifesaver Supply Box grants him an interdimensional infection blocker, which can potentially prevent otherworldly infections but cannot reverse mutations already completed. The Armed Deterrent Supply Box surprises him even more, containing a Barrett M82, a powerful sniper rifle along with a set of bullets. Xiaoying is stunned by his incredible luck. Not only does he receive a game-changing weapon from a level 1 box, but the infection blocker is a genuine game breaker. The notion that it could possibly stop someone from fully turning into a zombie excites him. This lucky break fills him with confidence, making him even more eager to open the level 2 box. He can barely contain his excitement, but he knows his mission demands focus first. His current objective is to recruit survivors from Rangxiang Garden, and he looks forward to completing it tomorrow. Outside, Chen Chong throws the snake away from their fort since there's no place for traitors like him. As morning comes, everyone assembles on the training grounds. From the elderly to the youth, each person is armed and prepared. Xiaoying announces that starting today, everyone must dedicate at least an hour daily to shooting practice. They begin firing at target bottles, and every hit produces a flash of light. It's impressive to see the cans visibly struck but not exploding from the bullets. Xiaoying turns to Uncle Shang, instructing him to have Jiang Kai gather everyone and clear several more rooms, as he plans to bring back survivors from Rangxiang Garden today. The old man promptly agrees, ready to follow Xiaoying's orders. Xiaoying also commands Chen Chong to accompany him on the escort mission, knowing the mutant zombie's strength and skills will be valuable. Later, they finally locate an abandoned bus currently infested with mindless zombies. But Xiaoying clears the zombies effortlessly, and Chen Chong assists by tossing the creatures out of the bus as well. Once the bus is cleared, Xiaoying hands Chen Chong the bus keys, telling him that he can remove his mask if he wishes now, as there is no need to hold back. However, he adds that once they arrive at Rang, he should remember to put the mask back on so as not to frighten anyone. The mutant responds to the command with a low growl. Back in Rangxiang Garden, the high-rise looked calm from the outside. Inside, The group of survivors led by the dependable officer Uncle Lee were quietly eating their rations, careful not to waste their limited supplies all at once. Their meal was abruptly interrupted by the loud roar of a car engine outside. The kid guessed that Brother Zioyang must have returned to rescue them. Fortunately, Uncle Lee kept a cool head. He grabbed his AK-47 and signaled everyone to remain silent while he assessed the situation, moving cautiously. He slowly peeked his head above one of the windows with a clear view outside. What he saw was not their savior, but a band of thugs hungry for revenge. They were checking their weapons and searching for building number 8. After confirming the target location, Xu Xiang ordered his men to advance. Uncle Lee felt the pressure rising. Just when he thought they could leave their hiding place to join Brother Yang's fortress, the scumbags from Baikwishan appeared. Uncle Song raised his pilfered pistol, prepared to confront the assholes who refused to learn their lesson. Now that a few guns had been distributed among the survivors, their confidence had grown considerably. Uncle Lee shouted at the falsely tough civilians to not get cocky. Right outside was an entire battalion that outnumbered and outgunned them by a wide margin. He reminded everyone to stick to the plan, and as he headed to the rooftop, he began setting up an ambush. Outside, the Baikwishan battalion gauged whether they had reached the ideal distance to intimidate the survivors barricaded inside the building. Led by Xu Xiang, they simultaneously raised their scoped rifles, carefully aiming at the numerous windows of building number 8. Uncle Song glanced through the window and immediately shouted for everyone inside to be alert and take cover. The quiet morning was shattered by the sound of automatic gunfire raining down on the high-rise. Every window within range was smashed, forcing Uncle Song further back inside. After the initial barrage of warning shots, Xu Xiang ordered one of his lackeys to hand him the megaphone. While he negotiated a deal, the others kept their aim locked and continued smashing windows, prepared to shoot anyone who dared to show themselves. Xu Xiang arrogantly spoke into the microphone, demanding the attention of the survivors hiding inside. Before he could finish issuing another threat, the lackey standing next to him had his skull pierced and brains scrambled by a bullet. The thugs froze in terror. They had not anticipated being targeted by hidden snipers. Soon after, another thug collapsed to the ground after taking a precise shot to the leg, atop the rooftop of building number 8. The barrel of the AK-47 released the scent of gunpowder into the air as the thugs frantically searched for shelter. Big Bro Lee had taken position in a prime spot with a clear view of the foes. Beechui Mountain could never have foreseen that the survivors would be equipped with long-range automatic rifles. Xu Jiang blamed the intelligence they received for the fact that the survivors only carried one pistol, even if they scavenged the weapons of the 7 fools who died previously. There should have been only 4 small arms. The panicked thugs looked to their leader for their next move, fearful of being picked off by the hidden threat. The obvious answer was to fall back. You see, these idiots were not exactly the brightest bunch. They took the command literally and scattered like headless chickens running out from cover instead of waiting for the cue to retreat together. As expected, running across open streets under a deadly sniper's gaze was a disaster waiting to happen. The officer on the rooftop was as merciless as he was precise with that AK. Shuang scolded his foolish subordinate for running straight to their deaths. He counted down to 3 and the remaining scoundrels retreated as if their lives depended on it. That's because they truly did. While his lackey fled in a panic, Boss Lee stayed concealed behind his shield. It took no effort for the sniper above to adjust his aim and pick off the retreating thugs one by one, landing headshots and body shots in rapid succession. From the start, Boss Lee's plan was to use his men as bait until the sniper ran dry on ammo, allowing him to safely return to his vehicle. A truly despicable tactic. As he predicted, the sniper exhausted his rounds and had to reload with a fresh magazine for a moment. Xu Jiang's hefty self managed to reach the car unharmed. From a whole squad, they were now down to just 4 people, and unfortunately for the last one who lagged behind by a few seconds. Li Shuxiang sat in the driver's seat and couldn't be bothered to risk getting shot while waiting for another expendable pawn. Catboy had his brain pierced by a high-caliber bullet, and that was lights out. The other 2 who were lucky enough to jump into the cargo bed crouched low, terrified of suffering the same fate as everyone else in their crew. Back on the main road, Zhang Xiaoyang's magic school bus was still blazing through the jammed freeway like he was in a Mario Kart race. Our hero remained calm and collected as he maneuvered back to rescue the survivors. Given that the streets were mostly deserted at this point, spotting another car speeding in the opposite direction came as a surprise. Even though he could have, Xiaoyang chose not to interfere or pursue. He kept his focus on the mission at hand. Currently, earning points was his top priority. After a few minutes of smooth cruising, he arrived in front of building number 8. Chen Chong, the friendly zombie, and Xiaoyang stepped off the bus and immediately took in the aftermath of the gunfight. The young man was impressed to see that the rifle he had left behind proved useful. He also put two and two together that the car he had just seen must have belonged to the fleeing raiders. Chen Chong gazed at the fresh, bullet-riddled human corpses strewn on the ground and began salivating while growling like a wild animal. Xiaoyang grinned and asked his zombie buddy if he was hungry. He gave Chen Chong the go-ahead to feast on the fresh remains. It was better that he enjoyed the human meat banquet instead of leaving it for the mindless zombies nearby. As soon as he heard he was free to stuff his jaws with food, Chen Chong smiled like a kid in a candy store. Xiaoyang allowed this boy to roam freely as long as he met him beneath Building 8 after the feast. Chen Chong wasted no time and sunk his teeth into the tender neck flesh of the nearest dead thug. He relished the taste of blood and meat brushing his tongue. Once he swallowed, a revitalizing sensation spread throughout his body. Meanwhile, Jiang Xiaoyang casually walked across the blood-soaked battlefield as though he were enjoying a stroll in the park. Judging by the swift way the thugs were handled, he admired how ruthless Li Hong was when it came to killing. The kid peeked his head over the shattered windows upon hearing footsteps, and he immediately brightened upon spotting Xiaoyang. After confirming their rescuer's arrival, the rest of the survivors revealed themselves and eagerly beckoned him to approach. With the super cop leading the way, the survivors gathered their things and met the young man downstairs. Big Bro Li gratefully thanked Xiaoyang for lending him the Counter-Strike weapon that saved everyone's asses. It turned out that before retiring, this guy had been an expert marksman. Their joyful reunion was abruptly cut off by a loud, guttural roar echoing from afar. It was followed by the steady sound of heavy footsteps. The survivors froze in terror as they saw what was slowly approaching. "It's our favorite badass zombie," Chen Chong limped over with a strange expression. Big Bro Li was the quickest to react. He grabbed his trusty AK-47 and swiftly aimed at the incoming zombie. Xiaoyang calmly held the rifle steady and told the survivors to relax since this guy was one of them. He said the beast was on their side, but no one could believe such an absurd claim. Can you blame them? Xiaoyang directed Chen Chong's attention toward the other dead thugs nearby, telling him to help himself to some more free food. Big Bro Li was both amazed and terrified. He asked if Xiaoyang could communicate with zombies or something like that. The young man insisted that Chen Chong was no ordinary zombie. It was a complicated matter, so he urged everyone to board the bus first and promised to explain everything on the way. As they walked toward the bus, Xiaoyang reminded his zombie buddy to eat quickly and return as soon as he finished. Chen Chong gave the OK sign as if he couldn't be bothered to pause his gruesome chomping. After devouring every dead Betrayal mountain thug, Chen Chong pulled out his muzzle and put it back on. The survivors couldn't take their eyes off the strange scene unfolding before them. The kid couldn't even imagine how one of these mindless fiends would have the presence of mind to put a muzzle on by themselves. Xiaoyang warned the kid not to let Chen Chong hear him call the special mask a muzzle if he didn't want to get hit. Loki, the kid was starting to find the mutated zombie pretty cool. Following his solo feast, Chen Chong stepped into the bus like a normal laid-back guy. Having eaten so many people at once, his bulk had increased significantly, causing the bus to noticeably lean to one side when he climbed in. This time, Chen Chong even managed to mumble a slurred word while handing the muzzle's key back to his friend. Even Xiaoyang hadn't expected Chen Chong to develop the ability to speak so quickly, even if it was just one word. He had consumed 6 corpses total and must have begun evolving further. Right now, Xiaoyang's main priority was getting everyone back to his home to convert points and reinforce the settlement. He took the driver's seat and warned everyone to hold on tight as he accelerated from 0 to 100 in no time. Back at Betrayal Mountain's headquarters, Li Shuxiang had to report his failure to his superiors. He was berated for being an idiot who couldn't get anything done. He tried to plead his case to Boss Ling. He tried to wash his hands of any blame, saying he had received faulty intel going into the raid. He wasn't told that the survivors had automatic rifles at all. Boss Ling refused to accept his excuse. Logically, it's hard to believe that a small-town cop in this country would carry an automatic rifle. The big boss was offended, thinking Xu Xiang was making up such a stupid lie. But he stood his ground and asked if they could send someone to check the battlefield to see if he was lying or not. The boss's right-hand man had enough of his bullshit and kicked the bastard down to the ground. That was Li Shuxiang's cue to get the hell out of the room. Mr. Right Hand had been getting sick of Xu Xiang's idiocy and uselessness for some time now. Since the fool had cost them heavy losses in manpower, they could always just nip the problem directly at the source and kill the bastard. Another Betrayal Mountain executive, Boss Xu, called out the right-hand man's real reason for resenting Li Shuxiang. This perv right here had been eyeing Xu Xiang's girl for a while now. The pervy fox proposed that they share the bastard's girl among themselves and treat her like shared property. Boss Ling smiled. He seemed on board with that idea but insisted that they didn't have to rush. They had to find the perfect opportunity first. Unbeknownst to the corrupt thugs, Li Xiang never left. He was just listening in on their disgusting conversation from the entrance. He gritted his teeth in anger. Bro really needed to snake his way out of this one. A few hours later, he went back to his lavish house and threw a childish tantrum. Out of frustration with his own incompetence, he wrecked his own place like a dumbass. His girl came out to check on him, trying to console the fat bastard. Li Xiang simply told her to start packing as they had to leave this place as soon as possible. She asked where they would go, and he couldn't give a straight answer. The only thing certain was that this place wasn't safe anymore and they needed to plan ahead. Boss Li called his assistant Qingzi, and the loyal lackey ran in like a good boy. He ordered Qingzi to gather all their remaining men as they prepared to depart at midnight. His girl could sense that something was obviously wrong and she didn't like it at all. Anyway, back to the people that actually matter. Xiaoyang pulled up to his compound, parking the big bus in one of their many indoor parking areas. The survivors from building number 8 hopped out of the vehicle and marveled at the sheer scale of Xiaoyang's doomsday fortress. With them safe and sound, the survivor recruitment mission was complete. He was tasked to rescue 5 of them but managed to bring back 8. Apart from the 25-point reward, he was given another 5 points as a bonus, pushing his total to 66. Xiaoyang turned to his zombie buddy and informed him that tomorrow night they were going on a 2-man mission to the southern district. Big Bro Li overheard the human-zombie conversation and curiously asked what was in the southern district. The young man simply told him that he had to take care of some unresolved cross-time grudges with the people at Bichu Mountain Villa. By nightfall, Xiaoyang locked himself in his room while eyeing the level 2 high-tech supply crate worth 50 points, which he now had enough points to purchase. Without hesitation, he clicked the item's logo, excited to find out what was inside his first level 2 crate. Upon redeeming it successfully, his current points plummeted down to 16. A bright light swirled around his body as Zhang Xiaoyang prayed not to be let down after spending a fortune. Thankfully, the level 2 high-tech supply box did not disappoint at all. The Gacha god smiled upon Zhang Xiaoyang and gifted him a physical enhancement serum. This big-ass syringe contained a miracle drug that could boost his physical prowess by 20 points. Without hesitation, he jabbed that thing right into his veins and let the contents flow through his bloodstream. It was a lot more painful than he expected. Right now, he's at 33 points in physical stats. That would be equal to more than 6 times the strength of an average man. It didn't just boost his raw brute force. It also sharpened his senses. He noticed a mosquito buzzing inside his room and instinctively grabbed the tiny bug by its stinger. His improved hand-eye coordination would definitely prove useful in combat. He released his death grip and the mosquito flew out of the room. It's safe to say that Xiaoyang was thoroughly pleased with his reward. By sunset, he took his usual patrol with Brother Chang around the base. In one of the open yards, he saw Old Li leading marksmanship practice for those interested. After this session, Xiaoyang headed south of the city. Before leaving, he wanted to formally ask the old cop to take over marksmanship training for the others since he was probably their best sniper. Old Li confidently accepted the task, eager to contribute his specialty. With that settled, Xiaoyang and Brother Chang limped their way back to the bus. While that public bus was speeding well beyond the limit, something else was brewing at the enemy camp. That useless gangster Li Shuxiang had ordered all his men to flee upon sensing the knife creeping closer to his back. Unfortunately for him, the escape plan wasn't as foolproof as he thought. The big bosses of Bichu Mountain Villa pulled up to his driveway, blocking all his exits. Inside the lead car was the ringleaders, with the addition of a very familiar asshole. With a mocking smile and a gun in hand, Boss Dong Shu confronted Boss Li, asking why he was leaving in the dead of night. Like a skilled liar, Boss Li made up an excuse on the spot. According to him, he had just gathered his boys to head for Rang Xiang Garden under cover of darkness to finish what they started. No matter how good he was at spinning lies on the fly, it wouldn't work this time. One of his boys had already been caught and drained of valuable inside information. Everyone in Boss Li's faction immediately recognized Qingzi's limp body. Still thinking he could deny any fault, Boss Li tried to pretend he had never seen the corpse lying there in his life. Li Xiang awkwardly scratched his head, secretly hoping his dumb act would fly. Tired of listening to his bullshit, Boss Shu gave the kill order to his men and showered Boss Li's faction with bullets. Boss Li stood there trembling in fear as his boys fell one by one. Until the end, he tried his hardest to play dumb. Luckily, Boss Shu knew exactly what would break that act. He ordered Li Xiang to take a good look at the person sitting in the passenger seat of their car. The wannabe gangster caught a glimpse of karma, slapping his head with the obvious conclusion. Qi Jing, the witch who always finds a way to latch onto a bigger fish, had betrayed her way to the top once again. Boss Kai couldn't help himself. That pig kept trying to act dumb when Qi Jing had already snitched their entire escape plan. He really should have seen this coming. That girl latched onto him after making Xiaoyang's life miserable. It's common sense to think she would do it again. Finally, Boss Kai turned to Boss Jiang for the final order. Boss Jiang casually and wordlessly gave the go-ahead for Li Xiang's execution. The method they chose was barbaric. They tied a noose around the fatty's neck and had one of their strongest men pull until Li Xiang's final defiant breath. It was a painful and miserable way to go. Once the last breath left his pathetic body, he was left dangling at the gates of his own luxurious mansion, under the cover of darkness. A glowing blue bus rolled up nearby. Jiang Xiaoying and Brother Chang approached their mark quietly on foot. When they arrived at the main gate, it became clear they were a little too late. Tonight was supposed to be the night they ended Li Xiang, but someone else beat them to it. That bastard got what he deserved, but Xiaoying still felt some regret that he didn't get to end the piece of trash himself. He picked up a pebble from the ground, flung it toward the rope, and cut the body down. Seeing such a pathetic end to this rat sparked a little fire in Xiaoying's chest. He felt motivated to deliver some satisfying revenge of his own. Back at the Bichu Mountain Villa's base camp, disturbing noises echoed from the top floor. Qi Jing thought she could just switch sides again and get accepted by stronger scumbags like she always had. Well, she guessed wrong. And her snitching landed her in the hands of a pair of twisted freaks. Boss Jiang treated her body like a trophy to be passed around. The two perverted bosses used her for their own sick games. Absolutely vile, but justice is only a few steps away. Boss Kai looked out the penthouse window and froze when he saw his guards lying dead outside. A loud, heavy knock slammed against the door, but those were just to throw him off. The real danger slipped in through the highest window. With a blade in hand, Xiaoying stood like death itself. He pressed the cold knife against Boss Kai's neck. One wrong twitch would end him. Before the bastard could say a word, Xiaoying sliced clean through his throat and let him drown in his own blood. That's one down, more still breathing. Boss Jiang was stunned. 1 second he was getting off on his power trip, the next, his partner was lying in a pool of blood. Qi Jing, however, instantly recognized Jiang Xiaoying. Without missing a beat, he hurled the blade through the air, perfectly striking the naked bastard. Boss Jiang died with his dick out and his neck ripped open. The moment his body dropped, Qi Jing let out a scream, bloody murder. Thankfully, Qi Jing wasn't stupid enough to think that Xiaoying came to save her. If anything, his appearance only made her more terrified. Xiaoying glared at her with nothing but mockery in his eyes as he walked toward the door. Slowly, he twisted the lock, imagining how that pig Xu Xiang would feel if he saw her like this. As soon as the door creaked open, the mutated fatty walked in. The wannabe gangster was gone. All that remained was a mindless, flesh-craving monster. He lunged for Qi Jing's throat, sinking his teeth into her skin, chewing away with sick delight. She cried and begged for help, but her desperate voice fell on deaf ears. With that, Xiaoying closed the door on the two traitors who had betrayed and murdered him in a past life. Outside, he coordinated with Brother Chang on how to dispose of the bodies safely. These guards would make a delicious midnight snack for his mutant companion. But Brother Chang's stomach was still packed from earlier. Tonight he could only fit one more corpse, still better than nothing. As Brother Chang enjoyed his meal, Xiaoying's sharpened hearing picked up some strange sounds in the distance. Inside a building just outside Bichu Mountain Villa, a terrified group of survivors was being held captive. Standing over them was a vicious chef and a creepy goon. The goon grabbed a small girl drawn to her delicate and tender flesh as their next meal. The chef sneered at him, rejecting the idea immediately. She was far too scrawny for his tastes. Instead, he pointed at the chubby little boy clutching his mother in terror. The chef yanked the child away as the mother begged frantically. Fed up with the annoying survivors, he knocked her down with a single blow. The mother wept helplessly, pleading for her son's life to be spared. That was all she could do. She turned to the other captives for help, but no one stepped forward. They were just relieved they weren't chosen. Suddenly, gunfire echoed through the kitchen. 3 large bullet holes tore through the front door. The guards inside instantly drew their weapons. From what they knew, only the top bosses carried such heavy firepower. Fortunately, the gunfire spared the boy from his gruesome fate, at least for now. The shot-up door slowly creaked open as the guards prepared to unload a storm of bullets. Seconds passed, but no one stepped in. Growing frustrated, the chef told one of the guards to check outside. Cautiously, the man crept toward the open door. As soon as he stepped into the kill zone, Brother Chang snatched the bastard by the throat. Without revealing himself, he had already taken one armed thug off the board. Noticing the strange hue of his arm, the others immediately assumed zombies had infiltrated. They panicked and opened fire, wasting their ammo while hitting absolutely nothing. Brother Chang continued to bait them, sprinting around the room and evading every shot with ease. When the hail of bullets finally ceased, he barreled through a boarded-up window, smashing the wood without breaking stride. He locked eyes on the chef at the center of the group. With unrelenting momentum, he snapped the chef's neck midair, using the landing as a launch pad. Brother Chang hurled himself toward the next unfortunate target. In mere seconds, the poorly trained guards were cut down, one after another. Once the carnage ended, the captives trembled in shock, unable to make sense of what had just happened. The zombie had burst in and slaughtered every thug, but left the rest untouched. After things settled, Xiaoying strolled into the room, complimenting Brother Chang on the flawless ambush, even with the muzzle on. The mutant rasped back that the muzzle just made his moves look cooler. He wasn't wrong, Brother Chang for president. The fact that the zombie could talk only added to the survivors' confusion and dread. Children clung to their parents and everyone kept a respectful distance from the strange mutant. Xiaoying broke the tension by assuring them that Brother Chong meant no harm. One little girl didn't buy it. She said she had seen superpowered monsters like this before and they never hesitated to kill. That detail immediately caught Xiaoying's attention. He approached her calmly, asking what she meant. She mentioned super monsters. Her mother clarified that they'd encountered a similar mutant back in Day City on the east side of town. Xiaoying had figured it would take at least another month or two before rare variants started showing up. To make things worse, Day City wasn't far from their base in Old Tea Leaf Town. He gave Brother Chong a heads up about the potential threat of another mutant nearby. Depending on the person, mutants may retain fragments of thought and memory, making them far deadlier than the average zombie. But if the mutation was unstable, it usually led to extreme aggression. Hearing the path he might be taking caused Chen Chong to worry about his future. Noticing his unease, Xiaoying reassured his mutant companion that he was among the fortunate few who managed to keep their sanity. Besides, with Xiaoying around, he wouldn't lose his mind. Xiaoying then turned to the survivors to inquire if there were any more survivors within the villa area. From what they knew, a handful were confined in the sales office in the basement. Since the basement was closest, they moved there first to search for others. When Xiaoying swung open the steel door, the scent of blood struck his nostrils. Everyone shrank back at the gruesome scene hidden behind that cursed door. This must be where those Betrayal Mountain Villa scoundrels keep the people they butcher for meat. Now it was clear why there were no other gathering points in this section of the city. Still, the frequency with which they killed people didn't add up. Well, some survivors had seen the goons regularly hauling unknown amounts of meat out of the city. Xiaoying could roughly guess the death toll based on the corpses left in the basement. With such large volumes of meat, they might be involved in something more sinister. Seeing as the basement was no place to stay, the only area left to check was the sales office. It sat about a kilometer from their position near the south gate. When survivors arrive at the villa, they are first locked up there. Those considered useless get sent to the slaughterhouse. Suddenly, Xiaoying was reminded of a series of missions called Subpar Utopia. He must expand and enhance the community rating as much as possible. The goons guarding the sales office remained oblivious to the kingdom's fall. They'd only heard some gunfire and assumed the bosses were probably using live targets for practice again, concealed by darkness. Chen Chong quietly took down the poor security guards. Currently trapped in the sales office were a few unlucky women. Judging by the scant clothing in the room, one could guess the worst. They heard the noise outside. Some had resigned to their fate, while others still harbored a flicker of resistance. When the door opened, instead of some sleazy villa thug, a young man with a sharp and resolute gaze stepped inside. Xiaoying invited the women out, adding them to the growing number of survivors he had rescued that night. They exited the sales office building, the ground scattered with blood and the corpses of corrupt goons. The young man promised everyone a safe haven, a genuine home rather than this living nightmare. His only requirement was that everyone must work and contribute to the community's improvement. These survivors had already endured the villa's cruelty and wickedness. Anything was better than their current state. With matters settled, Xiaoying led everyone to his vehicle. Everyone boarded the bus. Luckily, he had brought a large enough ride for all this time, not long after the rescue. They arrived at the base camp. Shan Shan and Jiang Kai were waiting for the boss's return. Since he hadn't driven the bus straight in, Jiang Kai stood aside to see what the boss intended to do first. Xiaoying introduced everyone to his fortress. For now, he couldn't just let everyone in without a proper screening process. Thankfully, the survivors understood the wisdom of caution in these harsh times. For the moment, they would stay in temporary prefab houses secured by iron fences. It wasn't as safe as the main fortress, but compared to anywhere else in the city, it was paradise. There were many unfinished buildings and open lots in this old tea leaf town. Over time, construction would continue and conditions would steadily improve. Hearing his sincerity, the survivors expressed their gratitude to their rescuer. The night came to a close and the following day arrived. A convoy of cars and trucks pulled into Betrayal Mountain Villa's driveway. The lady boss of the convoy had already grown impatient. That bastard Jiang Qingwen or any of the henchmen she assigned to oversee things were not answering her calls at all. She could tell something was wrong. The lady boss stepped out of the vehicle and inspected the buildings herself. As expected, she was met with the sight of gore, blood, and decayed death. Those who perished the night before had fully reanimated into mindless undead. One of the zombies lurking inside was old Li Shuxiang. He growled and instinctively attacked the living. The lady boss didn't even glance at these creatures. She dispatched them effortlessly with her bare hands. Then she drew a knife and tore apart the drooling zombies, ripping them limb from limb. With the building overrun by the undead, the bosses they had placed there had died as well. Their human meat supply chain would suffer due to this disaster. They needed to clean up that mess. But first they had to deal with whoever was responsible for the downfall of Betrayal Mountain Villa. Bloodshed was inevitable. After a thorough inspection of the villa, they concluded not a single living soul remained and reported back to Lady Boss Rui. The good news was that there was still meat left for today's shipment. All they had to do was bring the truck over and load it up. While her men filled the truck with trash bags containing human meat, Boss Rui contemplated her next move, surveying the area. She noticed tire tracks leading out of the villa. With this clue, they could track down the man who crippled their operation. Back at the fortress, Xiaoying was pondering his current mission to grow the community. Despite adding many people to his group, his community score remained only 2 points. Population size should have been a major factor, right? Luckily, he had ample land to develop. That snobbish guy who sold him the title had done him a big favor. Aside from his expansion task, another issue needed attention: the rare mutant that had appeared in a nearby town. Together with Shan Shan and Jiang Kai, the boss went to the prefab zone and was greeted with reverence. After settling into the temporary housing with full amenities, some survivors even knelt before him in thanks. Xiaoying had come to gather more details about the super monster the mother and daughter had mentioned. The mother explained they had encountered the anomaly at Horenfa Market in Decor City. At the time, their group was scavenging supplies but ran into the beast instead. Several people were killed while she grabbed her little girl and fled amidst the chaos. As everyone got separated, they ran non-stop until they reached Buai Mountain Villa. They believed they were safe only to fall into the hands of worse monsters, now knowing the exact location. Xiaoying headed toward his vehicle. Shan Shan and Jiang Kai tried to dissuade him from taking such a huge risk. After all, they had plenty of supplies on hand. Well, he wasn't going out to gather loot. Decor City was less than 2 kilometers from the base. He couldn't allow such a massive threat so close to remain. Hearing his decision, the survivor who had faced the super monster herself also tried to stop the young man. Xiaoying reassured everyone that he knew what he was doing. He only needed Chen Chong beside him so they could pay that creature a proper visit. Meanwhile, a group of capable-looking stragglers was roaming Horenfa in search of supplies. They discovered a large supermarket and were excited about the prospect of looting a bunch of goods. It would be wise to temper their expectations. The supermarket might already be picked clean. And so, the stragglers entered the supermarket, confident in their group's ability to navigate freely in the apocalypse. As soon as they slipped inside, they were met with complete and utter darkness. Once their eyes adjusted to the gloom, it became evident that the supermarket had been looted, but far from entirely. To account for other survivors or lurking zombies, the group stuck close together and made some noise. Afterward, they kept their ears and senses alert for any movement. A few seconds later, a handful of stray zombies appeared and the stragglers maintained their composure. They handled the undead with skill. Engaging with utmost caution, they eliminated the monsters in a coordinated attack. Most were relieved to encounter just a few zombies. It was fair to assume the main horde had been drawn away by the last group who tried to loot the place. Still, this group was experienced enough not to let their guard down as they continued scavenging. Unbeknownst to them, a far more cunning beast lurked in the shadows, biding its time like a hunter circling fresh prey. As the stragglers ventured deeper into the supermarket, they thanked their lucky stars for having enough supplies to last years. While everyone else drooled at the sight of food, their leader was drawn toward the bed display. She finally let her guard down and eagerly jumped onto the soft mattress. Some joked about settling down in the supermarket since it had everything they could possibly want. While the group toured the abandoned supermarket, 2 of the chief members stepped outside for smoke. They reckoned that no matter how badly they wanted to settle in this mall, it simply wasn't ideal. The place had too many entrances, making defense difficult. With so many supplies, it would also attract other raiders. Thankfully, a 2-story building nearby seemed more suitable for establishing a base. Unfortunately for these stragglers, settling down required being alive. The hunter had finally stepped out of the shadows, beginning its hunt for the tender flesh of the living. One of the stragglers managed to shout for help, drawing everyone else's attention. He ran back inside as fast as possible, but it was impossible to outrun a super mutant. The beast dug its sharp claws from its back through its chest. With one swift and brutal swipe, the mutant tore the poor guy as if he were made of paper. The stragglers were frozen with terror. Someone yelled, "Retreat!" But everyone felt their legs weaken. The group fought through the fear and forced their legs to move. Their desperate attempt at escape turned tragic. They fell one by one, starting with the slowest runners at the back. They poured their will to live into every step, hoping it would be enough to outrun the apex predator gnawing at their collective heels. A few seconds and meters passed. Everyone else was slaughtered except for the girl boss here. She ran without glancing back and finally neared the exit where she could see the light from outdoors. Girl boss pushed with every ounce of strength left. Unfortunately for her, running in heels was hardly the best way to cheat death. At this point, that was just her fault. The super mutant loomed over her. The entity that had feasted on her comrades savored her fear. She cried out and raised her arms in a feeble attempt to defend herself. But when she lifted her head, she saw a different super mutant. This one wore a badass mask. Instead of tearing her apart and devouring her insides, this one simply walked past her. Following the masked mutant was a young man who told her not to be afraid. That's right, Zhang Xiaoying and the gang arrived just in time to rescue the last girl, much to her surprise. She actually recognized this guy as the kid who bought a massive plot of land from her agency before everything went to hell. Xiaoying also recognized her as that polite real estate saleswoman from earlier. If he remembered correctly, her name was Xiao Ning or something like that. Their fateful reunion was interrupted by the guttural sounds of ripping flesh. Wan warned the young man about the monster causing havoc in the mall, but he simply assured her that the beast was being dealt with at the moment. She turned her attention behind and saw two anomalous life forms facing off. The mall mutant saw Chen Chang as a rival, but our friendly mutant just saw this foe as an obstacle to be toppled. This was the first time either of them met another of their kind. They were both excited to test how they compared against a fellow mutated freak. The mall mutant struck with his unnaturally long claws, missing Chen Chang's crotch by just a few inches. He wondered if eating another freak would speed up his evolution or something, while the mall mutant laughed. Chen Chang unleashed a roaring strike. The force behind that fist was so powerful and heavy that it drove the mall mutant's head deep into the tiled floor. Now the freak was forced to stop messing around and take the masked mutant seriously. Chen Chang raised his foot above the monster's head. In this case, kicking someone while they're down would be completely acceptable. Unfortunately, the naked freak was quick enough to dodge the attack. With that same perverse laugh, the mutant thanked the humans that served as fuel to his gas tank, constantly accumulating and growing stronger every day. Chen Chang sensed the incoming threat. The mall mutant lunged face to face at him, looking more savage and vicious than ever. The two exchanged dozens of blows in the blink of an eye. Jiang Kai was starting to worry that Chen Chang was losing ground for the first time ever. Xiaoying, on the other hand, was glad they made this trip. If they had left the small mutant to hunt a bit longer, it might have grown completely unstoppable. To tip the odds in their favor, the young man stepped in and manifested an AK-47 out of thin air. He casually asked Chen Chang to hold the beast down for just 1 second so they could finally finish it. As usual, the ever-reliable super mutant obeyed and focused on keeping the mall mutant from using its speed. The sound of gunfire echoed throughout the mall. A single bullet pierced the monster's forehead, cracking its skull and turning what was left of its brain into mush. Still, one gunshot to the head wasn't enough to end the super mutant's terror. However, that shot did injure the beast. Now it completely shifted its attention to the young man with the gun. Jiang Kai couldn't believe his eyes. He had never seen a life form survive a clean headshot before. If one bullet wasn't enough, why not add one more and then some more, then just put it on full auto to work its magic? With high-caliber bullets tearing into the mall mutant, the beast looked like rotten green cheese. When it finally fell, it shivered as the last bits of life left its body. Xiaoying suggested that Chen Chang try eating the super mutant. Who knows, maybe it would give a hefty power boost. Much to the young man's surprise, eliminating a dangerous element like this beast also counted toward improving his community score and advancing his mission. Since they were in a relatively untouched supermarket, they might as well pick up a few things. They couldn't leave empty-handed now. Could they? This was where Xiaoying's storage ability came in handy. There was no need to haul truckloads of supplies. He can simply absorb it all and stash it within an alternate dimension. It sounds a bit crude, but rather than letting the straggler corpses rise as zombies, they might as well treat Chen Chang to a little dessert after devouring his main dish. While Xiaoying was away, some opportunists began to stir. Boss Rui and a handful of her crew had set off to trace the tire marks and observe their rivals from a distance. They quietly evaluated the base's strength and resources. Boss Rui's trusted aide estimated that the camp housed a fair number of people, but they lacked sufficient weaponry. Their only real asset seemed to be that solid warehouse, if that's all they've got. It's baffling how they managed to take down Jiang Qingguan, Lin Guangkai, and the entire Bichu Mountain Villa. Boss Rui figured those pests must have employed underhanded tricks. They likely baited in a swarm of infected or something similar, brimming with overconfidence. Boss Rui was already thanking fate for handing her such easy pickings and a ready-made base. For now, they needed to return, regroup, and rally all their manpower and gear before striking when the defenders least expect it. The scouts turned back and drove away, headed the other direction. Xiaoying's crew was on their return trip. Jiang Kai mentioned to Wan that their camp had not just mattresses, but even hot water for real showers. Nowadays, it's rare to encounter other vehicles on the road. The group grew tense, readying their weapons. Two cars approached from the opposite lane. None of them hit the brakes, but for a brief moment Xiaoying and Boss Rui locked eyes, sizing one another up. A fresh objective appeared. For Villain Nemesis, Volume 1, Xiaoying must withstand the coming attack to earn 50 points. He instantly sensed that the invaders were most likely those shady figures cruising the vicinity. To verify, he checked in with Shan at the lookout to ask about any unusual movements near their boundary. From what the girl could tell, A vehicle had passed in the distance but didn't get close enough to set off any alerts. That's all the confirmation Zioyang needed. So he summoned Uncle Shang and Old Li to gather everyone for an urgent announcement. Meanwhile, operations at the southern outskirts coal facility were running smoothly. Thanks to Apache radio broadcast, a group of survivors found themselves hiking in the plant's direction. The signal claimed this was a safe area looking for people to help build a settlement. These survivors were on high alert. If they'd lasted this long, they had to be skilled. Eventually, they spotted a vehicle pulling up toward their location. The car rolled to a stop. Boss Rui and her cronies, fresh from their recon mission, greeted the newcomers who were drawn in by the hopeful transmission. Once the newcomers laid eyes on her figure, all their logical thinking vanished. They only wanted in on whatever it was she had going. Boss Rui also knew how to work her charm and seduction to dissolve any resistance. With a warm grin, she invited them into her staging area. As they strolled toward the coal plant, the survivors exchanged some sleazy, knowing glances. They were led into the compound, wide-eyed at how spacious and well-kept it appeared. At last, they'd found somewhere to call home. One of the survivors asked to be excused, saying he needed the restroom. Boss Rui offered to escort him to their indoor facilities, and the poor fool gave in without hesitation. She didn't just show him the urinal stalls. Boss Rui stayed inside while he relieved himself. Her gaze remained locked on the goods the entire time, seemingly sizing things up. Noticing the vibe, the survivor told Boss Rui to stop playing coy and try the goods if she was curious. He boasted about being a powerhouse, but it only took a single swift lunge and stab to shut his dirty mouth. Boss Rui executed the kill with clinical precision. The fool never saw it coming. At first, she had considered bringing him into the fold if he turned out to be worthwhile. But after getting a look at his gear, putting him down was an easy call. Imagine dying because you've got nothing to show. Outside, her crew had already finished their side of the job. Every last survivor tricked by the radio signal was bleeding like livestock. Back at the compound, everyone answered Zioyang's summons and gathered to prepare for the approaching conflict. Old Li questioned who'd be stupid enough to go after them. At the moment, their enemy remains a mystery, and an ambush could come at any time. To get ready, Zhang Kai and Chen Chong were ordered to stick with the boss and sweep out the abandoned building in the southeast. Refugees would need to be temporarily placed there. If they remained in the prefab zone, they'd be sitting ducks in case of a siege. Shan Shan and several others stepped up to volunteer. Even the non-identical twins were in. Riding the momentum in the room, little Shuai also signed up. Much to his mom's frustration, eager to help, Zio Ning also raised her hand for the clearing mission. While that squad sets out, Uncle Shang and Old Li would stay behind to guard the base. Everyone else would get prepped, and just like that with Zioyang at the helm, a strike team was mobilized to tear down anything that stood in the way of war. As they stepped into the southeast structure, chaos erupted as the unit swiftly took out every infected in sight. It turned into a brutal skirmish, the kind that would sharpen their instincts for the battles ahead. After wiping out the first wave, Zioyang called a halt to check on injuries and let the team breathe. Again, he warned that the days to come would be filled with strife. For now, they'd stay stationed in the southeast complex for a full sweep. Once the refugees were ushered in, they expressed a strong desire to join the fight. The more he reflected on it, the more Zioyang felt like increasing their fighter count was the smart move, so he vowed to send over some pistols and ammunition later that day. When the inevitable clash arrives, the southeast outpost and central base will maintain contact via walkie-talkie. Over at the coal facility, Boss Rui was supervising their hush-hush cannibalistic setup. Her right hand, who looks like he belongs in Full Metal Alchemist, and number 3 were both salivating at the chance to get a bite of the fresh stock. Boss Rui was still seething about what happened to Beechway Mountain. From here on, they'd have to source meat the hard way. Of course, number 2 and number 3 weren't thrilled by that. Luckily, they already had a clear idea of who needed a visit in the eastern suburb. Tomorrow morning, Boss Rui and number 2 will personally lead a raid to erase those normies from the map. Back in the base, operations were put on hold for the night, and Zioyang had a moment to check in on his system. With 46 points in the reserve, he was eager to browse the latest daily bundles. Opening the shop, he was taken aback by a level 2 Awakening-type power-up crate priced at 25 points. There was also a level 2 Agriculture crate and a level 1 Essentials pack for sugar, oil, and protein. Just the 2 level 2 boxes would cost him 40 total, but he figured this was a good time to indulge a little. Cracking open the most expensive crate he'd ever purchased, he was rewarded with a new ability called Overload. It temporarily increases physical attributes by 25%. Once the effect fades, he'll experience a short-term weakness. But given his already impressive strength, a 25% surge would push him into superhuman tier territory. He would basically have the ability to release strength 8 times stronger than a typical guy. Zioyang is eager to test this newfound power on someone or something. The night went by quietly, but the following day was anything but calm. An entire convoy of cars, trucks, and motorcycles departed from the southern suburb coal plant heading east. For the final time, Boss Rui reviewed the attack plan with her crew. First, they would drive through and eliminate the exposed refugees outside. Once number 2 breaks the door, everyone will rush in with their modified vehicles providing cover fire. Speaking of number 2, this starving oddball doesn't even bother wearing a shirt. As the enemy drew nearer, the fortress remained on high alert. Old Lee took position at the highest point. Though the view was worse than the watchtower's, he'd remain unseen from below. Xiaoyang placed him here because Old Lee had served as a sniper for a few years before becoming a cop. Old Lee scratched his head and corrected him. He was only a temporary sniper fill-in for a few months. Regardless, he was skilled enough to reliably hit targets within 500 meters. Provided the wind cooperated, that would suffice for a critical role in battle. You see, Xiaoyang assigned Jiang Kai to haul something incredibly heavy up to the rooftop. The young man eagerly opened the heavy crate where a flawless Barrett sniper rifle was carefully stored. Old Lee was surprised. How could a young man even get his hands on a weapon like that? Without answering, Xiaoyang explained they had just 10 rounds total, so they had to be used sparingly. Old Lee took hold of the massive gun, feeling its literal weight and the heavy burden that came with it. Everyone else was ready and positioned at their posts. According to Xiaoyang, the enemy could appear at any moment today. Shan Shan, watching closely from the top of the watchtower, noticed something strange and quickly relayed the information to everyone. Looking through his scope, Old Lee confirmed a fleet of enemies was rapidly approaching. Back in the modified car, Boss Rui's henchmen were confused by the disappearance of the refugees outside the wall. Instead of pausing to assess before entering, Boss Rui ordered her crew to floor it and push forward without stopping. They were close enough to be spotted. Stopping now would only kill their momentum, and so the convoy charged ahead, aiming to take cover near the wall. As soon as the enemies entered their effective range, Shan Shan gave the order to open fire. Everyone spread along the wall, drew their blickies and AKs, and unleashed a barrage on the invaders. The foolish coal plant workers hadn't anticipated such heavy firepower. Bullets immediately tore through windshields and flesh. This was supposed to be a surprise attack, but they were the ones shocked. Boss Rui refused to accept that her brilliant plan had been revealed so soon. It was too late to retreat now. She threw caution to the wind and commanded her gang to keep pushing forward while many dropped like flies. For what it was worth, it was somewhat effective. They reached the base of the wall with some troops still standing. The critical part was getting number 2 and his huge automatic saw close enough to the gates. When faced with the stubborn door, number 2 hacked and slashed through the thick metal. Shan Shan reported the presence of this anomaly trying to breach their door to everyone nearby. Those in the watchtower raised their rifles and prepared to fire. To ensure number 2 could complete his task, Boss Rui and her gang returned fire with their pea shooters and submachine guns. Under heavy fire, the inexperienced group in the watchtower was effectively driven back. Even chubby Xiaokai was hit in the shoulder. Fortunately, it doesn't appear to be fatal. The enemies possess solid firepower and accuracy. It would be extremely challenging to keep suppressing them much longer. Some of the elders attempted to rally the younger fighters. They simply have to hold their position. They have sufficient ammo for a prolonged battle, but that won't last for too long. The automatic saw is moments away from cutting through the main gate. Once the gate is breached, they'll be at a disadvantage. Thankfully, the calm and composed boss has a plan for what follows the breach. Xiaoyang silently slipped out of the fortress, concealing his presence. Then the madman charged outside as if he were bulletproof or something. Boss Rui's faction had already expended half their ammo, and number 2 still hadn't broken through. He needed just a few more seconds to force the entrance open. The sound of the gate breaking blasted out. Shan Shan and the watchtower crew quickly descended to support below. Meanwhile, Boss Rui smiled wickedly. It was tough, but she had finally made it inside. Now it was time to see how these rookies handled the terror of an evolver strengthened by human flesh. Using number 2 as moving cover, she commanded her men to follow closely behind. The anomaly abandoned his automatic saw and pushed forward to widen the opening. With a clear line of sight to the enemies, Xiaoyang gave Old Lee a signal for his moment to shine. Controlling his heartbeat and breathing, Li Hongli focused on the big guy. Once that massive head appeared, Old Lee's crosshair locked on like he had an aimbot. Number 2 roared, sounding more beast than man. The survivors who saw the monstrosity would agree. As soon as that beast breached the gate, their morale broke. They fought desperately to halt the charge, but the creature had impenetrable skin. Their pitiful bullets were useless. Number 2 charged in and absorbed the hail of bullets without needing Kevlar armor. No matter the caliber, the rounds simply glanced off, leaving barely a mark. Even those marks quickly disappeared thanks to number 2's unfair regenerative powers. Boss Rui was quite pleased with the reaction to her hulking shield. She figured this group was witnessing an evolver's power for the first time in their lives. Finally, the ghost signal was passed to Li Hongli on the rooftop. He held supreme confidence in his aim and destructive rounds. The Barrett bent under the recoil of its shot. One trigger pull was all it took to obliterate the monster's head, turning its face into a mush of blood and brains. Number 2, seemingly invincible, fell dead. Boss Rui and her men were stunned. The big guy had been their only shield. Who would have expected this small community to possess weapons of such caliber? With the greatest deterrent gone, Xiaoyang made his grand entrance, flanking the invaders with his trusted AK-47. He opened fire, snapping the enemies out of their shock. For the young man, it was like shooting fish in a barrel. Boss Rui fully understood that their dire situation was entirely due to her miscalculation. She had underestimated the enemy and now they had to pay the ultimate price. Still, a woman like her refused to surrender without a fight. With a submachine gun in hand, she fired back while sprinting toward the exit. Gritting her teeth, she desperately tried to retreat. Upon spotting Xiaoyang's killer gaze, she finally recognized him as the kid they passed in the car the day before. To ensure she survived this mess, she grabbed one of her men. Without flinching, she used that poor soul as a human shield. Xiaoyang noted that with this woman's inhuman reflexes, she must be an evolver too. After forcing one of her boys to take a volley of bullets, she hurled the poor bastard at the gunner, blocking the exit. Xiaoyang had to dodge aside and was forced to cease firing. Those few seconds were all Boss Rui needed to dash toward her car. Naturally, Old Li refused to let any stragglers escape after these intruders had disturbed their peaceful life. He zeroed in with the scout rifle and proclaimed that across all heaven and earth, his Barrett was the one and only honored weapon. This guy really thinks he's Gojo. Instead of landing a clean headshot, he had to settle for taking out her incredibly fast legs. The sudden loss of one limb caused Boss Rui to stumble just inches from her getaway car. Li Hongli felt ashamed for missing the kill shot. While he was preparing another round, Boss Rui's underling helped her into the vehicle. Unfortunately, these two were clearly skilled at escaping deadly situations and managed to skid away with their tails between their legs. Xiaoyang ordered everyone to cease fire. He didn't really care if these idiots came back for round 2. He was just glad his system mission was complete. He earned 50 points, which gave morale a serious boost. Moreover, the second volume of the Nemesis mission was unlocked. Now it was his turn to go on the offensive and attack the cannibals' base for another easy 50. Everyone inside the fortress celebrated their huge victory. As for casualties, a few were wounded by gunfire, but no one died. The injured were rushed to the medical room for quick disinfection, while enemy bodies were hauled to cold storage for Brother Chang's dinner. With the base returning to a relatively safe state, the refugees were allowed back to their homes. Once he had some privacy, Xiaoyang checked the points he'd racked up in just one mission, excited to splurge again that night. Back at the southern suburb coal plant, the surviving war members retreated. Just 3 people left and Boss Rui was missing a leg. Number 3 greeted them with confusion and concern. Clearly embarrassed, Boss Rui admitted she'd been careless. They never expected to face such heavy firepower. She snapped at her men and demanded human meat so she could recover and refuel. Hearing her bark orders as if it were routine, a cruel, sly grin crept onto Number 3's face. She went on mouthing off, calling them useless fools who couldn't even follow simple orders, and claimed that none of them were even worth Number 2's toes. Number 3 finally had enough of her nonsense. The boss had sunk to such a weak state and she still dared to insult them. Boss Rui had made a colossal mistake again. She never anticipated a rebellion. Panicked, she tried to command her men to take down Number 3, but no one moved a muscle. Even the 2 survivors who dragged her to safety pretended not to hear. With Boss Rui missing a leg and Number 2 dead, Number 3 could easily seize power as the strongest. Besides, he'd already planted the seed of rebellion among everyone. The coal mine brothers had long been unhappy with how she ran things. Now they had the perfect chance to change leadership. Even now, Boss Rui thought she could get the boys to stand down. But as they gathered around her with hostile intent, her bossy demeanor crumbled quickly. Under Number 3's command, the coal plant bastards unleashed their fury on their cruel boss. They laughed and cheered as they beat Boss Rui's entire body with metal pipes. They jeered at her pitiful groans and screams, since she was still an evolver with an inhuman physique. This torment lasted for quite some time. When she finally croaked, Number 3 couldn't stop grinning as he wiped her blood from his hands. One of the goons called him Boss 3 and he almost beat that guy to death. From now on, he wouldn't tolerate any underlings who refused to address him by his new title, Big Boss. While the men pondered their next move as a group with the witch and Number 2 out of the picture, the coal plant's combat power had taken a serious hit. Everyone's greatest fear wasn't the Eastern Fortress, but the one they referred to as the Tentacle Monster. Big Boss decided they would abandon the plant and seek shelter with the West Steel Group, a sort of merger. A day later, Xiaoyang and a select few from his battalion slipped behind enemy lines, just as expected. Those pests were holed up in the coal plant. He warned Jiang Kai and Old Li to keep their voices down and stay close as they infiltrated the premises. After scouting the area for a while, they noticed no human activity inside the camp. The only thing they found was that hateful woman who had led the charge yesterday. It was clear she'd been killed by her own people. While the other 2 were appalled, Xiaoyang had anticipated this outcome. Curious, Jiang Kai asked about the big guy who'd busted through the door. That beast was obviously different from Chen Chong, yet he wielded absurd powers. Xiaoyang had already brought up the topic of evolvers with his comrades before. Even old Li was quite intrigued about how someone becomes an evolver without beating around the bush. Xiaoyang explained that one could evolve by consuming humans. This shocking detail would make anyone shudder. Xiaoyang elaborated that the most direct and simplest way to gain mutant-like abilities is through cannibalism, since he also possessed inhuman powers. Jiang Kai asked if he had taken that dreadful path. Moving forward, would they all have to abandon their humanity and eat others as well? Xiaoyang stopped his friends from jumping to further ridiculous conclusions. While cannibalism is the most direct method, it isn't the only way. Fishing something from his pocket, the young man showed them a glowing red stone. Ultimately, evolvers and zombies are all mutated beings, and mutants only need to absorb exotic energy to grow stronger. Ordinary people contain innate exotic energy, but it's scarce and scattered throughout their flesh and blood. Evolvers and rare mutants, on the other hand, condense their exotic energy into cores. As the apocalypse drags on, even normal zombies will start forming exotic cores. Even so, eating zombie meat sounds like a surefire way to turn into one. Well, ordinary people can't just eat zombie flesh outright. Only mutants like Brother Chong can do that to gain more power. While they were talking, Volume 2 of Xiaoyang's Nemesis of Villains mission was automatically completed. It seemed those coal plant boys no longer posed a threat to his community. While Xiaoyang was distracted and focused on his system window, a zombie almost caught him off guard. Thankfully, his superhuman reflexes allowed him to leap out of harm's way. He calmly dispatched the zombie with a swift knife draw. Ironically, the zombie he slashed open served as a perfect demonstration of his point. He extracted the zombie's core from its body. With the zombie population increasing, hunting season was about to begin, holding 2 cores. He offered Jiang Kai and Li Hongli a head start on their evolution. Jiang Kai still felt uneasy about eating something taken from a zombie's body, so he let old Li take both cores. After much contemplation, Li Hongli's urge to grow stronger overcame his doubts and fears. He devoured 2 cores at once like a kid at an all-you-can-eat buffet. Old Li immediately sensed the transformation within as the cores worked their magic. He felt more powerful than ever before in his life. Xiaoyang had to remind him that being an evolver didn't guarantee invincibility in this apocalyptic world. Taking the advice seriously, Old Li promised the young man he wouldn't act recklessly. With the crisis behind them, it was time to return to camp. While the good guys made their way home, the bastards were just arriving at the West Steel Mill. Upon entering the perimeter, one of the watchdogs stopped them from proceeding further. Big Boss Number 3 casually introduced himself as the coal plant's representative, still cautious of the group. The watchdog told them to wait while he reported to the leader of West Steel Mill. After much discussion, the coal plant boys were permitted inside the neighboring faction. Naturally, the steel mill's big bosses immediately asked what had happened and where Jing Rui and Number 2 were. Number 3 fabricated a story about being attacked and losing Boss Rui and the big guy. That tidbit sparked the interest of the bald steel mill boss. He ordered his men to escort the coal plant brothers and their third boss to a so-called safe house. Meanwhile, Baldy met with his partner and quietly plotted something sinister. Number 3 and his gang were confined in the so-called safe house. Even now, he kept correcting his men about his new title. So focused on such trivial matters, he failed to notice how suspicious their whole situation was. One of the men pointed out that they were likely not in a safe house at all. Looking around, they were surrounded by iron bars and locked doors. It was basically a prison. Before they could realize what was truly happening, the watchdog from outside barged in. He sternly ordered everyone outside. When they were granted another audience with the steel mill bosses, it seemed the entire plant leadership was present. Number 3 carefully chose his words and asked what was going on. The lady boss immediately accused Number 3 of treachery against Boss Rui and said the crime must be punished. Number 3 hurriedly tried to deny Boss Pang and Boss Ling's accusations, but it was far too late. Boss Ling wasn't buying the misunderstanding excuse, so she called over her watchdog Li Cheng to share some information. Li Cheng had visited the coal plant and found Li Jingrui dead in the cold courtyard, while Number 2 was missing. There were no signs of struggle. The most reasonable conclusion was a betrayal gone wrong, resulting in the former boss's death. Even with all the evidence laid out, Number 3 still chose to deny the charges. In this new world, solid proof no longer matters. You can be punished for anything or nothing without a fair trial. Honestly, West Steel Mill would have wiped out these coal plant boys if it weren't for Boss Rui's powers. With her gone, Number 3 had basically walked into a den of hungry lions. One of the goons desperately begged for mercy, even offering information just to save himself. Boss Ling allowed him to speak, but showed no real interest in whatever he had to offer. The informing thug provided her with details about the settlement in the east, abundant with resources where the boss and Number 2 had been defeated. When questioned if the settlement could rival the steel mill in power, the thug guessed that it was roughly equivalent. Baldy Pang and Boss Ling can't simply ignore a genuine threat so close by. The informant also mentioned that those Eastern Fortress folks haven't learned how to evolve yet, and not a single individual has progressed. Li Chang listened carefully to the informant and felt confused by the mention of evolvers. Baldy Pang struggles to accept that Jing Ru would fall to a group of ordinary people. Thus, the snitch explains they possessed heavy weaponry, the kind capable of killing someone like Number 2 with a single shot. Boss Ling felt quite satisfied that they acquired valuable information. Still, she remains ruthless and doesn't reward traitors. Upon delivering the kill order, the coal plant faction's blood ran cold. They cried out and pleaded for mercy until all their voices were silenced. The remaining members of the coal plant group were eliminated. Baldy Pang is now deeply concerned, knowing of the eastern threat close by. Boss Ling believes it is wise not to strike immediately because of those heavy weapons. It would be smarter if they evolved further to guarantee victory. First, scouts will be dispatched to verify if those people truly are novices who haven't evolved yet. Meanwhile, Zhang Xiaoyang is relaxing in his room, tinkering with his system window and browsing what he can acquire with his 126 points. To his surprise, a level 2 black tech supply crate was available for 50. Without hesitation, he purchased everything in the store, leaving 71 points remaining. The sugar, oil and protein supply crate granted him 500 kg of premium lotus root powder, some cocoa butter and cooking oils. But the real highlight was the plus 20 physical enhancement serum from the black tech crate. His tinkering was interrupted by a knock. Shanshan entered the room to notify him that they caught a suspicious figure lurking near the perimeter. Xiao Yang got up and moved to investigate. Jiang Kai and Old Li detained the suspicious man, who kept insisting he was not an enemy. He only wished to speak with the fortress leader. Once Xiao Yang arrived, Mr. Seuss finally spoke. He politely introduced himself as Shu Axing from West Wind Steel Mill. At the mention of that place, Uncle Song became alert. As far as he knew, West Wind is located in the southwest. It's one of the largest steel mills in the region. And just like the coal plant, it has become a survivor's settlement. That location is about 3 km from the coal plant. If it's that far, then why would Mr. Seuss travel all the way to the fortress? Shu Axing puffed his chest and claimed that in this chaotic world, survivors should unite. So, his leader sent him to seek more settlements for recruitment. Xiao Yang refused to fall for such an obvious lie. This man had been wandering in circles and drawing a map. When the map was pulled from his pocket, Shu Axing smiled uneasily, just to make sure he wasn't being fooled. Xiao Yang activated his mind's eye. Peering into Shu Axing's soul, it was clear this guy was looking at him with contempt. You see, our boy isn't soft. He drew a gun and pressed it against Axing's forehead without blinking. At this point, everyone knows how things operate in the apocalypse. It's disrespectful that this man assumed he was a fool. If Xiao Yang doesn't get the truth, Mr. Seuss can kiss his brains goodbye. Seeing the young man's deadly serious expression, Axing swallowed hard. Still, he stood his ground and insisted he wasn't lying. His faction was only trying to be cautious. Xiao Yang pulled Jiang Kai aside and asked if Axing had met Brother Chang before. Fortunately, he had not. So Xiao Yang ordered his men to release Mr. Seuss and let him go on his way. Furthermore, the young man even returned the hand-drawn map. Shu Axing was ecstatic. Believing his impressive acting had worked, he fled from the fortress before the boss changed her mind. Watching the obvious scout run away, a sly smile crept onto Xiao Yang's lips. Back at the fortress, progress made over the past 5 months is clearly evident. Zhang Xiao Yang has already lasted longer than his previous run. If this continues, rebuilding civilization might no longer be a distant dream. At present, his community score has climbed to 38. It has been months now, yet the system mission to handle the West Steel Mill still hasn't appeared. During this time, his inner circle has been working diligently. Seeing Shan Shan and the others return from their outside mission, Xiao Yang flexed his superhuman abilities and leapt from the top of the wall to the ground. Jiang Zai reported that the hunting operation was a success. With their current strength, no one could possibly fight or track them. Little Shua has begun joining hunts with the adults. Wan Wan has been taking care of him in the field, and he is growing into a formidable fighter. Today, he even managed to take down a zombie solo, as part of Villain Nemesis Volume 3. The Fortress Battalion has been hunting zombies to eliminate threats, assist potential allies, and collect every mutant core they encounter. Until now, Xiao Yang has been puzzled by the potential allies part. Perhaps it refers to the West Steel Mill. Since the system isn't giving him the green light, Xiao Yang decided to take matters into his own hands and infiltrate the mill himself. Naturally, Old Li opposed the idea. Uncle Song has been dealing with numerous scouts prowling their territory for months. It's highly likely they harbor hostile intentions. Xiao Yang reassured the elders that with his strength, even someone as powerful as Brother Chang could never harm him. Besides, it's time to find out whether those people are friend or foe. Uncle Shang, Old Li. and everyone in his inner circle will oversee the fortress and the nearby town housing refugees. The fortress itself will be fine, but everyone is worried about their leader. Without this young man, the settlement will fall apart. Back at the steel mill, Li Cheng returned from his search of the trash heap. He intended to speak to the bosses, but some guards blocked his entry. Li Cheng suddenly lost his temper and grabbed the guard by the throat, hoisting him into the air. When he realized he had let his anger get the best of him, he snapped back to himself and regained control. He set the guard down and quickly apologized. Truth be told, Li Cheng has been increasingly worried about his frequent outbursts lately. Over the past few months, he's been struggling to keep his emotions in check. When the bosses heard his voice, they granted him permission to enter. Li Cheng cautiously stepped into the boss's office and found the fiercely muscular boss Ling alone. Li Cheng proposed a new theory that might explain the recent spike in disappearances in their area. After thoroughly inspecting a recent crime scene, he found footprints belonging to a woman. What he suggested was that perhaps the deaths and disappearances were wrongly blamed on the tentacle monster, when in fact a different killer might be at large. Boss Ling didn't dismiss his theory outright, but advised him to keep it under wraps for now. One tentacle monster was already enough to terrify the entire settlement. They couldn't afford to raise the people's anxiety so high that no one would dare step outside. Li Cheng tried to argue against the boss, but when her face zoomed in close to his, he immediately backed down and blushed like a schoolboy. He awkwardly excused himself and said goodbye to Boss Ling. Li Cheng is a strong man, but when it comes to his boss, he just can't seem to think clearly. From another room near Boss Ling's office, a mocking voice rang out, teasing her for being careless. She snapped back that she would gladly hand the job over to someone else if her methods were questioned. The voice belonged to Baldy Pang, who was busy chopping up the corpse of that garbage boy from earlier. These days, Ling takes care of the killing, and Baldy handles the cleanup. They discard the heads of their victims and feast on the meat of the bodies. Meanwhile, our boy is busy killing zombies, clearing the streets one undead at a time. As he approaches his destination, he knows he needs to keep a low profile. He pulled a pair of scissors from his dimensional storage and did something diabolical. He started cutting his own hair with his eyes closed. Then he grabbed a handful of dirt from the ground and smeared it all over his face. For the finishing touch, he brought out the ultimate disguise. A pair of glasses. For someone deliberately trying to look terrible, he actually wasn't half bad. When he drew near the steel mill, one of the patrolling guards noticed him. Of course, strangers wandering near the perimeter are met with hostility, but he responded to the aggression with a smile. He claimed to have noticed signs of human activity from a distance, acting as if he was just happy to see other survivors. Once the guard figured he was a lone survivor, his tone shifted to excitement. First, the guard asked how he had managed to survive the deadly lands for so long. Xiao Yang spun a tale about being part of a small settlement of about 10 people that was eventually overrun by a vicious zombie horde. Every one of his comrades died, leaving him the sole survivor. When asked about his strength, he happily admitted he was quite powerful. After surviving multiple zombie attacks, he'd gained a lot of experience fighting the undead. Of course, the guard was really just trying to figure out if he was an evolver or not. Since he didn't bring up anything about evolution, the patrol guard willingly ushered him into the mill. Along the way, the guard mentioned that Xiaoyang would need to pass a test first. From just this brief encounter, the young man could quickly infer that this steel factory was a nest of vipers. As they approached the mill's entrance, Li Cheng noticed the stranger being escorted inside. The patrol guard fumbled and insisted he was merely taking the lone survivor to a secluded spot for a security inspection. Li Cheng is a straightforward type of person. If a body search is necessary, it's better to carry it out here and now. So, Li Cheng stepped in and asked the stranger to hand over all weapons before entering. Xiaoyang hesitated slightly, stating he was a bit uneasy about going unarmed into unfamiliar territory. Li Cheng understood that people could be ruthless in the apocalypse, so caution was wise. However, protocol dictated that outsiders must either surrender their weapons or be turned away. Maintaining his hesitant act, Xiaoyang handed over his blade. No need to worry, he had about 1 million more tucked in his pockets. After that, Li Cheng conducted a thorough body check to ensure no hidden weapons were concealed. Xiaoyang was somewhat surprised to encounter someone with a shred of honor in this rotten place. It was certainly a contrast to the savages at Bichu and the coal plant. Since this stranger had survived the outside world carrying only a dagger, Li Cheng curiously asked if he was an evolver. Xiaoyang feigned ignorance and said he felt stronger with each passing day. Just to be sure, Li Cheng escorted him to see the boss first. For now, Xiaoyang had to wait in the so-called reception room. Honestly, it resembled more of a holding cell. He could tell the doors were reinforced, fitting for a prison. A few minutes later, Boss Pang opened the cell and cautiously stepped inside to ask the stranger his name. Xiaoyang stumbled over his words and introduced himself as Jiangya. That name sounded suspiciously close to Kanai, my friend. Boss Pang came over to verify whether this Jangya fellow truly was an evolver. The quickest way to find out was to test his physical ability. So, Boss Pang hurled a hatchet toward his face. Jangya casually moved his head away from the hatchet's path, letting it smash into the wall. For a brief moment he thought about striking back, but judging by the calculating look, this bald bastard was only testing him. So, he kept up the act of a normal survivor and shouted at Boss Pang for nearly splitting his head open. Pang laughed heartily. That slick dodge pretty much confirmed that the newcomer was indeed a capable evolver. Had he not dodged, he would have died right then and there. In that case, his death wouldn't have even registered as a loss. Since both were evolvers, Boss Pang probed him about how he became one. He hinted that he was aware of the cannibalism route, and Boss Pang warned him to keep the method under tight wraps. Only a handful of people in the camp knew the secret, and they didn't want that knowledge spreading among the survivors. If Boss Pang caught wind of any leak, he would know exactly who to eliminate. To show how easy it would be, he charged forward and gestured to crush Jangya's neck with his bare hands. Luckily, this was just an empty threat. If this bald bastard had tried to rush him with a weapon, Jangya would have fought back. It could have turned bloody. Still, killing Boss Pang now would jeopardize getting the full 80 points reward for the mission. Pang was quite impressed that Jangya reacted quickly enough to draw a weapon. While the kid had above-average skills, Pang claimed he was on a whole different level, so thoughts of opposing him should be buried deep. After their tryst inside the holding cell, Baldy Pang commanded his underlings to treat the Zioyang fellow with respect. Give him a change of clothes and let him wash up before a follow-up meeting with the rest. The neat and sharp Zioyang was brought to the meeting room alongside the other evolvers. Baldy Pang introduced Huang Ling as his co-lead. While Li Cheng and Li Bin were the two settlement officers, the latter, Li Bin, would be responsible for showing the newcomer the ropes. Boss Ling praised Zioyang's fortune in discovering the strongest settlement in the region. Here, survival was no longer a worry. Still, to eat well, one must contribute value to the group. Zioyang solemnly vowed that he would do his best and obey orders. Everything was progressing smoothly. He arrived just in time for Li Bin's patrol. After selecting a Qiang and axing for the patrol, the group set off. A Qiang was quite displeased to see the new kid assigned to their team. Since Zioyang knew the secret of evolvers, he could only be placed in this squad. While patrolling, old Axing couldn't take his eyes off the newcomer. He couldn't shake a sense of familiarity. Li Bin was actually being fair to the new guy. He even explained what their settlement was like. You see, in the steel mill, the only people who knew about the consumption of human flesh were Baldy Pang, Boss Ling, and their current troop of 4. Axing was Baldy's cousin, and Qiang was Boss Ling's nephew. They were bound by blood, so if the secret leaked, it could only have come from an outsider's mouth. At this point, Zioyang was growing quite uncomfortable under Axing's probing gaze. This was the old man that Jiang Kai and the group had caught lurking near the fortress a few months ago. Setting that aside, another guy, Li Cheng, was also an officer. He was very talented and powerful, but he had no knowledge of the method of evolution. If anyone must not find out about the active practice of cannibalism, it was him. If Li Cheng found out, there would be 2 corpses displayed in the mill. This conversation gave Zioyang a lot of insight. The bosses deliberately suppressed Li Cheng, fearing his monstrous talent which surpassed everyone else's. Upon arriving at the outskirts of the mill, Li Bin ordered everyone to halt. They had reached a small settlement of 7 members. Li Bin's crew had been scouting these survivors for 4 days, and there were no signs of evolution among them. When asked if they were hunting, Li Bin laughed at such a barbaric idea. Instead of hunting, he preferred the term raising. Since Zioyang was an enlightened evolver like them, they wanted him to change his mindset. Instead of being a rigid fool blinded by morals, evolvers saw themselves as no longer the same species as ordinary people. They hailed themselves as apex predators at the top of the food chain, so the plan was simple. Subdue this small settlement, raise them like cattle, then slaughter them later. In truth, they didn't even need the entire settlement. Bringing back 5 or 6 would suffice. The rest would be dealt with on the spot. For now, the new kid should just watch and learn while Li Bin and the crew worked their magic. The small settlement had enjoyed months of peaceful life. They worked tirelessly to improve the group's living conditions. While renovating their camp, nightmarish figures suddenly appeared. A horde of zombies had somehow found their way into such a secluded area. Each one was starving for fresh flesh. The group grabbed all their weapons and prepared to defend against the immediate threat. Unfortunately for them, having guns but hesitating to pull the trigger was a sure way to lose their lives these days. While his comrades fell one by one, the builder trembled in fear of becoming the next victim. Meanwhile, Zioyang and his new troop simply stood by, watching and listening to the dying screams of agony. Li Bin defended this approach as essential given the scarce resources. They simply couldn't manage to support more living mouths to feed. Now that the zombie swarm had reduced the survivors' count slightly, the moment had arrived for Li Bin's team to take action. A woman screamed and wailed in terror as the hideous creatures revealed their fangs close to her. With one quick slash, those annoying Flesh-devouring fiends were eliminated and decapitated in a flash. The woman was shocked. She believed she was doomed, yet now she looked up at her rescuer, extending a helping hand. Li Bin's weapon of choice was the hammer, while Axing wielded dual daggers. Both were effective and deadly. After clearing the horde, Li Bin introduced themselves as the Evolvers from West Wind Steel Plant. The survivors had no clue what an Evolver meant, but they were just relieved to be saved. A single battle gave Zioying enough valuable information. From his assessment, Li Bin's crew roughly matched Jiang Kai's subgroup. Suddenly, his hair stood on end as a hungry presence made itself felt. Zioying turned around and spotted an open room in a nearby building. Since no one appeared to be there, he dismissed it as his overactive imagination. Li Bin snapped him back to reality with a command to assist with the cleanup. Still, he couldn't shake off that feeling about the presence in that abandoned building. Little did Zioying know his sense of dread was justified. A monstrosity lurked in that place. The clueless survivors willingly shared some critical intel. Some supplies remained in their warehouse. Zioying was tasked to oversee the supply gathering, while Li Bin's men prepared a small truck for transport later. Beyond the supplies, he also had to stack the bodies of the freshly slain survivors. Meanwhile, those lucky or unfortunate enough to survive followed Li Bin like he was a savior. This setup actually worked out quite well for Zioying. It was the perfect chance to handle his own business. While heading toward the steel mill, the survivors kept praising Li Bin and showing their appreciation. One of the naive girls turned to Akang to ask if they had a bath at camp. The creep quickly grabbed her and boasted that the mill had hot water and body wash for thorough cleaning. Suddenly, the mood darkened when Axing's spidey senses began tingling. Li Bin noticed the old man's reaction and raised his alertness. He shouted at everyone to stay vigilant, hoping to anticipate whatever was coming. Akang continued clinging to the poor girl even though she clearly felt uncomfortable. Axing might have sharper intuition, but he couldn't pinpoint where the danger was lurking. Akang mocked that the old man was just paranoid for no reason, but Axing trusted his instincts. Something was definitely out there, as if it was a self-fulfilling prophecy. Axing was the first victim of the threat's sneak attack. Something sharp pierced his neck. The poor man didn't even realize how he died. Li Bin panicked. He recognized that killing method anywhere. The tentacle monster had arrived. The tentacle withdrew, leaving a tense silence behind. Next, the grotesque creature had already entered Li Bin's effective fighting zone. While the group was being utterly crushed by a tentacle monster, Zioying was calmly harvesting mutant cores from dead zombies. Among the battalion they eliminated, 2 of the zombies actually dropped cores. That was quite a decent haul. He would have kept playing his part and stashing some for himself if he hadn't heard cries for help echoing from afar. Li Bin was done for. The monster wrapped its filthy tentacles all over his body. I'm sure you've seen something like this before, to end his torment. The tentacled fiend tightened its grip until blood dripped from every orifice and snapped one of his legs with a sickening crack. The survivors were distraught. Even Akang, who was acting cocky just moments ago, looked like he was about to cry for his mama. As if sensing he was the last threat remaining, the monster's aggression shifted to the sole evolver left. Akang slowly retreated, terror freezing his entire body, to save himself from a grim and painful demise. He grabbed the wrist of the girl he had tried to revive and tossed her into the tentacles to distract the beast. Well, the monster was not one to turn down easy prey. Now, I'm sure you've definitely seen this before, only this time it wasn't squishy noises and moans. It ended in painful and crushing suffocation. But this was not the end for Miss Survivor. Her true savior made a flashy entrance, slicing through the tentacles and breaking her free. Perhaps Zioying and his trusty knife had a chance against the monster everyone feared. Zioying stared at the tentacle creature from head to toe, and he wasn't really impressed or terrified. Well, that's because this was just one of the tentacle monster's sons. At least that's what the steel mill people called them. You see, the tentacle monster often muttered the word son, and it had the eerie ability to turn normal zombies into tentacled horrors. Even Boss Baldy Pang and Boss Ling would struggle against a tentacle son alone. Akang was certain of that, so he was just looking for the perfect moment to escape. He yelled at Zioying to hold off the beast while he called for reinforcements and fled the scene with all his might. Following his lead, the frightened survivors also made a mad dash away from the monstrous threat ahead. Zioying could practically taste the betrayal in Akang's words. That coward really tried to sell him out. The tentacle son finally recovered and was furious at Zioying for those deep wounds. The newly regenerated tentacles wrapped around Zioying's body, and he just let it happen without resistance. He was actually quite intrigued by the idea of some evolved mutant siring sons. He had the right to be arrogant and acted cool simply because he had the strength to back it up. He wanted to test this intriguing yet disgusting specimen before him. The two engaged in a game of tug-of-war using tentacles as the rope. It dawned on Zioying that he'd never been in a situation where he could use the ability he awakened a few months prior. Today might be a perfect time to test his limits. He planted his feet firmly, his stability unmatched. Finally, he activated physical overload, boosting his stats to a terrifying level in an instant. The power from overload was insanely strong. Before, he was barely holding a stalemate in a raw strength contest. Now he was practically dragging that ugly tentacle sun across the pavement. When he got close enough, he halted the brutal dragging with a tap of his foot. The beast was incapable of producing intelligible sounds, but its roars had become submissive, no longer domineering. The only survivor who didn't run away watched the scene unfold. Her eyes were wide with disbelief. A seemingly ordinary young man tore apart the beast that had taken out a number of competent fighters with his bare hands. By the time Xiaoyang was finished with this hideous creature, its limbs, head, and body were shredded, dismembered, and discarded. Xiaoyang approached the woman to check if she was all right after nearly being crushed to death. Seeing all the monster's blood smeared across his face, the woman screamed in terror. Realizing what he was capable of, she understood that he was the true beast. Xiaoyang wiped the blood from his face, smiled, and reassured the woman that he was not a monster. Meanwhile, led by a Qiang, the survivors who escaped all the way to the mill finally arrived at the gates. At the entrance, they were greeted by Baldy Pang, Boss Ling, and Li Cheng. They were puzzled by how haggard a Qiang looked and where the rest of the team was. A Qiang urgently recounted the events and how Li Bin and Axing were taken down by the tentacle sun. Li Cheng was the only one who inquired about the new guy. A Qiang excluded Xiaoyang, assuming there was no way a rookie could survive. Hearing that his cousin died like a dog, Baldy Pang was understandably upset. He didn't know where to direct his anger and blamed the survivors for the incident. Baldy massacred the entire group on the spot, letting his hatchet taste blood. They couldn't afford to act irrationally at this point. Thankfully, Baldy vented his rage after slaughtering a few randoms. Interrupting the chaos, a bundle of tentacles hit the ground, grabbing everyone's attention. They looked up to see the familiar face of the newest member of their mill. Xiaoyang and the woman he saved arrived shortly after Baldy's outburst. Li Cheng was equally pleased and impressed that the rookie returned alive. Not only that, he showed off the biggest flex, a girl and a bundle of tentacles, as proof of a kill. He explained how he defeated that weak tentacle son and avenged the boss's relatives. After pulling off such a feat, the co-leads began to reassess the new guy. Breaking the silence, Xiaoyang requested vehicles and men to accompany him to clean up and retrieve the spoils. While he carried out his task, the bosses grilled a Qiang about what really happened. This time, the damn roach still refused to believe that Xiaoyang single-handedly killed a monster strong enough to one-shot the rest of the Evolver crew. As far as a Qiang knew, even a team-up between Baldy and Boss Ling would still end in a prolonged bloodbath against that creature. Baldy was just going off his initial assessment of the young man. Someone who didn't even adopt a proper fighting stance during the test shouldn't be this strong. So, Boss Ling reasoned that the tentacle son must have scored the kill because it relied on an ambush. Either way, they couldn't let someone as strong as the new guy stick around, especially with how close he had been getting to Li Cheng. Boss Ling heard distinct footsteps and hushed everyone. Li Cheng knocked and entered the meeting room with some proposals for the bosses. First, he expressed his condolences for Axing and Li Bin's deaths. At this point, sudden deaths had become a normal part of life. Li Cheng then proposed making Xiaoyang an officer for his remarkable strength. Baldy Pang immediately opposed the idea. They didn't even know the kid's background. Boss Ling stopped the bald fool from speaking more nonsense. She believed that when it came to strength, Xiaoyang really was officer material. But the kid would have to prove his worth to convince the entire steel mill. Li Cheng countered that killing a tentacle son should already serve as sufficient proof. Well, since they were on the topic, they could just give the young man a chance to face the real thing. If Xiaoyang could kill the tentacle monster itself, they would be killing two birds with one stone. Li Cheng passionately argued how unfair that would be. Even the two bosses combined couldn't accomplish something so difficult. Boss Ling reassured Li Cheng that this was not a suicide mission. The entire steel mill would mobilize and take action. It was time for them to remove the problem once and for all. As soon as he returned from hauling supplies and corpses, the bosses briefed Xiaoyang on what was happening. He was quite surprised that these people were willing to craft a plan with him at the center when he had only been here for such a short time. Boss Ling attempted to appeal to the young man's pride, telling him that he might be the strongest fighter in the settlement. Baldy Pang added that if the mission succeeded, they would grant Xiaoyang the third leadership seat. Then he sarcastically asked Li Cheng if it was acceptable for the new guy to outrank him. Li Cheng gritted his teeth and gave his consent, with everything agreed upon. The plan was set to proceed in 2 days. Xiaoyang was quite impressed with their acting skills. He might have fallen for their genuine proposal if he did not possess the ability to see through their deceitful souls with mind's eye. They had spent enough time in the steel mill. Back in the eastern fortress, everyone was panicking. Their boss, who was undercover behind enemy lines, was calling them. Old Li and the rest of the crew picked up the walkie-talkie and listened carefully. This guy's Xiaoyang. positioned himself atop heavy machinery to maximize his aura while relaying the plan to take down the mill. In 2 days, they would gather at the southern suburban park. It was finally time to eradicate the remaining threat in the area once and for all. Old Lee took charge of the detailed planning. Everyone agreed that Uncle Shang should stay out of the dangerous mission due to his age. Furthermore, he was essential for holding the fort. This upcoming mission carried higher stakes than any they had faced before. The premier fighters had to bring their best. Brother Chong, Shan Shan, Jiang Kai. And everyone in that crew would be critical. In the corner of the room, little Shuai insisted that he wanted to come and fight too. His mother immediately shut him down. War was for adults. A child had no business involving himself in such a grim affair. But she had never seen her son in the field during the crew's hunting runs. Little Shuai was no weakling. Even among the core team, the kid was not powerless. Old Lee needed every capable hand he could get. Besides, in this day and age, it was better for little Shuai to gain experience early. 2 days passed quickly and the day of the hunt arrived. Baldy Pang and Boss Ling led everyone to the last known location of the tentacle monster. The disguised Xiaoyang asked what they should do to lure the beast out, and Baldy urged him not to rush, explaining they had a solid plan. Immediately, Xiaoyang scanned the entire perimeter without being detected. He shifted his focus to a nearby building and saw the signal he and the fortress crew had agreed upon. On the rooftop, the crew was heavily armed and keeping a close watch on the situation from above. They couldn't afford to get any closer, as the boss had specifically ordered them not to approach the park too closely before acting. For now, all they could do was set up the ropes. Once the action started, they would strike from the sidelines. Downstairs, Boss Ling called one of the malnourished porters carrying supplies. The kid looked up to the muscle mommy and asked what she wanted. With a cruel smile, she simply ordered the poor child to enter the park. The porters were brought here to carry supplies and loot. Li Qing couldn't just stand by while the boss was clearly plotting something vicious. In Boss Ling's eyes, there was no better bait than a young boy. The creature was always mumbling about a son. They might as well give it one. Then she assured the kid that she would rescue him from danger once the big catch arrived. The malnourished porter was terrified. No one wants to be monster bait. Do you want to be monster bait? Baldy Pang had to intervene. He grabbed the boy by the collar and threatened to commit a bald-on-bald crime if the kid hesitated. With his evolver strength, he hurled the poor child deep into the center of the dark park. The throw was so powerful it must have caused the boy some injury. Up in the building, Old Lee stood alert as things began to move. He finally gave the signal for everyone to climb the building using the ropes. In the middle of the park, the malnourished boy stood up and stumbled while calling for help. His cries fell on deaf ears. Then a roaring voice muttering, "Son," echoed all over the area. Finally, the final boss monster had made its appearance. The tentacle monster resembled the one Xiaoyang had pierced, but this one looked more human-like. Its eyes glowed with defiance and lethal intent. Li Cheng yelled at the bosses to stop wasting time and rescue the boy now that their target had appeared. Seeing no one move, he motioned to run in himself, only to be stopped by a firm grip. Boss Ling refused to let Li Cheng go, insisting that Xiaoyang must make the first move. Any attempt to attack now would be considered stealing credit. Xiaoyang smiled at the absurdity of that notion. The masks of heroes and villains were finally slipping off. Before the tentacles could reach the bald head of the boy, Xiaoyang was already rushing in with superhuman speed. Thankfully, he outran the tentacles, grabbed the boy by his shirt, and threw that bald kid to safety. Li Cheng caught the alley-oop. He must have thought that bald head was a basketball. The beast was furious at Xiaoyang's actions. With his disguised glasses off, Xiaoyang was finally back. The tentacle monster seized his body and pulled him in. Now that he was getting a closer look, Xiaoyang noticed something strange. Once the boy was out of danger, Li Cheng was eager to jump into the fight. But before he could assist the young man, he was restrained by the ruthless bosses. If they didn't act now, Xiaoyang would die. Li Cheng still couldn't grasp that this was exactly the point of the mission. Boss Ling found his ignorance somewhat amusing. She thought the young man would at least prolong the fight with the tentacle monster to a draw. Seeing him trapped and squeezed motionless, his earlier kill might have been a fluke. Li Cheng's fool never saw this plan coming at all. Again, he was a fool. Instead of letting the villains explain, Xiaoyang took the floor himself, without holding back. He exposed the cannibalistic practices of the steel mill bosses. Once again, Li Cheng had no idea what he was talking about. He was a fool. As if on cue, the Eastern Fortress crew went trigger-happy and opened fire on the opposing evolvers. Their automatic rifles and pistols lit up the park as they struck the steel mill people from the flank. They split into two groups. One held back the evolvers while the other supported Xiaoyang against the tentacle monster. Little Shuai led the charge of the latter group, Molotov cocktail in hand. This kid was a menace. He threw it with all his strength, and the monster instinctively swatted it away with his tentacles. The action spilled the oil, drenching the beast in spreading flames. Instead of flinching in pain, the tentacle monster just stood there, staring at the boy who had thrown the burning bottle. It was as if a large part of his humanity had rushed back into his mind at the sight of little Shuai. His attention completely shifted away from the human he held with his tentacles. Meanwhile, the kid cursed the beast for tanking his incendiary bomb. Hearing little Shuai curse enraged the tentacle monster more than anything else. Since he could speak with clarity, the squad was clearly dealing with some kind of advanced mutant. Fortunately, they had a similar asset on their own side too. Chen Chong dashed in without hesitation. His legs moved at lightning pace. They moved so fast the tentacles swiped past him and struck nothing but ground. Meanwhile, the villains from the steel plant were now pushed back, forced to duck behind tree trunks, in disbelief. They stared as a completely different mutant faced off against the one that had them all shaking. The thought of one mutant siding with others was beyond absurd to them. Chen Chong was holding his own and avoiding the strikes, but he couldn't close in enough to land any real blows. At one moment, he got trapped and enclosed by a swirling cage of tentacles, but using sheer muscle he shattered those fake limbs like twigs. Still, all of that pressure was merely a decoy. The actual strike was sneaking up from behind, had it not been for a teammate's alert. That main tentacle would have pierced a hole straight through his cranium. After that fierce back and forth, both mutants took a breather to regain energy. Watching Chen Chong struggle, the restrained Xiaoyang chuckled and mocked his mutant companion. Baldy Pang was baffled. That brat they picked up recently was cracking jokes with a terrifying mutant. Then, to completely crush logic, Xiaoyang went ahead and ripped through the tentacles, restraining him like they were thin thread. The Kang chimed in helpfully by pointing out that one of the ambushers had referred to Zhang Ye as Xiaoyang. Old Axing had once shared that the squad leader of the Eastern Fortress had that same name. Suddenly, it all came together. That boy had been playing them all along. And this so-called ambush was actually a trap laid for them, meaning the Steel Mill squad was now the prey, and their hunters were the main fighters from a formidable base. Boss Ling analyzed the enemy troops, thinking hard about how they could possibly survive this snare. She figured the most powerful member of the fortress team could only match Li Cheng in terms of physical ability. But in terms of weapons and gear, the enemy was far superior. On top of that, the greatest threat was Xiaoyang himself. And the cherry on that messed up cake, that masked mutant, whose raw power mirrored the tentacle monster S. Boss Ling concluded that winning this was almost off the table. Even if they tried to resist, the casualties would be too great, but there was still one gambit left. For now, Baldy Pang had to keep the fortress squad at bay. These two had always had great coordination. Supporting each other was their specialty. Baldy hurled his axe with incredible strength, causing it to ignite like a falling star. When it landed amidst the fortress group, the impact triggered a huge blast that sent dust and broken fragments flying. Blocking their view, Baldy Pang wasn't done yet. He continued to unleash random but massive strikes while the regulars helped with suppressing fire. This type of mayhem worked well against Old Li's side, making them scramble to defend themselves, while all eyes were locked on their own opponents. Boss Ling was watching someone else, the youngest of the fortress bunch, the child standing at the front line. Xiao Kai was the only one who noticed danger approaching and threw his bulky frame in front of the kid. He tried to lift his arms high to shield his head. But Boss Ling's long limbs moved way too quickly. Fat Kai was knocked off balance. He didn't stand a chance against a high-level evolver. At last, Boss Ling's evil scheme was coming together with the key piece just within her grasp. She yanked little Shui up by his tiny collar, instantly drawing everyone's attention. I know she's a monster, but seriously, can I have a turn next? This is the worst possible turn of events. Little Shui didn't want to weigh everyone down as a hostage. He squirmed with all his strength, trying to wriggle free from Boss Ling's clutches. But it was no use. To stop him from thrashing and trying to run, Boss Ling landed a firm blow to his face. The one who reacted the most to this act of brutality was none other than the tentacle monster. With fury bubbling over, he shouted for his son. Chen Chong saw the chance in this moment of anger and moved in swiftly to close the gap, setting himself up for a strike. As he latched onto the tentacle monster's shoulders, he noticed something strange. The creature wasn't even reacting to him. Xiaoyang told Chen Chong to just let the beast go. That command only made the mutant more puzzled. Well, Xiaoyang could clearly see that the monster was fully ready to stake its life on something it deeply valued. Right now, stepping in its way would be unwise. Clutching little Shui's neck with both hands, Boss Ling snarled at the fortress crew, warning them that the boy's head would be forfeit if they didn't lower their weapons. The always righteous Li Hongyi begged to take the child's place instead. Seeing how rattled and frantic the fortress team looked, Boss Ling took satisfaction in her hostage leverage. If anything happened to little Shui, how on earth could they ever explain that to his mother back at base? Boss Ling restated her demands. All she wanted was full disarmament and for the opposing squad to fall back at least 100 meters from her men. Old Li opted for the cautious route, dropping his firearm and telling the others to follow his lead. They were out of options. Boss Ling wasn't finished barking orders yet. She now demanded that the masked mutant eliminate the tentacle monster immediately. She was so drunk on her newfound dominance that she didn't notice the incoming threat. The tentacle monster locked onto her spot like a guided missile, forcing her to release the kid and dive out of harm's way. A few trash henchmen happened to be standing in the path of the tentacles. They were torn apart without mercy. Baldy Pang looked on in terror as yet another of his evolver troops was shredded to pieces. Boss Ling assumed the masked mutant had neutralized the main threat. When she glanced up at Zioying, the young man was grinning at her with delight. Standing beside him was the twisted mutant, and both were barely invested in the clash. Li Hongyi shouted for little Shuai to make a run for it, but the tentacles had already coiled around the boy. Zioying calmly told everyone there was no reason to panic. The child was in good hands. Or more accurately, safe tentacles. Naturally, no one could understand what he meant. All they saw was a kid snatched up by the monstrous creature, but somehow it felt different this time. The way the creature held him was careful and gentle. As it called the boy's son, Zioying chimed in, proudly stating that he kept his promise to protect Jiang Sheng's wife and child. Yeah, we've crossed paths with this hideous beast everyone's been dreading before. Jiang Sheng must have undergone the same mutation as Chen Chong. Realizing the lingering features of his father in the monster's form, little Shuai broke down in tears. Baldy Pang watched the whole scene unfold and muttered at how melodramatic it all was. They needed to get the hell out of there. So he ordered a withdrawal, but sadly, for his bald head and the rest of the steel mill team, they had just made an enemy of something not from this planet. While holding his son with loving care, Jiang Sheng's tentacles shot forward for a gory vendetta. The first to be seized and crushed was Baldy Pang. He screamed for Boss Ling to assist and slice off the tentacles. They had always looked out for each other, but not today. Huang Ling, being the coward she was, bolted straight for the tree line, desperate to survive even if it meant ditching everyone else. She fully understood the overwhelming power gap between them and the creature. Her sole escape route was to sacrifice Baldy Pang and pray he could hold on long enough. Sadly for Boss Ling, even that scheme wouldn't succeed in this circumstance. She was simply too sluggish, and those tentacles excelled at grabbing. Her ankles were unexpectedly seized, causing her to slam her face onto the concrete. Boss Ling's spectacles were shattered along with her nose. At that very moment, she realized that the next few seconds would be terrible. She was pulled back into the park. Those tentacles showed no concern for her comfort at all. Baldy Pang observed the scene with a grin on his face. The witch attempted to betray him, so imagine how vindicated he felt now that they were trapped together. Still, Pang wanted to use every resource and ally left, so he turned to Li Cheng for assistance. Before the foolish watchdog could aid the boss who had already betrayed him, Zioying stepped behind him for a brief exchange. The young man presented a straightforward offer. All Li Cheng had to do was stay still, and he would be guaranteed to walk away from the show alive. At this point, Zioying was merely letting the tentacle monster carry out its work, carnage and chaos. He began with Baldy Pang smashing that shiny dome onto the ground. The first hit left poor Pang dazed. That must have caused at least a concussion. Next, Shangji's tentacles swiftly dealt with the evil bald man. He whipped and slapped with perfect force, tearing the evolver limb from limb until his eyes, intestines, and flesh were thoroughly mixed. With Baldy out of the way, Boss Ling was next on the menu. The firm grip of the tentacles highlighted her muscular build. All those muscles couldn't save her now. Her destiny rested in Shangji's dark, slimy, and filthy limbs. Boss Ling's demise was agonizing and cruel, gradually and painfully. The tentacles' grip tightened until she bled from every opening. The pressure continued to increase until she was crushed into something only describable as meat paste. Shangji punished her with the harshest death for daring to hold his child hostage, with the final boss dead. Nemesis of Evil Volume 3 was complete. With another 80 points secured, Zioying's total stash reached 151. Now he could finally grasp why the mission mentioned the arrival of a potential ally. Who would have guessed he'd recruit yet another mutant to the team? Then he faced Liang. Something intense was unfolding near City S's border. A group of survivors faced an assault. They were pursued by strange creatures beneath a green fog covering the city. They had to make harsh choices. They had to leave behind those beyond rescue. When the thin, plant-like fiends closed in, fleeing was the only choice. And so they fled without looking back. Those left behind suffered a torturous fate. As the thick green mist billowed, the plants advanced further. Once finished with their victims, the poor survivor became unrecognizable. After a short while, a corpse controlled by seemingly sentient plant monsters rose. City S could really use a gardener. The number of survivors dwindled as they escaped the plant mutants, but the remaining woman's lungs had given out. Her partner tried to force her to keep running or face being torn apart. Suddenly, eerie noises echoed nearby. Upon closer listening, they realized it was the sound of wind. That meant they were near the forest edge. Well, the exit was ahead, but the mutants were right behind them. They could not afford to dawdle or waste any more time. The couple at the rear tried to encourage each other. Victory and safety were finally in sight. After a few more minutes of running, the light from the forest's edge appeared. Through no fault of her own, the woman was caught by a loose vine moving as if it had eyes. The vine wrapped around her neck and lifted her into the air, cutting off her air supply. That green limb belonged to a massive Venus flytrap mutant, hungry for larger prey. Everything unfolded too quickly. Her upper and lower halves were torn apart like Aaron Georger's mother. Her lower half fell to the ground. At least she wouldn't need shirts anymore. Her partner lost it completely. Screaming at Zioang about her being his virgin girl and whatnot. The guy is a total weirdo. The group had no time for mourning. The plant mutants were so close their gurgling became audible. The leader had to slap the crazed man back to reality. Zioang is dead. There's nothing to be done about it. Now it's up to him whether he wants to join his girl in the afterlife. Eventually, the group escaped, entering another city. The plant mutants kept chasing, moving as slow as classic horror villains. What they lacked in speed, they made up for with sheer numbers. They resembled the zombies from The Last of Us, Loki. The survivor leader kept running until he recognized a location. He was certain they had just entered M City Wilderness Park. What was strange was the complete absence of any signs of life. It was as if the park had been neatly deserted. Untouched by humans or zombies. Given what happened in their last refuge in S City, it was no surprise the neighbors had evacuated as well. On a random street near a random lamppost, the group spotted someone hiding, and not very well. Since the figure didn't attack, they assumed it was human, so they politely asked for directions to the evacuation point. Well, the guy asking for directions was about as human as it gets. It was Jiang Sheng, the tentacle monster. When he revealed his tinted skin, dark eyes, and writhing tentacles, the survivors realized their mistake. They had thought Shangji was like those mindless plant mutants haunting their dreams. The group ran another round until they were sure the beast was gone. They debated whether the regions outside the forest had fallen too. Then the hunters, tracking their scent, returned once more. The gods surely despised these guys. They were sprinting marathons left and right. This time they were surrounded on all sides. Every path was blocked by a well-coordinated encirclement. Broken and hopeless, the survivors started to crack mentally. If they'd stayed in the forest, they might have survived a few months longer. Maybe Zioang would still be alive. As the plant mutants closed in on their doomed location, the group faced a grim choice. It seemed their leader was ready to take matters into his own hands, rather than being ripped apart by alien creatures. He'd rather end it himself. Thankfully, that wasn't necessary. Shangji's tentacles shot across the streets, swiftly decapitating those fragile plant mutants. This was his turf, and he wouldn't tolerate trespassers in the park. Back at the Eastern Fortress, Zioang stared emptily at his realm beneath the bright moonlight. His utopian mission had advanced nicely. His community score had risen to 62 and store points climbed to 231. At this stage, he could be considered wealthy. With points to spend, checking the daily shop was a pleasure, right now. He could purchase a level 2 armed deterrence box for 20, a level 2 black tech box for 50, or a level 3 superpower awakening supply box for 100. Zioang was seldom surprised, but that last option blew him away. Without hesitation, he spent his points wildly and cleared the shop. The armed deterrence contained an armored jeep. The black tech box provided him with an additional physical enhancement serum. Finally, the superpower awakening box contained a level 1 enslavement mark. This skill grants him the ability to enslave a single life form, however. He doesn't feel the need to use it just yet. Brother Chong, Brother Shenga, and Li Cheng remain stable. After spending so many points, an opportunity to gain more arose the mission. Weed Control Volume 1 had officially begun. He initially assumed the mission was a straightforward gardening task. But things became clearer once Brother Shengjai updated him about the advancing army of plant mutants. Later that evening, the fortress inhabitants gathered outside the walls to cautiously observe the tentacle monster. Shangji escorted the group he had just rescued to the east to meet the big boss, dragging a plant mutant corpse for examination. From the crowd, Shangji's wife and son ran up to him joyfully. While he had no trouble saying the word son, it seemed wife had vanished from his vocabulary. Instead, he uttered "marry me" to this day. Zioang is the only one who can effortlessly interpret his broken speech pattern. The family reunion was strange yet heartfelt, with tears and embraces exchanged. Zioang immediately got to work examining the shriveled mutant corpse. Shangji attempted to explain what had happened but lacked the words to form a clear story. Thus, the leader of the survivor group stepped in to clarify. They had come from City S and were forced to flee because of these mutated plant creatures, while City M was also unsafe. It was in much better condition than City S. On their way to the fortress, the newcomers passed many zombies wandering the area. Zioang sent one of his men to retrieve his new armored jeep, parked 2 blocks away from the base. Tonight, he wanted to explore the border between the two cities. Using the armored jeep and survivor guidance, they arrived without issue. Only a few hours had passed, but the vines had already grown taller, covering more ground. To better assess the situation, Zioang planned to venture deep into the jungle. The survivor, having just escaped that hellish place, understandably opposed returning, yet ignoring the problem was not an option. At this rate, the nearby Westwind steel mill would be swallowed up, causing production and quality of life to suffer. Before delving deeper, perhaps it was wiser to prepare first. Xiaoyang thought it best for his people to gain more strength to handle crises independently. Old Li and his new steel mill crew would join as well. For the next several days, everyone embarked on a hunting spree. It was grind time, speaking of the steel mill. Another troublesome mutant had been lurking nearby, feeding on zombies. Fortunately, they wouldn't have to endure this ugly mutant for long. Xiaoyang moved like an assassin that night. In a single clean slash, he eliminated the troublesome zombie-eating mutant, with the big threat gone. The rest of the crew were free to unleash their firearms. They spared no bullets, raining fire on the aimlessly wandering zombies throughout the city. Under Xiaoyang's leadership, they hunted and collected mutant cores from their kills. They repeated this cycle repeatedly, steadily building up their supplies. Unbeknownst to them, an overfed evolver had been roaming the city searching for fresh human flesh. Normal zombies posed no threat to this individual. He could kill regular walkers without breaking a sweat, due to the continuous decline in human population. This evolver had resorted to roasting zombie meat. All he wanted was a taste of uncontaminated human flesh. Fortunately for him, the aroma of his favorite meal was drifting right to his nostrils. Under Li Hongli's leadership, the steel mill had improved its operations. Yet, the addition of new firearms had made some guards overly confident. Several of them were stretching beyond their perimeter just to hunt zombies for sport. It was the scent of these careless guards that the buff evolver caught on to. He licked his lips in eager anticipation. The best kind of meat comes from those who haven't consumed their own kind before, the so-called pure humans. The buff evolver wasn't foolish. He noticed those people were armed with serious firepower. Going after them solo would be incredibly risky. He knew he had to hold back a few more days for a proper hunt, but the thought of waiting made him drool and whine like a starving dog. Back at the fortress, Xiaoyang was busy tweaking his system shop again. Afterward, he called for a full gathering. They had been coordinating hunts for 3 days now. He assigned all the gathered spoils to Li Hongli and Jiang Kai to divide. Old Li protested, saying they couldn't hog all the resources since everyone had contributed to the hunts. The big boss dismissed their concerns. For the rest, there were plenty of weapons and ammo. What was needed was to push a few top-tier fighters forward. This approach was far better than evenly splitting mutant cores and having everyone only partially evolved. Besides, the group trusted the boss's judgment. Xiaoyang had never made a poor decision. As for Shan Shan, the boss had something special for her. He invited her into a private room, just the two of them inside. With a hint of nervousness, she asked what was going to happen. Outside the secluded room, little Shuai, Wan Wan, Jiang Kai, and Brother Chang eavesdropped. All they could hear was their boss telling the lady to endure the pain. After a few minutes of suspicious sounds, the door swung open, revealing the nosy crew. Jiang Kai awkwardly swallowed and joked about how fast Brother Xiaoyang finished. They thought he was actually clapping Shan Shan's cheeks. Well, it was better that Jiang Kai was there anyway. At that moment, Shan Shan was gently holding her arm while an empty syringe rested on the table. She really had been pierced in some way, after absorbing so many mutant cores. Jiang Kai had become one of the settlement's top fighters. Right now, Xiaoyang wanted to see a sparring match between the humble Jiang Kai and the fiery Shan Shan. Jiang Kai opposed the idea. He refused to hit a girl. Hearing that, Xiaoyang gave Shan Shan permission to slap the boy across the face. There was no need to hold back. She could use full force. When it came to taking hits, Jiang Kai was confident in his durability after being boosted by numerous mutant cores. Before he could finish bragging, Shan Shan delivered a slap that nearly dislocated his jaw and distorted his whole face. Brother Chang and Xiao Kai had to intervene and stop his momentum. Shan Shan was quite surprised by her sudden surge of power. Xiaoyang had kindly injected her with a physical enhancement serum, bringing her just below Brother Chang's level. Jiang Kai had thought he ranked higher in the power hierarchy. Of course, Xiao Kai teased his buddy a little for being so gloomy. With preparations complete, Xiaoyang assigned everyone their roles for the upcoming woodland expedition, alongside his best fighters. He selected the leader of the new group as their guide. Mr. Leader quickly declined the task. He'd already escaped that place once and vowed never to return. Li Cheng mocked the man for chickening out, but Mr. Leader had good reason. He had no comrades or family in the neighboring city. He'd gladly remain in the fortress working as a laborer away from danger. So the guy who had lost his girl stepped up and volunteered to be the guide. In the western suburbs, buff evolvers combed through buildings searching for someone. Day by day, his mind grew slower and slower. If he didn't get fresh human flesh soon, things would only worsen. The pounding in his head was interrupted by distant banging. He ran toward the noise, following the lustful sounds. Opening the metal door of an abandoned building, he found two couples going at it like wild animals in heat. The buff evolver cleared his throat to catch their attention and halt their activities. The foursome immediately recognized him but were not happy to see him again. Buff Evolver assured them he hadn't come to steal anything this time. In fact, he'd come to share information. The women did not trust him in the slightest. Everyone here had accepted being half monsters. Lying was pointless. Buff Evolver swore he was telling the truth. He defound a community of pure humans, saw they were heavily armed, and was now asking for help hunting. The half-monsters crowded him with their equally muscular bodies, scrutinizing every word and move. In the end, they agreed to trust the thief's words just this once. If he lied, they could just eat him instead. Just like that, he was accepted into the group, with her kitty hanging out. The redhead half-monster welcomed the newcomer with something tight and warm. Buff half-monster wasn't one to refuse such a generous offer. While something strange was unfolding inside the city, Xiaoyang's group officially crossed the border. Their guide for this expedition was the broken-hearted Zhu Xingkai. Xiaoyang praised his courage, and Xingkai declared his desire for revenge on the plant mutants that had killed his girl. Furthermore, his parents remained trapped in the jungle. The boss would take point. Li Cheng would cover the rear. Brother Chang and Shangji would take left and right flanks, while Xingkai stayed safely in the middle. Xiaoyang only dared take this dangerous mission to stop the jungle spread into his territory. The rescues were secondary. Suddenly, a wet vine dropped some sticky substance on his face. Immediately, Xingkai went on high alert. He had seen that sticky stuff before. He yelled at the boss to move, but it was too late. The slimy vine wrapped around Xiaoyang's neck like a hungry python. The giant Venus flytrap revealed itself. The very creature that had snapped Xiao Tong in half. No one had ever escaped that voracious mouth alive before, but that record wouldn't hold for long. Xiaoyang fearlessly grabbed the vine and pulled. He yanked so hard that the creature's disgusting innards spilled out. Xingkai was aghast. He could barely find words in shock. The innards thudded on the ground in front of the big boss, wriggling like a revolting bag of slimy grapes. The Venus flytrap must have realized what was happening and tried to flee immediately. Xiaoyang didn't bother chasing it. Delegating the task to Shangji and his tentacles, that mutated bastard didn't disappoint. His tentacles extended and seized the hungry plant. After securing a firm hold, he retracted his tentacles and dropped the pest on the ground, much to everyone's surprise. The flytrap activated its defense mechanism, releasing a cloud of green, noxious fumes into the air. For some reason, the fumes didn't spark any fear. In fact, they smelled pleasant. Xiaoyang was alerted. Inhaling smoke with a strangely enticing scent couldn't be good. As he moved to warn everyone to cover their noses, all light sources around him suddenly vanished. Everyone else was going through similarly strange experiences. Xingkai felt a bizarre pounding in his head. Glancing around, he saw the group frozen in place, motionless like statues. Then, his focus was caught by a rustle in a nearby bush. A feminine figure appeared from the tall grass, calling out to him. Upon closer inspection, it was his girl, Xiao Tong. The memory of her death was still vivid in his mind. Seeing her alive again overwhelmed his senses. He stepped forward. Emotions of relief and disbelief swirling in his thoughts. Xiao Tong urged him to come closer, whispering that the other survivors were nearby. Completely entranced by the sight of his girl, Xingkai followed her voice willingly. Meanwhile, the raid on the steel mill was in full swing. The half-monsters had reached their destination, a factory stocked full of pure human flesh. One of the boys salivated upon catching the scent of their prey. There was nothing like clean, pure human meat to whet the appetite. The others tried to calm him. But his vision had already turned blood red from ravenous hunger. Before they could restrain him, he lunged forward. Unable to hold back, the dumbass charged in, ready to devour with no plan at all. The guards immediately noticed him approaching, but they were too slow to respond. Before they could raise their rifles, one of their own was swallowed whole. Gunfire erupted, alerting Li Hongli. The guards had never faced a half-monster before. They could handle mindless zombies, but this was beyond their capabilities. Their AK-47 rounds were useless. Every hit was instantly healed. Ignoring the barrage of bullets, the hunter did what he did best. He might have wiped out the outer guards if old Li hadn't arrived just in time to deliver a brutal kick to his stomach. The strike sent the hunter spinning like a ballerina. Mid-spin, he regained control and landed cleanly. From this distance, old Li could pick him off with high-caliber bullets. The dumbass had no choice but to retreat. Up close, he would get beaten. From afar, he'd get shot. Old Li shouted for his men to carry the injured back to the infirmary and stop the bleeding. The dumbass half-monster limped back to the group's hideout, humiliated and wounded. He barely made it before collapsing. Instead of concern, his group greeted him with contempt. They had warned him to be patient, but he was too foolish to control his urges. The dumbass snapped at them to stop messing around and give him meat for healing. But this wasn't how their group operated. The weak and reckless were abandoned, still conceded to the end. He whined until one of the girls stomped on the back of his neck, silencing him forever. Fewer mouths to feed meant more meat for the others. With one down, the remaining 4 half-monsters devised a plan to retrieve the meat stockpiled inside the factory. While the boys struggled to come up with ideas, the girls had already figured it out. Though they were monsters craving flesh, they looked completely human. All they had to do was walk through the front door. Back in the woods, Xingkai hesitated, feeling an unnatural pull toward the vision of Xiao Tong. The creature impersonating her was growing impatient, its disguise slipping. Before it could harm Xingkai, a flying knife severed its head. For the second time in a few days, the poor guy witnessed his girl's brutal death. The blade thrower was Xiao Yang himself. Even he had been briefly mesmerized by the illusion. Still shaken, Xin Kai turned his rage toward the big boss. Xiao Yang then forced him to look toward the bushes once again. Gradually, the gruesome illusion faded away, unveiling the reality beneath. The girl from his dreams was nothing more than a tangled mass of intertwining vines. That plant was seriously messed up though. Honestly, he wouldn't mind getting hypnotized by it again. After that, Xiao Yang went around shaking everyone awake from their mental traps. Li Chong felt as if years had slipped by and even the two mutants were caught in the mirage's grip. Xiao Yang guessed the flower must have emitted some sort of hallucinogenic gas. To find out more, he began probing the internal structure of the vine bundle. Maybe it was a mutant core, sadly. What he destroyed was only a puppet, not the actual body. The vines clearly stretched deep underground and the main organism was likely far away. Just for kicks, he traced the roots and unearthed something odd. It looked like a potato tuber. Possibly a nutrient storage organ for some bizarre creature. Just in case, he stashed it in his dimensional space. Maybe it was edible, who knows? Turning to Xin Kai for more insight on these strange plants, all he knew was how dangerous they were. However, Old He might have more knowledge. Old He was an expert at the Agricultural and Forest Research Institute. Before Xin Kai and his group fled, that old man had been stationed at a high-rise settlement. Curious, Xiao Yang changed plans to seek out this old fellow, back at the steel mill. The half-monster finally set their straightforward scheme in motion. Red came hobbling in, acting exhausted and scared, but making sure the goods were clearly visible. To sell the act even better, she stumbled and fell near the front gate. One of the guards patrolling the wall spotted her. The men quickly gathered, thinking a survivor was approaching the settlement. As guards, they knew the protocol for strangers, but any man would forget those rules at the sight of Red. One guard wanted to report to higher-ups first, but another simply wanted to bring her safely inside the walls. Red cried out for help and Simgard believed every word. From a distance, the other half-monsters watched with amusement. Even they admired Red's stellar performance. Naturally, the other girl wouldn't be outdone. She claimed she was even better. Red had basically secured safe passage into the fresh meat den. Meanwhile, the crew in the woods struggled to find their way through the dim jungle. Luckily, they reached the next city without further issues. Near the old base camp, someone called Xin Kai's name. Peering from behind a wall was his Aunt Yang. Normally, he would have rushed into her arms, but after nearly dying earlier, he wiped his eyes instead. Xiao Yang chuckled and assured him the hallucinogenic gas was no longer affecting them. On the other side, Aunt Yang's camp was panicking. Fearing anyone emerging from the woods was an enemy, some wanted to capture Xin Kai and get him to safety, while others doubted it was even him anymore. Aunt Yang seemed ready to fight first and ask questions later. She led a small group armed with various weapons, hoping to ambush the intruders. Shanji could have wiped them all out in one move, but Xiao Yang urged everyone to stay calm. A couple of arrows flew toward them, but the big boss easily swatted them away barehanded. Using a commanding tone, he shouted for the hostile strangers to stand down, and it seemed to work. Xin Kai stepped forward to convince his aunt that these people with him were not enemies. Aunt Yang appeared convinced enough and commanded her men to cease firing their ineffective shots. Xin Kai clarified that Xiao Yang and his group came from beyond the jungle. When questioned about the remainder of the party, Xin Kai had to reveal that half of his comrades were either killed or wounded, including Xiao Tong. When asked to be escorted inside, the people of City S were naturally hesitant. The primary concern, of course, was Chen Chong and Jiang Sheng. The big boss stepped in to offer some reassurances. He even requested the mutants to say a few words to reduce the tension. Chen Chong removed his mask and claimed that despite his ugly appearance, he was actually quite gentle. Jiang Sheng, meanwhile, flexed his muscles so everyone could admire him. Xiao Yang felt embarrassed. He had expected the two to behave more normally. After much debate, Aunt Yang finally granted them entry. Back at the steel mill, Shan Shan moved towards the front gate to check on their people out west. She radioed Old Li to open the gates before entering. Her keen senses detected something hostile nearby. It was faint and disappeared as quickly as it appeared. The half-monsters quickly suppressed their bloodlust and remained hidden. Old Li personally opened the gate for Shan Shan. Once inside, the half-monsters could finally relax. They had nearly been discovered. All three sensed that the girl was an evolver, a pure evolver at that. They never imagined such a thing possible. Regardless, their minds raced with thoughts of how delicious she would be. Moreover, devouring an evolver would undoubtedly grant a massive power surge. Shan Shan headed straight to the infirmary to check on those wounded by the madman earlier. Xiao Yang had assigned her to carry infection inhibitors in case a similar incident occurred. Old Li hesitated. His men had been bitten for hours but showed no symptom. Xiao Yang leapt out of the window instantly. His mutant brothers quickly followed after him. Three crazy maniacs jumped off the 16th floor as if they didn't care about their lives. At least their landings looked stylish. Each one struck a pose to maximize effect as they confronted the disgusting plant mutants. Once they reached close combat range, the eager creatures charged in. They were met by Big Boss's grip digging into their thin skulls. With a single powerful tug, Big Boss decapitated the first foe who crossed his path. Chen Chong was no less skilled. He was swift and strong, and his fighting technique rivaled the boss's. As for Jiang Sheng, this guy was pure presence and hype. His tentacles handled most of the action, and it was bloody and spectacular. The professor finally realized how foolish he sounded earlier when he told Xiaoying to hide. Thankfully, Li Cheng was also there up top, preparing everyone for the stragglers. He took charge and invited anyone confident in their skills to grab Molotov cocktails and guard the stairwell. Seeing hope for the first time in months, the morale of the high-rise residents soared. Downstairs, Xiaoying cleaned up the remaining plant mutants set for disposal. Like clockwork, he assigned his mutant brothers to search the bodies for cores. As for himself, he was eager to personally check out that flower cart thing everyone kept talking about. The few stragglers who slipped past the killing machines were easily dealt with using fire, thanks to Xiaoying and his team. There were no casualties this time around. While everyone was busy ensuring the high-rise was secure, Xiaoying followed his instincts deep into the woods. He moved through the land like a shinobi and finally located the twisted thing, the subject of everyone's nightmare, the flower cart. In the middle of the forest, the main body and the beast causing all the problems in City S emitted a green fog. Suddenly, every nerve in his body screamed for him to jump out of danger. Xiaoying trusted his instinct and dodged a one-hit kill. Such a mighty force might be comparable to Jiang Sheng's tentacles. Still, Big Boss here has become quite skilled fighting tentacle types over the past few weeks. All he really has to do is outmatch the creature in a test of brute strength. Feeling threatened, the flower cart released a dense cloud of spores. Unfortunately for the poor beast, Xiaoying never falls for the same trick twice. Before the spores reached him, he took a deep breath and held it in his lungs, while the field filled with those nasty green clouds. The flower cart writhed like an insect. It dropped its balls and feet emerged from beneath them. The flower cart was trying to escape with its disgusting limbs. That pitiful attempt at fleeing won't work against Xiaoying. He moved his fingers to draw a sigil and summoned the slave mark. His new power swirled around the mutated beast. A few minutes later, the people in the survivor building were alerted by the arrival of Flower Cart's true body. The professor was beside himself. He will never forget how brutal that beast was with its twisted form. After parking his new slave in the driveway, Xiaoying pulled up as if it were business as usual. He just asked Jiang Sheng and Chen Chong if they had harvested every mutant core downstairs in his broken language. Jiang Sheng reported collecting quite a few cores. Chen Chong translated reliably. One of his mutant buddies speaks like he's chewing gravel and the other spits nonsense. Listening to them drained his energy. Then Professor Hai addressed the obvious question: what was the deal with the flower cart parked in the building's driveway? Xiaoying casually replied that the mutant had become one of their own now. To reassure the survivors, he led them out to the parkway to demonstrate there was nothing left to fear. The elderly professor reluctantly approached the veiny anomaly. He hesitantly touched the flower cart and asked how on earth the young man managed to tame such a creature. Ignoring the inquiry, Xiaoying inquired about the professor's thoughts on the plant from the perspective of an experienced botanist. The old man guessed that, despite its extreme mutation, it should still hold on to its botanical instincts and characteristics. Just like in the animal kingdom, competition among plants could be equally fierce. Instead of hunting prey, the battle for sunlight was a constant struggle in their world. For instance, trees were forced to grow taller to capture more sunlight, while the plants growing lower adapted in other ways. That's why in dense forests, the thicker the canopy, the sparser the grass below. His professional theory was that the flower cart evolved its hostility because it lost its initial advantage during mutation. With sunlight no longer an option, it had to adjust and rely on other living creatures as nourishment. Suddenly, the flower cart extended one of its vines towards Xiaoying. Li Cheng reacted swiftly, pulling out a small baby knife to protect his boss. Completely unfazed, the young man told his subordinate to stand down and allow the vine to continue. With the slave mark in effect, it was utterly impossible for the creature to resist. It turned out the vine was reaching for his spine. Upon contact with his skin, the vine transmitted something directly into his neural pathways. Flower Cart communicated that the professor's analysis was accurate. The whole of City S had turned into a battlefield for mutant plants. They now depended on consuming animals and humans for nutrients. Since the massive tumor plant had now become his servant, Flower Cart's survival was Xiaoying's responsibility. To show its gratitude, Flower Cart opened up, revealing its radioactive-looking core. As a symbol of mutual trust, it willingly offered the spongy core to its new master. Upon touching Xiaoying's palm, the core integrated seamlessly into his body. As usual, Li Cheng was concerned, but this was simply a ritual to establish the master-servant bond.